Bueno, vamos a hablar del mejor ship de Disney por 2 o 3 horas, no sé, probablemente más. Hello everyone, my name is Caitlin and welcome back to my channel. So it's finally happening, we are finally covering one of my absolute favorite ships of all time. And this is going to be a long one, and so let's get the disclaimers out of the way very quickly. First off, we are going to be using the subtitles from Disney+, so if you have any problems with the translations, you're gonna have to take it up with them. And then also their names, so Ámbar and Simón are a bit harder to get out when I am speaking English. Don't worry, I will be calling Simón Simón because calling him Simon just doesn't feel right. But I am going to be referring to ámbar as Amber just because it's more natural for me while I'm speaking English. Probably because it is more similar in comparison to Simón and Simon, and also because when I first started watching the show I didn't speak any Spanish whatsoever, and so I just referred to her as Amber, and it kind of stuck for me. But if you have a problem with that, you can let me know in the comments down below. Now, before we jump right into chapter 1, I feel like I do kind of have to give a little bit of a background on the show, for those of you that maybe have never seen it before or never got around to finishing it, because it is quite a long one as there are over 200 episodes. So I definitely don't blame anybody for not finishing it or even starting it to begin with. But we have our main character, Luna. She is the adopted daughter of Mónica and Miguel, who are employees at the Benson mansion. Sharon Benson lives there with her adopted daughter, Amber, who refers to her as her godmother. Luna and Amber are around the same age and attended the same school, as well as the same roller rink called the Jam and Roller. They both participate in skating competitions there, as well as the rink's open mic nights. We also have Simón, who is Luna's best friend and also works at the Jam and Roller, and he has just moved here from Mexico to be with Luna. And that actually brings us to Ámbar and Simón's very first meeting, and so let's jump right into chapter 1. So as I previously mentioned, Simón has just moved here from Mexico. And lucky for him, he has arrived on Jam and Roller's very first open mic night of the season, an event that they call Open Music. Simón ends up filling in last minute for Luna's friends and also Jam and Roller employees Nico and Pedro's band, as they were in need of a guitarist. So he performs the song that he wrote for Luna, and Amber watches him perform. Her friend Delphi asks who he is, and Amber assumes that he's Luna's boyfriend. Her other friend Jasmine then calls him cute, and Amber scoffs at this, saying that she can't say that because he is associated with Luna. I should mention that Amber has basically been Luna's rival up until now, as she's been intimidated by her skating ability and by the fact that her boyfriend Mateo is a bit more interested in her than he probably should be, given the fact that he is dating Amber. Moving on, Amber and Mateo go on to perform, and Simón loves it. He tells Luna that she sings really well and asks if she knows her. Luna then explains that her godmother is the one that hired her parents, and Simón is shocked to find out that this is the same girl who pushed Luna into the pool in the first episode, which is like a whole other thing. Luna then complains about having to go to the same school as her, but Simón just says again that she's a great singer and continues jamming out to her song. And then we finally reach their first meeting. So Amber comes up, interrupting Luna and Simón's conversation. Luna compliments their performance, and Amber says that theirs was nice as well. She then tells her that Simón wrote the song motioning to him, and Amber comments on not seeing him around there before. He explains that it's his first time there, and so then Amber fakely says that the friends of her friends are her friends as well. She then looks Simón up and down before leaving.
No te había visto antes en el roller.
No, es que es la primera vez que vengo. Mucho gusto.
Sí, acaba de llegar de México. Los amigos de mis amigas son mis amigos. Pero bueno, ya me voy para casa. ¿Venís conmigo?
No, yo me quedo un rato más.
Bueno, como quieras. Chao, amiga. Chao.
Bye.
So Simón is then left a little bit confused after this interaction, as everything that he's heard about Amber through Luna would suggest that they're not friends. And so he asks her about this, and she confirms that they're not. So I love every single bit about this first interaction. I love that it's subtle, as I don't think every single meet cute needs to be super obvious. And I love how even though they weren't intended to be a thing in this first season, as far as I'm aware, there is still that like natural chemistry that I feel like these two characters have. With Simón being very interested in her performance and her being like overly anti him, almost like she's trying to compensate for something, like maybe she does think that he's cute, but at the end of the day he is still associated with Luna, and so she could never admit to that. And although we don't exactly get much of them in this first season, it's subtle moments like this one that I just love and can't wait to talk more about. On to the following day at school, where Amber gets upset with her friends for uploading Luna and Simón's performance to their YouTube channel Fab and Chic. She goes on to make fun of it, and then Jasmine asks if Simón is Luna's boyfriend. Amber says that she doesn't know or or care, and then Jasmine asks her to find out for her. Meanwhile, Simón is getting into a little bit of trouble on his own, as he came to Buenos Aires on a whim and doesn't actually have a place to stay. This brings Luna to decide to hide him in the Benson's shed. So later that day, we see them talking in the kitchen when Amber calls for Luna. Luna quickly gets Simón to hide behind the counter as Amber enters. She asks Luna who she was talking to, and she's quick to say nobody. And then I guess this is when Amber decides to get the tea, so to speak, on her and Simón's relationship. And I think she just wants this information for herself and her own curiosity, as we never actually see her relaying this all back to Jasmine. But she brings up the open, saying that Simón must love her a lot to write a song for her, and Luna says that he does, as he's her best friend. Amber then pushes further, asking if they're just friends. Luna insists that they are, but then Amber questions as to what's made her all nervous then, obviously unaware by the fact that Simón is currently hiding behind the counter. But Luna insists once again that they're just friends, and Amber says for now before they get interrupted. And while I will admit that this is a bit more of a Lumon moment than a Simbar one, I still feel like this fits in as part of the crumbs that we get between the couple in the first season, and so I felt like I had to include it. So then we reach our first skating competition of the series, which is a couples competition. Amber and Mateo sign up, as well as Luna and Simón, and of course Amber is unhappy about this. We then see this conflict kind of come to a head in episode 9 when the four of them get into a fight over needing the rig to rehearse. But then Amber ends up winning this fight when she calls out Luna for rehearsing during work hours, as back in the first season she was working at the Jam and Roller as well as a rink assistant. They later abandoned this, but in this first season that's what was going on. Then we move on to episode 23 where Amber catches Luna hiding Simón in the storage room. And then she of course decides to blackmail her. So she promises to keep their secret in exchange for Luna dropping out of the competition. Luna agrees to do this but doesn't tell Simón about it, and then the two of them continue practicing in secret. In the following episode, Simón finds out about this, and then in the episode after that, they decide to tell her parents. They are then able to get him out in time before he is discovered. This conflict then of course continues when we see the four of them rehearsing on the rink. Basically, Luna and Simón watch Amber and Mateo do some basic moves and try to copy one. They are then able to do one and are excited by it until Amber skates over and basically tells them that they shouldn't be celebrating, as what they did was quite basic. She then continues bullying Luna until Simón steps in, telling her to stop. She then turns on him, saying that if he would have stayed a second longer in the storage room, then he wouldn't be here giving his opinions that nobody asked for, but instead he would be on a direct flight back to Mexico. But Simón retorts that he is here, and so he's asking her to stop bothering Luna, and says that he won't allow her to keep trying to kick them out of the competition. But of course, Amber claims that that's not what she's trying to do, and that she's actually doing all of this for Luna's benefit. She then continues on until they are interrupted by Mateo.
Un segundo más adentro del depósito y te aseguro que ahora no estarías dando opiniones que a nadie le interesan, sino volando directo a México.
Bueno, pero estoy aquí y te pido por favor que dejes de molestar a Luna. Mira, Ámbar, no voy a permitir que nos saques de la competencia. Te lo digo en buena onda.
¿Yo?
Sí, tú.
Jamás haría una cosa así, Simón. Solamente estoy intentando aclarar las cosas con mi amiga Lunita.
So there are a couple things that I like about this moment. I like that Simón doesn't back down to Amber, and that he's also not turning a blind eye to all that she's doing to Luna. And then I also like that while Amber is trying to do her classic nice manipulation tactic, Simón is able to see right through it. And then this may sound weird, but it's also fun to see them have an argument like this while also knowing that they do end up together. I feel like it gives a sort of enemies to lovers vibe and adds to the unexpected charm of the ship. Moving on, Luna and Simón end up winning the rinks competition and move on to the next round. Amber and Mateo come in second, which results in them going as well, but as their understudies. Which of course Amber is not happy about either, and so she immediately starts plotting ways to ensure that she'll be the one competing instead of Luna. But before we get to that, we do get to see Amber and Simón skate together for the first time. So in episode 38, their coach Tamara asks what's going on between Luna and Simón as they're skating all out of sync. And this is due to the fact that Simón previously just confessed his feelings to Luna, and she basically told him that she would get back to him. And so then Amber steps in and the two of them do the moves together instead. And then afterwards, Tamara notes that they did much better.
Tamara, yo le ayudo a Simón. Vení, seguime. Vas a ver que te va a salir perfecto.
A ver, Luna, probemos.
¿Permiso?
Sí.
5, 6, 7, va. 1, 2, 3.
Frena ahora.
Bien, mucho mejor. Gracias, Ámbar. Gracias.
So Ámbar and Simón having a strong connection while skating is a big piece of their story that we will see more of moving forward. And of course I had to highlight the very first time in which we see them paired up together. And while Ámbar is very intent on teaching the moves in this moment, I like how on the other hand, Simón is kind of caught off guard. And I feel like this is shown during their final step when his look kind of lingers on her a little bit. But as I mentioned earlier, Ámbar has been plotting to get Luna out of that lead spot. And so the plan that she comes up with is by getting some other employees of the mansion to kidnap her. But then in the following episode, due to these employees' incompetence, they accidentally end up kidnapping Simón instead of Luna. Obviously he ends up okay and they were never actually going to harm him, but I just personally love the fact that, like, technically speaking, Ámbar kidnapped Simón. Or maybe not kidnapped him, but at least arranged to have him kidnapped. Like, that is a canonical part of their story and I just find that to be hilarious. But then we have our first real Simbar drought, as we don't have another interaction between the two of them until episode 62. First of all, Ámbar finds out that Luna and Simón are dating, and then she quickly realizes that she can use this to her advantage. So a couple episodes later, she sees Mateo and Luna skating together and she goes and tells Simón. She asks him to talk and he acts playfully shocked that the most popular girl in the roller wants to speak with him. She then goes on to fake struggle with not knowing how to put it before deciding on telling him that Luna is in love with Mateo, and that she's only using him to make Mateo jealous. Simón laughs at this as he knows that Luna could never do that, but she retorts that a woman in love will do whatever it takes. This causes Simón to argue that she might be capable of that, but Luna isn't, and that he trusts her completely. So she says that if he trusts her that much, then he should go to the rink with her so that he can see it for himself. Simón says no to this at first because he doesn't want to be a part of her weird games, and again because he trusts Luna completely, but she insists, asking if that's the only reason or if it's because he doesn't want to accept reality. And so he basically says that he'll go with her just to get her to stop talking.
Si tanto confías en ella, vení, acompáñame. Vamos juntos a la pista. Lo vas a ver con tus propios ojos lo bien que la pasan juntos.
No, porque mira, primero no quiero caer en tus juegos raros. Y aparte yo confío en Luna ciegamente, ya te lo dije.
¿Es eso? ¿O no tenés ganas de ver la realidad?
Bueno, te voy a acompañar solamente, Ámbar, para que dejes de hacer estos comentarios y estas bromas que a mí no me gustan.
So this is something that I really like about first season Simón that I feel like we kind of lose in the later seasons. Probably because he gets to know her and sees the goodness in her, but that hasn't exactly happened yet. And so I just love how in this season he's always able to see right through her. But back to what we're supposed to be talking about. So unfortunately for Ámbar, she yapped for way too long, and by the time they get to the rink, Luna and Mateo are no longer skating together. She tells him that it's a shame that he didn't get to see them because she just wanted to open his eyes, and he retorts that clearly he arrived too late for the show. Now, although Ámbar isn't exactly doing any of this with good intentions, I feel like it should still be noted that she is technically right. Luna does have feelings for Mateo, and she is just stringing Simón along, although she's not exactly doing it intentionally like Ámbar suggests that she is. And so while her end goal might be to hurt Luna, at the same time, if she did succeed in this scheme, she would also kind of be helping Simón in the long run. And I think that that's kind of an interesting thing that season 1 Simbar gives us, is like Ámbar helping him out in this backwards way. But on to episode 66, where we have a little bit of a development that doesn't pay off for quite some time. In this episode, we see Simón overhear Ámbar change her order a million times. Like I said, this doesn't pay off until much later, but I do think that it's cute that we're seeing it happen already, as I feel like it's kind of laying the groundwork for what's to come in the second season. Later on, Ámbar tries once again to open Simón's eyes to what's going on between Luna and Mateo, but this time she is just slightly more successful. So she ends up going to the lockers to cry, and Simón sees her. He asks if she's okay and why she's crying, but she argues that he's not the right person to talk to about this. Simón suggests that he can help, but she says that nobody can, and that there's no solution to what's going on between her and Mateo. She's decided that she's breaking up with him, that it's obvious that he's in love with somebody else, and it's pretty clear that that person loves him too. She then tells him to open his eyes, asking if he hasn't noticed the way that Luna and Mateo look at each other. She continues talking about how Mateo defended Luna yesterday, and how that's been happening more and more lately, saying that every day they're getting closer and closer to one another. She then concludes that she has no doubt in her mind that Luna is in love with Mateo. Simón argues that that's impossible, and so she asks him again if he doesn't believe her, or if he just doesn't want to accept reality.
¿Te acordás que el otro día te conté que los encontré patinando juntos? Últimamente me pasa eso. Cada vez que los veo están más cerca. Y yo no tengo dudas de lo que te estoy diciendo. Luna está enamorada de Mateo.
Imposible.
¿No me crees? ¿O no quieres ver la realidad?
So I feel like there is just so much to talk about in regards to this scene. First of all, I feel like it's very out of character for season 1 Amber, as I genuinely believe that she's not acting here. I think that Simón caught her at a moment of weakness and that she is genuinely upset about what's going on. I do think that her confiding in him does serve her greater goal of ruining Luna's life, but I also find it interesting just how comfortable she is in being vulnerable around him, when really they don't actually know each other that well at this point. And as we've seen so far in this series, Amber isn't exactly good at being vulnerable with anybody. She always has her guard up, she always has a game that she's playing, which is what I feel like makes this moment that much more unique and compelling. And then I also love the camaraderie of it all. They're both victims in this situation, and I feel like seeing them come together and realize that makes for a really interesting dynamic. And then there's also the fact that I feel like this moment is very reminiscent to some scenes that we get later on in the series. But moving on, Simón does end up going out to the rink after this conversation, and this time he does end up finding Luna and Mateo in a little bit more of a compromising position. But then the two of them talk and he concludes that he trusts her. So they're not exactly over yet. And I just have to point out that I feel like it's really interesting for me to tell this story from this perspective, because I do feel like by telling it this way, Luna is coming across as the villain, which I just personally find to be quite funny because that's obviously not what the show intended. But I guess that just goes to show what happens when you cover things from another perspective and you don't cover the entire picture. But then I also feel like by covering the whole picture, Luna also wouldn't look too good either, so it is what it is. A few episodes later, we finally get to see the couple skate together once again. This happens after they get paired up in rehearsals alongside Luna and Mateo. Luteo does the routine first, and then Amber shows them how it's done afterwards with Simón. And once again, we get a nice little moment at the end of the routine where the two of them share a look. The following day, we have another rehearsal where the coach tells them to pair up. Mateo goes to Amber to be his partner, but she tells him that she'd rather skate with Simón. She then goes and interrupts Luna and her friend, interlocking their hands and taking him away with her. And then this is another moment that I feel like is very reminiscent to one that we get in the second season, and honestly makes me question if maybe they were planned to begin with. Or maybe not planned, but they were like at least flirting with the idea of them. I know that a lot of people say that they only became a thing because of the fans' demand for them, and I can't really speak to that as I wasn't exactly around during that time, but I feel like it's little moments like this one that have me questioning if maybe there was more to it. And then just 3 episodes later, we have the most iconic Simbar moment from this first season. So it's Amber's birthday, and of course she's throwing a huge party. Simón arrives at this party and gives her a bouquet of flowers. She thanks him for them and calls them pretty before making a face to Delphi, insinuating that she actually feels otherwise. The guys then inform her that they're not going to be able to perform as the roller band as Pedro couldn't make it. Later we see Amber and her friends perform, and Simón enjoys watching her once again, and then afterwards she calls him out in front of everybody, saying that they had an exclusive roller band performance lined up, but they unfortunately couldn't make it, but they do still have their star guitarist Simón here, and so she asks if he can come up on stage and perform a song for her. He is caught off guard at first, and then she begs him, saying that it would be the best birthday gift in the world. And so then he ultimately gets up on stage and performs a beautiful stripped down version of Luna's song of Música en Ti.
Lamentablemente ellos no pudieron venir, pero tenemos entre nosotros a nada más y nada menos que su guitarrista estrella, Simón. ¿Por qué no subís y cantas una canción? Por favor, Simón, sería el mejor regalo de cumpleaños para mí.
And so this is another moment that has me questioning if maybe they were planned at least a little bit. I just feel like it is so out of character for Amber to ask Simón to perform for her, and I really can't figure out what game she would be playing at here. Like, it doesn't seem like she's asking him to do this as a manipulation tactic or to serve a greater end goal. I just feel like she genuinely wanted to hear him perform, and that could be because she likes him a little bit. And I think that this could be confirmed during his performance based off of the way that they look at one another. There's this one moment where it almost feels as though Amber looks at him and actually sees him for the very first time. But that being said, that is basically it for our first season. And I do think that it is quite funny that our most compelling moment from this season is some staring, but I also think that the subtleness of season 1 Simbar is part of their charm. But before we move on to season 2, we do have a couple skating moments left. So in episode 78, Luna and Mateo share a bit of an iconic moment during a rehearsal, as they do a romantic part of the routine. But I feel like it's not as often talked about that Amber and Simón do the same move as them. They're just situated behind them, and so we don't exactly see it happen as well. And then they also share some steps together during the final competition, but yeah, that's basically it. Overall, I do really enjoy them in the first season. They're basically just babies who don't really know each other that well yet, and it is really fun to rewatch this season with the knowledge that they do end up together, although their moments are fairly few and far between. But now that we've gone over all of the first season's moments, let's move on to chapter 2. So season 2 comes with a lot of changes. First of all, Simon's band has grown a lot since we last saw them, and they are now in collaboration with the company Vidya, who has set up cameras in the roller as well as in their apartment to stream their lives to their fans 24/7, which is a bit of an insane concept, but it is what is done. And so in episode 2, Amber realizes that she needs to take advantage of the roller band's newfound success if she wants to remain on top, and also if she wants to ruin Luna's life once and for all. And so she decides to call Simón and get some information about Luna. She says that she's noticed that she's been off lately and asks if he knows anything. And I should also add that this is kind of when Amber's mental health starts to go downhill, as this is when we see her begin the routine of talking to herself in the mirror. In episode 4, Amber continues trying to get information from Simón, so he finds her in the dressing room and she says that she's worried about Matteo, saying that ever since he's gotten back from Italy, he's been super weird and distant towards Luna. But Simón argues that that's something she should talk to Matteo about and not him or Luna. Amber agrees with this, but then goes on to say that she's worried that he's going to hurt her. And she admits that they've had their differences, but will never forget what she did for her in the finale. And so Simón chuckles softly in response to this and says that Luna is a great person. And Amber continues her facade, agreeing with him and saying that that's why she wants everyone to be on the same page this year. He notes that she's changed a lot, which get used to that phrase because you're going to be hearing a lot of it throughout the rest of the show, and it's kind of wild to me that he already feels this way and we're only at episode 4. But Amber says that everybody can change, and then Simón leaves and she smiles maliciously to herself. A few episodes later, we have our first real open of the season. Amber performs Como Me Ves, which is a song about her relationship with her mirror, and we of course get some shots of Simón enjoying her performance as per usual. Up next, we have some events that don't really pay off until like the very end of the season, so try your very best to remember these for when that time comes. So first of all, we have a new event that the roller is hosting called the Roller Jam. It's basically like a gala but on skates, and so they host it in the rink and everyone dresses up and there are performances happening there as well. So during the first Roller Jam, Amber gets fed up with these cameras and how much they're impacting her popularity, and she goes into the lockers and pours her drink all over the camera hub. This causes the power to immediately go out, and then later on it creates a spark that ends up burning down the whole rink. And I should add that before this, she used skates that looked like Luna's to destroy the camera in that room, so she knew that she wasn't being filmed while she was doing this. And then she also planned to destroy that camera in the first place to get Luna blamed for it. Okay, so that's one thing, and now on to the Sol Benson situation. So if you'll recall, Amber is the adopted daughter of Sharon Benson. Sharon is sister to Lily, who married a guy named Bernie. The two of them also had a little girl named Sol, but unfortunately the family then tragically died in a house fire in the mansion, and then their whole fortune was left to Sharon Benson. But then we later come to find out that Sol actually lived. She was rescued and taken to an orphanage where she was adopted by, that's right, our very own Monica and Miguel, as in Luna's parents. So throughout the show, Luna is trying to discover what really happened in her past, and Sharon also comes to discover that her niece actually lived, and she begins to panic, as Sol Benson was actually the true heir to the Benson fortune and not Sharon. She then comes to find out that Luna is actually Sol, and so then she decides to conduct this plan to pass off Amber as Sol Benson instead. So in episode 13, Amber is told by her godmother that she is Sol Benson, and she believes this. And like I said, try your very best to remember all of this, as it's not going to pay off for quite some time. But enough rink burnings and family drama. This video is a ship summary video, and so let's get back to that ship. Now, unfortunately, this is when we have our second real drought, as we don't get more Simbar content until like episode 40 of this season. And just to give you some perspective, we were previously at episode 13, and so we're taking quite the jump here. And you might be wondering, where is all this skating in this skating-related show? Well, here it is. So we have a new coach, and she tells Ámbar and Simón that they work well together and they have great rhythm. She then teams them up, as well as Luna and Matteo, to compete for a main duo spot. And she then decides to run some rehearsals to see how well the couples connect. She gets them to hold hands and then separate, and then while separated, they're supposed to show how much they miss the other person. And she also emphasizes that she wants them to show their connection with their eyes and the way that they look at one another. So Amber and Simón run the routine with those things in mind. And then they of course go on to share a wonderful face-to-face longing look moment at the end of the routine. Afterwards, we see Simón at Luna's, and she asks him about Amber, as she notes that he has a smile on his face that she just can't ignore. She then starts jumping up and down excitedly about this. But Simón says that it's not like that and that they just connected before quickly changing subjects.
Hablemos de ti.
¿Yo qué?
¿Cómo que yo que hizo sonrisa? Ya sabes de lo que voy a hablar, ¿eh?
No.
¿Qué onda con Ámbar? Te vi.
No, Luna, no, nada que ver. O sea, nos conectamos y ya.
So I just love this moment, and it's one that I wish we could have gotten to see more of. Luna teasing Simón about basically having a thing with Amber and him pretty much admitting to it is just perfection to me. On to the following day where we see Simón and Amber do the routine for Juliana once again, and this time for her to make her decision. This time I feel as though they share an even longer look at the end of the routine, and Simón is the last one to pull away. But then we come to see in the next episode that their connection just isn't strong enough yet for Juliana, as she ends up picking Simón and Mateo as her protagonist couple instead. She honestly said gay rights, and I really respect her for this decision because it's probably the same one that I would have made as well. But then it's in episode 43 where Amber's scheming truly begins. So if you'll recall, Amber's friend Jasmine has always had a little bit of a thing for Simón. So she tells Amber that she's going to ask him for help in preparing for the upcoming open music. This way she can get closer to him, and maybe the video viewers will end up shipping them as well. And so Amber hears all of this and thinks to herself, hey, that's not a bad idea. She also wants to be in better favor with the video viewers, and of course this would also serve her goal of ruining Luna's life. And so she ends up calling up Simón and asks him to meet with her the following day. So then we see him accompanying her while she sings Catch Me If You Can. Afterwards, Simón says that she was great, and Jasmine interrupts. She asks what she's doing, and Amber explains that he's helping her get ready for the open. And so of course we later see her get upset with Amber for stealing her idea. Amber then sarcastically says that she didn't know she had exclusive rights to Simón and says that she's exaggerating. And then Delphi chimes in saying that it's not right for the two of them to fight over a boy, especially not when that boy is one of Luna's friends. Amber then tells them not to get it twisted and that she does not have any feelings for Simón, and emphasizes that a girl like her would never like a guy like him, which is just so ironic knowing what's to come. She then stresses that Simón is all a part of the plan and having him on her side is going to be useful to her, and then she spins things to make it sound like she's doing all of this for Jasmine, and Jasmine tells her to not forget that he's hers. Amber just laughs at this in response and repeats once again that she doesn't have any feelings for him.
No vale la pena que se peleen por un chico y menos por el amigo de Luna.
No. No te confundas, Delphi, por favor. A mí Simón no me gusta.
Ah, ¿no?
Jasmine, ¿vos estás loca? ¿Vos realmente te pensás que una chica como yo se puede fijar en un chico como él?
¿Y entonces por qué le pediste que te ayude con el open?
Es todo parte de mi estrategia.
Now, I find this scene to be so interesting when you compare it to the scene that we saw earlier between Simón and Luna. Because on one side, you have this really healthy friendship between Luna and Simón, and on the other side, you have Amber just basically point out blank manipulating her friends. Which I obviously wish wasn't the case. I wish Jasmine didn't have feelings for him because it just breaks my heart knowing that she gets caught in the crossfire. But moving right along, Simón later finds Amber in the lockers. He asks her what she's doing, and she lies about looking for a lost earring. He offers to help, and then she thanks him, calling him a good friend who's always willing to help others. She then assumes that he doesn't feel the same way about her, saying that she's made a lot of mistakes that she regrets. But he says that it's nice that she's able to own up to them and take responsibility for them. And at this point, I do feel a little bit bad for Simón because it's basically like he's falling right into her trap. Which, like I said, does feel a little bit out of character for Simón, especially in comparison to where he was in the previous season. But at the same time, I also do see him as the type of guy who just wants to see the best in everybody. Maybe it's a similar situation to his relationship with Luna, where he just sees what he wants to see. Anyways, she then changes the conversation to the Rota Fest, which is the competition that they're currently competing in. They have gotten to the next round, but Amber has since quit the team as she was upset for not being chosen as the protagonist. So she says that she's happy for them, but wishes that she didn't leave. So Simón argues that she can still join them once again and that they'll be even better with her on their team. But she's unsure that they would want her back after she abandoned them last minute. To which Simón, of course, responds that everybody deserves a second chance and gets her to promise to at least think about it. And so she agrees on the condition that he promises to keep helping her with the open. And so Simón smiles at this before agreeing.
Bueno, todos tenemos una segunda oportunidad, ¿ok? Prométeme que lo vas a pensar.
Ok, te lo prometo. Pero, ¿vos me prometés que me vas a seguir ayudando con el open?
Mira, Ámbar, la verdad es que... Está bien.
So I kind of feel like we've maybe reached a turning point for Simón here, as he's definitely started to catch feelings for her now. I mean, you can just look at the way that he smiled at her and rubbed the back of his neck in response, and I feel like that would also explain as to why he's acting so different towards her in comparison to the way that he treated her in the previous season. Or maybe her just saying a couple lines about change and wanting to be a better person just really is all you need to get Simón on your side. But something else that's relevant in regards to this scene is the location, so keep that in mind as it will come up again later on in the series. advice. On to the following day where we see them rehearse Catch Me If You Can once again, but this time we actually get to see Simón give her some constructive criticism. So he says that she's doing great and has a really nice technique, but he also tells her that when it comes to music, it's important to feel as well. He then encourages her to feel a bit more and convey what she's feeling as they run the song again. But she then goes on to stop him quickly, saying that she can't do it, that she can't just feel something out of nowhere. And I feel like this is such a cool way for them to show exactly what Amber's doing. Not just when it comes to singing, but in her real life as well. I feel like it shows that she has these walls up when it comes to feeling and letting her feelings show, and I love that Simón was able to catch on to that right off the bat. So he advises her to stop thinking and start feeling, and she promises that she will before she quickly changes the subject to him. So she asks that he perform the song he's going to sing in the open for her, but he argues that he's not in the mood as it's been hard for him since his band recently broke up. He then confides in her on not really missing the band as much as he misses his friends. She agrees with this and says that it's never easy to be away from the people that you love the most, but also says that you can't neglect your future and that sometimes you have to be a little bit selfish. She then assures him that Nico and Pedro want what's best for him even if they don't show it. He agrees and says that he wants the same for them, but that music without friends just isn't the same. And so she encourages him not to think of it as an ending, but the beginning of something new, a new stage, a new Simón. And he chuckles at this, saying that she might be right. And then she retorts that she's always right, which I like because that's something that I also say quite often. And now this may seem like a throwaway scene, but I personally feel like it's a very important one because this right here is foundation building. Seeing him open up to her about what's going on in his world and what he's been struggling with lately, and then seeing her actually give him some solid advice. Like, I just love that they're actually giving them some solid development and not just making them happen out of nowhere, which I feel like is part of the beauty of the novella format and the fact that we actually have time to flesh out these relationships. Now on to their third rehearsal where Simón gives her the same criticism. She argues that she conveyed more feeling that time, but he says that she can do even more. He then draws her attention to the lyrics and what they're saying, emphasizing that she's telling someone that she trusts them. He says that they're beautiful lyrics, but she really has to feel it. He then encourages her to sing it like that and feel what's on the page, and Amber seems a bit overwhelmed by this, but still thanks him nonetheless.
Ámbar, está muy bonita la letra. Tienes que aprovecharla y tienes que disfrutarla bonita, ¿ok? Y yo te invito a que tú la cantes desde eso, ¿entiendes? Sintiendo lo que está aquí, que está muy bonito.
Ok, gracias por tu consejo.
De nada.
Now this may seem a little bit random, but the first thing that I want to talk about in regards to this scene is the chairs that they're sitting on. Because while it may look a little bit awkward to see Amber on such a taller chair than him, I personally feel like this was done deliberately to show that she's the one who holds the power in this situation. Like, there are a lot of chairs in the Jam and Roller and they could have easily chosen one that was the same height as his, which we've seen them do previously, but they didn't, and I think that that was a conscious decision. Which I just personally see as so interesting because I feel like they're not really showcasing that here in this moment. Amber almost seems caught off guard by him analyzing the lyrics and talking about the meaning behind them, and it makes me wonder if she thought him coaching her was going to be an easy thing that she could coast right through. But now that he's actually giving her some solid advice and trying to push her to her fullest potential, it's almost like she doesn't know how to react to that, especially when that advice is trying to get her to open herself up more when she's actively trying to do the opposite of that. But moving on, he then tells her not to take this the wrong way, but he now has to rehearse on his own song. She then jokes with him for kicking her out and says that she wants to listen to his song, but he's still worried that he doesn't have it quite right yet as he's still trying to figure things out on his own, stressing that he doesn't have the guys to tell him what he's doing wrong anymore and that he's alone now. But she says that he's not alone and that he has her, which basically turns into a Simbar catchphrase later on, just reversed, and so it's really cool to see the origins of it here being the other way around. She then begs him to show her his song and then he ends up complying. But then things take a turn as Amber does turn on her manipulation tactics. First, she gets them to take a picture together so that she can post it online. Then after he plays the song, she tells him that he could do better and suggests that he ask Luna for advice. And she does this because it puts Luna in a hard spot. So basically the Open has since changed into like a soloist competition, and the winner of the Open will get their own record deal. And so Simón, as well as Luna's boyfriend Mateo, is competing in this competition, and so now Luna has to decide between who she's rooting for. And Amber has nothing to lose, and so she's just basically trying to add fuel to that fire. But back to the scene, so she then suggests that they go outside a bit to get some air, and he agrees. And I'm just personally so annoyed by the fact that we never actually get to see this happen and they just completely skip over it. I mean, I'm sure nothing eventful happened outside and they were just getting some air or whatever, but I still just feel like it would have been nice to know what they talked about there. But unfortunately, their little bonding music sessions have come to an end as it is now time for the Open. And then this is when Amber decides decides that she needs to step up her game a little bit. So she ends up taking Simon's capo that he needs to perform, which causes Luna and him to go frantically searching for it, and she ends up missing the beginning of Matteo's performance. We then see Simón tell her to go as she should be out there supporting him, and then we cut to her going out there to watch him. And then this is where Ámbar swoops in. She plays dumb, asking what's going on, and then tells him not to worry as she's going to help him look for it. He then tells her that Luna went to look out in the roller, and she asks him if that's what she told him, because what she saw was her happily dancing with Matteo. She then tells him that he has to understand the position that she's in as her boyfriend is out there performing and she has to be there supporting him. And then this kind of seems to hit Simón in a weird way as he freezes in response to this. I think maybe because we're still kind of supposed to believe that he does have some lingering feelings left over for Luna, but I just find it interesting because she's basically just saying everything that he was saying to Luna 5 seconds ago. And I guess there also is that added aspect of her saying that she's going to do that and then not doing that, but I can't really speak on that because we didn't actually get to see that part. Anyways, Simón says that he understands that Luna needs to be with her boyfriend and that it's okay. And Ámbar says that that's very understanding of him before they both go back to looking. Later on, Simón gets announced and he ends up freaking out about not being able to play. And then Ámbar turns into a little bit of a motivational speaker as she goes on and on about telling him not to give up and that they're both there and that they're going to figure this out. And at this point, I'm just like, Ámbar, can you please shut up and go quote unquote find the capo? Like, we don't have time for this. I hate when they do that in shows and movies. But then that is exactly what she does as they go back to searching and she finds the capo. Simón thanks her profusely for this and she tells him that that's what friends are for. He then kisses her hand and she wishes him good luck before he heads out on stage.
¡Lo encontré! ¡Acá está! ¡Lo encontré! ¡Lo encontré!
Bien. Gracias, por favor, gracias.
No me digas gracias, para eso tengo buenas amigas. Y ahora anda a cantar y sé muy feliz. Rápido.
Gracias, de verdad.
Simón, mucha suerte.
Gracias.
So besides the fact that this was all orchestrated by Ámbar herself, I do enjoy the situation that it puts them in. I like seeing them work together and Ámbar trying to calm him down, and her coming to his rescue is sweet despite the fact that, like I said, she's the reason why he even needs rescuing to begin with. And of course I had to shout out this being the very first time we see Simón kiss her on the hand. This also turns into a little bit of a Simbar thing, and I just like how it shows how much of a gentleman Simón is. But now it's time for him to help Ámbar with a little bit of a situation of her own. So Jasmine tries to sabotage Ámbar by giving her really dark and over-the-top makeup for her performance. And so she's freaking out about this when Simón comes into her dressing room. She tells him that she's still getting ready and asks that he leave her alone, but she doesn't turn around. This causes him to ask her if she's alright and what's going on, and then she finally turns, showing him what Jasmine did. She then points at her face and tells him to look what she did to her, and then this is when Simón has like the best reaction ever, if you can even call it that, because he basically doesn't react at all. Instead, he just calls it an interesting makeup. But she retorts that it looks awful and can't believe that one of her best friends would do this to her. He counters that it doesn't look awful and that Jasmine wouldn't do something like that with bad intentions. Ámbar argues that she would love to feel that way, but that Jasmine has always had a jealousy problem with her. But this time she's gone too far, as now she can't go on stage. She then rants some more about Jasmine, and I must say I really like how candid she's being with him here. She finally has her guard down and is actually expressing to him what she's feeling. I mean, what she's feeling is anger and upset, but still, it's something. And now it's Simon's turn to become a little bit of a motivational speaker himself. So he tells her that what matters is her going out there and singing with her heart. And then he says that that makeup doesn't look bad on her anyway. She then takes this the wrong way, asking if he's saying that she looks horrible with makeup on, and he laughs at this as that's obviously not what he meant. He then says that she's a super confident person with a super strong personality, and then he puts it into a list saying that number 1, that makeup looks great on her, and number 2, it's really hard for her not to look pretty. And now just excuse me while I scream internally. He then continues saying that makeup, hair, and clothes don't matter, and what's important is that you have faith in yourself, as that's what gets you on top. And then this is when I think Ámbar is able to snap herself out of it and put her walls back up, as she goes on to thank him and says that she hadn't thought about it that way. She then says that the worst part is being upset with your friends and them not being there for you when you need them the most, which I don't think is actually how she feels, and now she's just saying whatever she thinks he wants to hear. She then goes on to say that she's made a lot of mistakes, but she's really changed now, but they can't see that. But Simón reassures her that he can see that before grabbing her hands and thanking her for helping him find his capo. He says that she's a good friend and that he wants to be a good friend too, and that he's not gonna let her not go out there and give it her all. And then that's when she pulls him in for a hug.
Ámbar, muchas gracias por ayudarme a encontrar el capotraste. Fue súper buena onda. Eres una buena amiga, ¿ok? Y yo también quiero ser buen amigo. Y no voy a permitir que tú no subas a ese escenario y cantes con todo. ¿Entendiste?
Then as if on cue, Jasmine enters while they're hugging. Then as a sort of payback, Amber looks right at her as she hugs Simón tighter. So the scene isn't over yet, but I do still have a couple things to add to what I just summarized. So first of all, the way that they started the scene with Amber having her back turned, I know that that was done to hide her makeup, but I also think that that was intentional foreshadowing to a scene that we get later on in the season. And I think that that's significant because both of these scenes that I'm talking about are instances in which Amber let her guard down around him and showed him how she was actually feeling. But back to it, so they break apart and Amber pretends to notice Jasmine, who has just returned from her performance. Simón congratulates her on it, and then they both go on to like creepily applaud her. He is then concerned as Jasmine is notably upset, but Amber says that she's just surprised that she did so well. She then tells him not to worry about it before asking him to leave so that she can finish getting ready. So now that Simón is gone, Amber has some explaining to do. Jasmine asks her what she's doing, saying that she saw them hugging, and she doesn't understand, asking her further if she likes him. Amber then rhetorically asks how many times she has to tell her that she doesn't, but Jasmine argues that she was with him all day. Nonetheless, Amber still goes on to insist that Simón is just a fundamental part of her plan to destroy Luna, and that is all. She then asks Jasmine that she get herself out of the middle of it, and she does not respond. Then we move on to Amber's performance of Catch Me If You Can, to which I would say that she definitely took Simón's advice in singing it with more feeling. Could it be because she's actually starting to feel that way? Because she's wanting Simón, for example, to catch her if you can? Maybe. But speaking of, we also see him proudly jamming throughout the song, and she makes a few motions to him throughout it as well, even winking at him at one point. On to episode 47, where the next day we see Simón come to take Amber's order. She asks for an orange juice, then changes it to a green tea, and then to a banana smoothie. He laughs at this, saying that he thought that she was more of a sure person than that, and she argues that that's because he still doesn't know her well enough yet, and that who she really is would surprise him. And then he agrees that underneath it all, there's a girl that not many people know. And she says that not many people can know that person, but he retorts that he can. And I'm just like, these two are just blatantly flirting with one another here, and I just love how second nature it is to them. Anyways, she then congratulates him on the open, saying that he has a lot of views and likes, and he says the same to her, but she laughs it off, saying that she has a lot of views, but not that many likes. But then says that the most important part was that she was able to do it despite what was going on, adding that she wouldn't have been able to do that without his help. He's happy to hear that, and then goes on to joke with her about what drink he's going to bring her.
No me importa. Lo más importante es que me animé y pude salir a cantar pese a todo. Y eso no lo hubiera podido lograr sin tu ayuda.
Me alegra mucho, de verdad. Bueno, entonces te traigo un jugo de naranja. ¿Licuado de manzana? No, vas a cambiar aún así. Dime la última versión.
Sí, agua sin gas, ¿puede ser?
Pero, ¿segura que eso?
100%.
Bueno, te lo traigo. No cambio ya, ¿eh?
So I kind of mentioned this during season 1, but once again, this is a common quirk of Amber never knowing what to decide when she's ordering. And so to see Simón witness that in the first season and then to tease her about it now is just the most adorable thing. And then I also love the little smirk that she gives at the end when she looks at her phone. It almost brings me right back to that moment in episode 4 when Simón left and she smiled maliciously to herself, whereas now instead, she's smirking to herself, showing that her feelings for him are changing. It also kind of reminds me of that plot hole from Frozen where Hans smiles to himself after Anna leaves, except for this time, it's not a plot hole because I do think that Amber is developing feelings for him. I also think that this is proven later on in the episode when we see her talking to herself in the mirror once again. She talks about her plan almost like she's trying to remind herself as to what her intentions are with him. And also to begin the new phase of her plan, which we come to see the following day. So Amber finds Simón rehearsing and asks why he isn't out there campaigning for views and likes. He explains that he doesn't care much about that and goes on about how important the music is to him. And this reaction from Amber here when he's explaining how much music means to him, I feel like is really telling. With her facial expressions and how she goes quiet, like it looks like she's really affected by all that he's saying. And I also think that she might be a little bit perplexed by him doing something just for the love of it and not having a plan behind it. Because she then replies saying that what he's doing is a good strategy and he has to explain to her that it's not a strategy. That he's just making music and if the people like it, then they can choose to follow him. And although this might sound crazy, this is probably a bit of a new concept to Amber. I mean, just look at her life and how she was raised. Everything with Sharon has always been, what can we gain from this situation? How can we use people to our advantage? And so while we can criticize Amber's motives, like at the same time, it's really all she knows. But speaking of her bad intentions, she then goes right back into manipulation mode. So now she has a new plan to create tension between Luna, Mateo, and Simón. Basically, she's been talking to Mateo under the guise of being a fan of his. And this fan has connections to this popular music magazine and has offered him an interview. So she brings this up to Simón and says that she assumed that they reached out to him for an interview as well. He says no, and so she encourages him to ask Mateo about it, saying that it's important for him to get an interview as well because then he has a greater chance of making it to the final. They then talk about her chances as well, which she basically describes as being non-existent, and then we end the conversation as far as we see with him calling her a good friend. And then on the other side of the roller, Jasmine enters. She sees the two of them talking and is upset by this, and so once Amber comes over to her, she threatens her, saying that if she doesn't forget about Simón and remove him from her life, then she's going to go to him and tell him everything. And so Amber turns on her facade once again and insists that nothing is going on between the two of them, that she's instead doing all of this to help her, and unfortunately Jasmine believes this lie once again. She then goes on to further make the mistake of telling Amber her plan to interview Simón for her channel Fab and Chic. And to nobody's surprise, Amber does steal this idea as well. Moving on, we see Amber and Simón meet at the rink and she asks if he's talked to Mateo about the interview yet. And although this is the next episode, this is still the same day as they're all wearing the same clothes. And so she basically went and talked to Simón about the interview, then went and talked to Jasmine and Delphi for a little bit, and then went right back to Simón and asked him if he talked to Mateo yet, which I just personally find funny, but to be fair, he did. He went and talked to Mateo and asked him for the contact info, but he wouldn't give it to him. Amber then goes on to rant about Mateo being the worst before asking if Luna did anything. He says that she tried to defend him, but really it doesn't matter. Amber argues that it does, but understands that he doesn't want to put Luna in a tough spot, and Simón concludes that the interview was proposed to Mateo and not him. Amber loves that he sees things that way, or at least claims to, and then says that he doesn't need an interview to win anyway. That when he sings, he does it with his heart. He really feels the music, and she's never seen anyone else sing like that before. And I can't exactly tell if she's being real or fake here, but for the sake of the ship, I'm gonna say real, because I did find that to be quite the heartfelt compliment, and I don't think she could have just pulled that out of thin air. But then this is when phase 2 of her plan begins. So he thanks her, but then says that it's gonna be really hard for him to win as he's only in 3rd place. But she's not so sure about that, as she's decided to put all of her energy into helping him win. He laughs at this and tells her that she should be focusing on winning herself instead, but she says that she's so behind that she doesn't even have a chance. Whereas he does, and so she would love to help him fulfill his dreams. They then stop skating and he confesses to her that he doesn't know what to say. And so she tells him that he doesn't have to say anything, that she's doing this because she's his friend and has faith in his talent. She then compliments him again before sharing her strategy to help him win, which as we know is actually Jasmine's strategy. He says that that would be amazing of her, but that he wants to congratulate her first, as he sees that she's changed and says that that's really beautiful. She thanks him for this, and then they share a little bit of a look.
Pero primero yo quería felicitarte, de verdad, porque veo que has cambiado y eso es súper bonito en una persona. Te felicito.
Gracias.
Okay, so first off, I know that we've been talking about these two for like over an hour probably, but I still feel like it's kind of crazy as to how quickly he's fallen for her trap. But I guess at the same time, it's not really that crazy, as he has kind of had eyes on her for a while. And again, it could just be a case of him seeing what he wants to, but still, I feel like it like works so perfectly for Amber, probably because, like I said, he's in love with her already. And I also find it interesting how she laughs and breaks eye contact with him here. And I almost wonder if she does that because she doesn't want to actually give in to her feelings for him and look at him in this moment. But as we saw, Jasmine overhears all of this and she is furious at Amber for stealing her idea once again. Delphi warns her to be careful as Amber is a dangerous person to go up against, but she says that she's not scared and that she warned her, and so she better watch out. So Jasmine finds Amber and Simón in the roller and interrupts them. She then calls on everyone to pay attention and announces that Amber has been buying likes to win the competition. She even plays a voice note of Luna saying that she overheard her doing this. Which she did. This is all true facts, but of course Amber denies this and says that Luna heard wrong, and that she was approached to buy likes, but she obviously turned them down. She then cleverly uses the rankings to her advantage, asking them why she would be at the bottom if what she was saying was true, and says that next time she look for some evidence before accusing her of something she didn't do. But all of this does not hinder Amber. If anything, I feel like it just motivates her to keep doing what she's doing. So that night, we see her interrupt Luna and him in the kitchen. He asks if she's okay, referring to what happened with Jasmine, and she says that she is and that she doesn't hold it against her or Luna. Luna apologizes anyway and says that it was all a misunderstanding when, like I said, it wasn't. She was on the phone with the intention of buying likes, she just didn't end up going through with it. Amber then brings her attention to Simón and her meddling continues. She says that they have a lot of stuff to talk about and it looks like they're going to get him the prize together. She then emphasizes that they have to be careful of Mateo as he's going to do whatever it takes to beat him. And then she apologizes to Luna for the tough position that she's in. They then talk a bit about Mateo before Amber tries to steal Simón away to talk strategy. But of course, he invites Luna to come with them. We then get this like weird scene with the three of them in the living room, and Amber brings up the Fab and Chic interview. Luna thinks that it's a good idea, but also suggests them just posting a video of him singing. Simón likes the sound of that, but Amber says that they'll take it into consideration, because apparently she's in charge of this whole campaign now. Amber then decides to stir the pot some more, saying that she's happy to have Luna on their side, as she honestly didn't think that she would join them. This being due to the fact that she thought that she wanted Mateo to win. She then asks if that's true or if she actually wants Simón to win. But then she's saved from answering this question as the group gets interrupted. And I do find it kind of funny that Simón is like so sold on Amber having changed at this point when like she's still pulling stuff like this. Like I feel like this boy is just so blind and naive, it's actually quite comical. The next day we get another confrontation between Jasmine and Amber, but this time Jasmine says that after she tried to take Simón away from her, she wants nothing to do with her. Amber then argues again that she doesn't have any feelings for Simón, but this time she says that even if she did, Jasmine doesn't own him. And so her friend concludes that she's going to do the interview with Simón as it's her channel and not Amber's, and that's exactly what she goes on to do. Later that day, we see that Jasmine has been getting a ton of dislikes, and so she confronts Amber, obviously assuming that she bought them for her. Or, I should say, against her. Which is exactly what she did, yeah. But Amber argues that she's delusional for thinking that, and she's delusional for thinking that she has a chance with Simón. She then continues with her same argument as usual, but this time Jasmine doesn't believe any of her lies. And she concludes that at least they know the type of person that she is now. Delphi agrees with her, calling Amber a terrible friend, and she continues on before the group is interrupted by Simón. He asks why they're saying all of this to her, but Amber tells him that it's not worth it. She then continues playing the victim, saying that she's used to her friends blaming her for everything. And then she storms off and Simón follows her. Now, this may not seem like a very relevant part to the Simbar storyline, but this basically marks the end of Amber's friendship with Delphi and Jasmine. And up until this point, they were her only friends, and so her losing her only allies is going to leave Amber to feel very isolated. Which, of course, is right where Simón comes in. We then have some more Amber and Jasmine tension the following day, when everyone is waiting for the finalists to be announced, and Simón asks Amber if she's nervous. She says that she's not, as she has no chance of winning, which she's said numerous times at this point, and he rubs her hand in consolation. And then she looks over to Jasmine as like an in-your-face sort of moment. Simón is then announced as a finalist along with Mateo, and Amber congratulates him. Amber then continues to be petty as we get to our next roller jam. When she arrives, she takes Simón away from his friends and they do a little routine together. She then looks over to Delphi and Jasmine after this once again. But this roller jam is quite the important one, as it's to determine the winners of the video competition. So we then have Simón and Mateo sing like a battle duet of sorts, and they then task them with singing a duet with another person. And of course, they both choose Luna as their partner, and so now she has to decide between the two of them. Meanwhile, back in the roller, Amber's birth mother, who has been searching for her since the previous season, has finally found her alone. And she's the one that ends up breaking the news to her that she's actually not Sol Benson, and that her godmother has been lying and manipulating her this whole time. And now this is basically where everything changes for Simón and Ámbar, and so let's move on to our next chapter. Back at the rink, Mateo says that he would like to sing with his girlfriend, and Simón says that he is right, giving Luna his blessing to sing with him and saying that he'll find someone else. So he heads back into the roller and finds Amber crying with her back turned to him in the dressing room. He asks her to sing with him and she's silent in reply. He then sits down and asks if she's okay, to which she doesn't respond once again. And it's not until he asks her what happened and calls her bonita that she says that she doesn't know. He then tells her that he can stay there with her if she wants, which I just love. Like, this boy is supposed to be frantically searching for somebody to sing with him, but the minute that he sees that Amber needs help, he doesn't hesitate in being there for her. He tells her that he doesn't have much time, but that he can stay there and keep her company while he can. And then this is when Amber finally turns around and tells him not to worry about her and that she'll be okay. She then tells him to go and apologizes for not being able to help him. But he tells her that he wants her to be okay and doesn't like how she's keeping things bottled up. That there's ways for her to deal with things like singing, dancing, or talking to a friend like him. She then turns away from him again, and he reaches for her by putting his hand on her shoulder. She then shakes it off quickly, but I still like this moment. So he tells her that he's going to go, but that he'll be there for her for whatever she needs. But then as he's leaving, she calls his name and asks him to wait.
Voy a salirme, ¿ok? Quédate tranquila, Ámbar. Y lo que necesites, estoy aquí. Con permiso.
Simón, espera.
So there's a couple things that I want to talk about in regards to this legendary moment. The first being both of the times in which he's able to get Amber to turn around. First, it's when he sits down and endearingly calls her beautiful, which just kills me every single time. And the second is when she turns away from him, which is after he refers to himself as her friend. I find it really interesting that that seems to trigger her even more, and so she has to turn around to hide her tears from him, which honestly just breaks my heart. And then I also want to talk about him getting her to sing with him while she's in this state. Because I've always felt like, although I know that Simón isn't doing this with bad intentions, there's still always been that like little thought in the back of my mind that feels as though it's kind of icky of him to even ask her to do something like this for him when she's clearly very upset about something. But I feel like I can't ignore that fact just because it makes for such a great full circle moment. Ever since Simón first began giving her singing lessons, his main critique for her was that she needed to feel more. And I mean, just talk about a great opportunity for her to do that. So the two of them head back out to the rink and Simón announces Amber as his partner. She gets on stage with him and they hold hands. Simón then asks her if she's ready to sing with her heart and let out all that she's feeling inside, and she nods in response. He then whispers a thank you to her, which just makes me melt. They then go on to sing a breathtaking acoustic version of Como Me Ves. Throughout their performance, they share numerous looks. He kisses her hand at one point and she cries. He also whispers in her ear that that was amazing afterwards, and they hug. And then it is later announced that this competition has ended in a tie as both Simón and Mateo are crowned as the winners. And it's like, although I love Simbar's performance and everything it means for them as a couple, I think it was beautiful and everything, there is still part of me that feels like Mateo should have won. I mean, him and Luna came out and performed a whole routine on skates for his performance. And I just feel like, figuratively speaking, if you don't know like the backstory behind Simbar's performance, like, the Luteo one was better. I'm sorry, it's just how I feel. I also think Mateo wanted and deserved a solo career more than Simón, but that's just my 2 cents. Moving on to the next day, where Simón finds Amber crying on a bench in the locker room. And this basically turns into their bench after this scene. So he tells her that he's been looking for her, and she explains that it was a very intense day for her yesterday, and so she went home to rest. He then thanks her and says that he's not sure that he would have won without her. She tells him not to say that and that he won because of his own talent and the people that support him, and he agrees with this but says that their duet was incredible, that she sang beautifully, that it moved him, and that she really connected with the song. And once again, I just love this perfect full circle moment. I feel like it really just ties their whole arc together in this season just so incredibly well. So she tells him that she's glad that he's recording an album and that he deserves it, and then he calls her a good friend, to which she kind of like fake smiles at this in response. And I'm not sure if she acts this way because she feels guilty at him calling her a good friend when she like knows that she's not, or if it's disappointing for her to hear him only refer to her as a friend and not something more. I personally think it could be a bit of both. So he notices her reaction to this and sits down beside her asking what's wrong. He tells her that she can trust him, and so she confesses that she's going through a hard time right now. She tells him that she's confused, that she thought she had everything figured out about what's happened in her life, but now she's realized that everything she's ever known was a lie. That she knows nothing about who she is and she doesn't know who to trust because she's alone, and it's awful. Simón then grabs her hand before pulling her into a hug. Once they pull back, he asks her to look him in the eyes. He tells her that she's not alone, that he doesn't know what's happened, but that he'll help her through this. They then lean in for a kiss before Jasmine interrupts.
Mírame los ojos. No estás sola. ¿Ok? Yo no sé qué te pasa, pero sí sé que voy a ayudarte.
Now, once again, this is a fairly iconic scene. This was actually the first Simbar scene that I ever watched. I remember somebody sent it to me years ago saying that I should have included them in some random almost kiss video that I did, and I'm pretty sure it did spoil the couple for me, but I would have figured out eventually, so I'm not mad about it. But back to this scene though, obviously I love it. I mean, I pretty much love every moment where Amber has her guard down around Simón and is actually telling him how she feels, because I feel like it does demonstrate just how vulnerable and hurt she is on the inside, while also showing how much of a support Simón can be for her and just how much he cares about her. It also must be very confusing for him to have no idea what she's talking about, but at the same time, I do kind of feel like it's wild as to how much she is telling him without actually telling him in specifics. Like, I feel like season 1 Amber, or even early this season Amber, would not be happy with her behavior here. So Jasmine asks what they're doing, and Simón says that they were just talking. She retorts that they were 2 millimeters apart from one another, and then this is where Simón does something that I just do not understand. He says that it's not what it looks like and suggests that it was was all a figment of her imagination. To which, of course, Amber backs him up on this. And I'm just like, Simón, let's maybe not gaslight Jasmine, okay? Just a thought. I mean, maybe he just didn't want to accept this himself, but still. I don't like this behavior at all, and it just seems so out of character for him. And I don't know, I feel like maybe Amber is rubbing off on him a little bit more than we'd like to think. Luckily though, Jasmine still stands her ground. She says that she saw it with her own eyes and tells Amber that she can't believe that she thought that they were friends. She then runs off and Simón calls after her, but Amber tells him to let her go. He insists that they have to explain things to her, but she retorts that there's nothing to explain, that they told her what happened, and if she doesn't want to believe it, then there's nothing that they can do. Simón argues that he knows Jasmine and suggests that maybe she's just confused, which is just so funny to me because I don't think that she's the one that's confused here, Simón. I think that that would be you. But Amber says that she's doing all of this for attention and says that it will go away. But of course, it does not go away, as we later see Jasmine go to Luna. She asks him to tell him to be careful, as she knows that him and Amber are more than friends. She says that she saw them almost kiss and that she doesn't want him to suffer. And so all of this brings Luna to decide to talk to Simón. But first we do have a little bit of a skating scene. So Amber and Simón are skating when Juliana tells her that she needs to skate with more passion. They go to run it again, and of course it wouldn't be a skating scene without a longing look at the end. Juliana congratulates her and says that they did a lot better and make a great pair. It's also worth noting that Luna sees all of this happen, which just confirms what Jasmine previously told her. So then we get to their conversation. Luna asks Simón if there's a girl in his life and he gets all smiley, but he still says that there's nobody, and if there was somebody, he would tell her. So she asks what's going on with Amber, and he jokes saying that she's a girl who comes to the roller, who's blonde, is his friend, and that's all. Luna argues that that doesn't mean that he can't still feel something for her and explains what Jasmine told her, but he still remains strong in his defense, saying that Jasmine is telling a story that's not true, that Amber is just somebody that he gets along well with, that they've been rehearsing together a lot lately, that they both have a deep interest in music, and that they listen to one another. He then continues saying that deep down there's an Amber that he's never seen before, that she's really cool and beautiful, but that she's just a friend.
Ámbar solamente me cae muy bien, ¿ok? Y ya. Aunque te tengo que confesar que últimamente hemos estado platicando mucho, veo que a ella le gusta mucho la música, entonces eso me interesa a mí también, ¿no? Y me escucha, y la escucho, y en el fondo hay un Ámbar que yo no conocía, y es súper buena onda. Es linda, no sé, pero solamente es mi amiga, ¿entiendes?
He then continues after this, saying that he feels as though what she needed was a friend to listen to her, and that everybody can change, but they need the opportunity to. Luna agrees with this, but still tells him to be careful, as she doesn't want to see him getting hurt. So I feel like this scene speaks for itself, and it's almost comical how contradictory Simón is being in this moment. Like, she's just a friend, but let me tell you everything that I love about her and how pretty she is. Honestly, this boy is just so far gone at this point, I don't even know if he can see it himself. Or maybe he can see it and he's just trying to deny it. Moving on, that night we have another mirror conversation between Amber and herself. She stresses over not knowing who she is anymore and not having anyone to talk to or that cares about her, and then as if on cue, her phone starts to ring and it's Simón calling to check on her. He says that he was worried about her and wanted to see how she was doing, and so she tells him that she's fine, that she's been having some trouble at home and that things aren't great with her friends right now, and so she feels as though the planets have aligned against her. He then jokes with her that he knows he's not as funny or as knowledgeable about fashion as Delphi and Jasmine, but what he can do is listen and wants her to know that he's there for her. She thanks him for saying that and says that it made her really happy to hear his voice. He then tells her to rest well and apologizes for calling so late. After they both hang up, she smiles to herself before she realizes what she's doing. She then tells herself to stop and that she's not understanding what's happening, that Simón is just a part of her plan, nothing else, and asks herself not to forget that.
No. No, Ámbar, no estás entendiendo nada, no. Simón es parte del plan, nada más. Es la pieza fundamental para que todo salga como lo pensaste. Por favor, no te lo olvides.
So first of all, I love that Simón has like Amber spidey senses. The minute she was wallowing about being alone, he picks up the phone and calls her. And I also think again how this shows the comparison between their two social lives. So where we see Simón getting asked by Luna as well as Nico and Pedro about Amber, she doesn't exactly have the same luxury. So this is actually the first time we've ever really gotten any confirmation of feelings from her. But we get it through her talking to herself instead. But I still feel like seeing her fight with herself over her feelings for him is just so perfect. Like, she's already blurred the lines so far that even she's confused as to where they are. And I think seeing her scold herself for that is almost like the perfect admission for feelings for her. On to the following episode where we get some more flirting. Basically, Simón goes to Ámbar with an array of beverages. He then asks if what she wanted was apple juice, but then admits that he didn't bring it for her. Instead, he brought her 4 different options because he knew that she was going to change her mind. He lists them off, and this girl is smiling so big that you could see it from a mile away. She then picks the water, and then he sits down asking how she's doing.
Ámbar, jugo de manzana, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Bueno, no te lo traje. Te traje 4 opciones porque yo sabía que me ibas a cambiar, ¿ok? Tienes jugo de durazno, tienes licuado de fresa, limonada con jengibre y menta y agua natural.
Yo no puedo creer lo que estás haciendo.
Pero si no, prefieres uno de estos.
Quiero agua sin gas.
¿Viste?
Gracias.
Aparte es más fácil.
Permiso.
So this has just gotta be, without a doubt, one of my absolute favorite ongoing Simbar plots. I love seeing Simón indulge Ámbar in this little quirk of hers, and this whole interaction just feels so relationship-y, which is kind of funny because they're both still completely denying their feelings at this point. But anyways, he sits down and asks how she's doing. She says good and that she's trying to study but having a hard time focusing. He asks if she's nervous about who's going to be on the new roller team, but she says that she's not and actually doesn't mind either way. He's surprised by this as he thought that she wanted to be on it, and she says that she did, but lately she doesn't have any idea what she wants. She thinks her best option right now is to focus on her plans to go and study in Paris the following year so that she can get away from all of this. And this honestly just made me so sad to hear. It just shows how she really feels like she ruined everything and wants to leave and just start over. And I feel like this just makes what actually ends up happening that much more sad. But he advises her to focus on what's great about right now and uses skating as an example. She agrees that she likes skating but feels as though she's not at her best right now and they only need the best for the competition. Simón laughs at this as he never thought that she would say something like that, which is just so valid. Last season Ámbar, or even the beginning of this season Ámbar, wouldn't be caught dead saying that she's not the absolute best at anything. But he words it so much nicer as he says that she's usually such a competitive person. He then goes to get back to work but tells her that if she needs anything to let him know. He's then hesitant to leave and sits back down asking if she's really okay. She then looks back at him with watery eyes before Luna interrupts.
Bueno. Voy a servir otras veces. Cualquier cosa avísame, ¿no? Pero cualquier cosa, ¿eh? Lo que... Ámbar, perdón que hiciste tanto, ¿ok? Pero tú estás bien. Porque me caes súper bien y... No sé. Yo te quiero ayudar, ¿me entiendes?
¿Qué onda, chicos?
Luna.
Now this moment is just so good. How quiet she gets in response to Simón genuinely caring about her and asking how she's doing. He truly is the only person that she has right now. And I feel like you can just see on her face as to how much that really means to her. And I do wonder if she would have opened up to him again here if Luna didn't interrupt them. That night we get another mirror chat that just shows how much her feelings for Simón are getting to her, as she talks about not knowing who she is anymore and saying that she's too fragile and sensitive. And I mean, I feel like this just goes right along with her upbringing. How can a girl who has never shown genuine love before see it as anything other than a weakness, especially when she was coached and trained to think the exact opposite? But on to the next episode where we get another almost kiss scene, which might be my favorite one. I like the last one a lot, but I also like this one a lot too. I basically like this whole chapter. Like, this whole chapter of Simbar is my absolute favorite arc of them in this entire series. But anyways, we see Simón and Ámbar rehearse together and then they take a water break. They have since both made the team, and so Simón comments on how great that is. Ámbar doesn't feel the same though, as she still feels as though she's not at her best. But of course, Simón doesn't agree with this and says again that she skates beautifully and will do great. He then comments on her being off lately and asks if she's okay again, and she just stares back at him in response, which causes him to ask why she's looking at him like that. She apologizes but admits that it still surprised her that someone actually cares about what's going on with her, repeating how she's felt alone lately and how it's not very fun. This causes him to reach out and rub her arm, asking if she's still fighting with her friends. He then tells her that he doesn't have to tell her right now what's happened, but he wants her to know that she can count on him. She then looks back at him a bit perplexed as she asks why he's so nice to her. He doesn't answer, but instead leans in for a kiss before he accidentally drops his water bottle, startling them both.
Si quieres platicar con alguien o si quieres que alguien te escuche, no sé si... Aquí estoy.
¿Por qué sos tan bueno conmigo?
So this scene is just so perfect to me, like I don't even know where to begin. The way that she looks at him as if he means everything to her, and how he is still just so adamant on checking in to make sure she's okay. But I think the line where she asks him why he's so nice to her is the one that gets me the most. I genuinely believe that she feels as though she doesn't deserve his kindness, which like that alone is just so heartbreaking. But at the same time, it's also understandable with all that she's done to him. And then the fact that he goes to kiss her in reply, it's like he's saying that he cares about her and he's nice to her because he likes her. Like, it's just so perfect. Like I said, I just love this specific era of Simbar so very much. And unfortunately, this is when things take a turn, which I guess makes sense. Like, we are only at episode 55, which for a regular show sounds kind of insane, but for this one, like, there are 80 episodes per season, so we still have a little bit ways to go. And so I understand that they want to add some more conflict in there and they need to drag them out a little bit more. I just personally wish that that wasn't the case, and I wish that this next chapter just didn't even exist at all. But nonetheless, it is time for us to begrudgingly move on to our next chapter. So Amber finds Simón in the roller and says that she wanted to see him before going back home, which I find a little bit funny because they literally just saw each other, but I digress. So she thanks him for the nice things that he said to her today, and he lets her know that it was all from the heart before telling her to take care. And he also makes a joke about the water bottle that he dropped. They then share a cheek kiss before she walks off, and then it becomes quite clear that they only had this interaction for the moment that follows it. As once she walks away, she walks by our new character and Simbar antagonist, Benici-no. So Benici-no is someone that Simón knew from Mexico. They both worked at the same restaurant together, and Simón hates him, and this is because he tried to frame him from stealing money from the register. So he basically knows that Benny is bad news and doesn't trust him whatsoever. And just to clarify, Benny is a nickname that I've given him myself. He has not referred to that in the series whatsoever, but just writing in my notes Benici-no over and over again got quite tiring, and I feel like he gives a Benny vibe, so I've been calling him Benny. So if you're confused as to who Benny is, it's Benici-no. Alright, moving on. So Amber walks by and he is enamored with her, saying to himself that that girl will be his. Dun dun dun. Luckily, we don't have to deal with that quite yet though, as the following episode does give us some more Simbar content. So during rehearsals, Amber makes a suggestion which causes Juliana to be quite harsh with her. This results in Amber storming out and Simón following after her. He later finds her crying in the park and he asks if it's because of what their coach said. She then pauses before saying that that is what it is, which I found interesting, as this makes me assume that she's also crying because of everything else that's going on in her life, but she doesn't want to bore him with that, and so she just goes with it being because of Juliana. So she says that she doesn't understand why she has to take it all out on her. She feels as though she's just trying to help and that she's changed, but no one can see that. But of course, Simón says that he can. She then thanks him for being there for her when she needed him the most, and then says that she's starting to feel as though she can tell him the whole truth about her life. And then this causes him to ask what she means by that.
Gracias, Simón, por estar cerca mío cuando más te necesito. No sé, de repente siento que te puedo contar toda la verdad sobre mi vida. Todo.
¿Cómo que toda la verdad sobre tu vida?
So then this is the cliffhanger of this episode, which is really disappointing because then when we pick up from it in the next episode, there is a huge tonal shift. So it's clear that they were only using this moment as bait and they weren't actually going to follow through with it, which is unfortunate because I do feel like Amber was being genuine here and she really does feel at this point like she's changed. That being abandoned and learning what her godmother did to her has really changed who she is as a person. And I also think that her bond with Simón has grown out of control to the point where she does feel like she can trust him. But there is still that part of her that is holding back. But like I said, this is unfortunately a bait scene, and so the second half of it is pretty much just more of what we've seen already. The two of them head over to a bench, and Simón tells her that she can count on him as he asks again what happened. And then she says nothing specifically and that she was just referring to her life in general. She feels as though nobody knows who she really is, that she's going through a rough time, that she had a fight with her friends, and then she goes home and she has nobody to talk to there either. This causes Simón to ask about Sharon, and she explains that they have a complicated relationship. She feels as though everybody thinks that she has the perfect life when in reality she doesn't. And so he argues that whoever thinks that doesn't actually know her. She agrees with this and says that she suffers as well and that she questions all of the time what she should do. That the image that she reflects to everyone is one thing, but how she actually feels on the inside is a completely different thing. But she doesn't want to show that side of herself because she hates it. So instead she pretends to be brave and act like nothing's happened. And then this is when he grabs her hand. He tells her that it's brave to cry and it's brave to express your feelings, and then says that that she's becoming brave because she's changed and congratulates her for that. She says that he's right and that it's all thanks to him, that she's never in her life opened up to someone like this and doesn't know what he did, but he really inspires her, gives her confidence, and is good for her.
Simón, yo nunca en mi vida me había abierto así con alguien. No sé qué es lo que haces o qué es lo que hiciste, pero de verdad me das confianza. Y me hace muy bien saber que estás cerca mío.
So I know that I was just complaining that we were led to believe that this scene would bring us one place, but then we ended up somewhere else. I do still kind of like where we ended up. I love how candid she's being with him about how he's really impacted her, and just how vulnerable she is about how she presents herself to the world. The way she talks about how she hates coming across as weak, I feel like is really eye-opening in terms of her character. First of all, like I've been saying all along, it makes sense with the way that she was raised. That with Sharon as her mother, she's always been taught that she has to be perceived as nothing less than perfection. And I also feel like that goes hand in hand with her change leading up into the 3rd season. The wording that she uses too when describing this, I feel like brings us right back to her mirror conversations, especially because she calls it an image that she reflects to everyone else, which confirms that she thinks who she really is and who her reflection is are 2 different people, and that one of them is weak and needs to be controlled, which I think is just so heartbreaking, but also helps explain the events of this season even better. But unfortunately, this is the last we see of Amber opening up to Simón and him comforting her, at least for the time being, as we then get into Benicio weaseling his way into her life and truly bringing out the worst side of her. So the next day at the roller, Amber runs into him in the locker room. And then this is when the 2 of them decide to join forces to destroy Juliana. But one thing that I found interesting about this moment, which could be pure coincidence, but I highly doubt it, is where it takes place, as this is the exact same spot as to where Amber first started manipulating Simón. And I think that this was done on purpose to show that Benicio is bringing Amber right back to that place that she was at before. And honestly, I just feel like that was so smart of them, even if that wasn't intentional. It's pretty cool that that was a thing that's included. But then we have a break for skating practice. Juliana tells Simbar that they did really good, that she likes to see them connected, paying attention to one another, and working as a team. But then of course things go south afterwards when Amber serves as Benicio's accomplice in destroying Juliana's most prized possession from her skating career, which is the crystal skate. But it's time for us to take a break from these Benicio shenanigans for some jealous Amber, which is just way more fun. So Sabrina Carpenter is now here as she's guest starring in 2 episodes, and the in-universe reason for this is because her and Simón are working on a song together for his album. So Amber sees Simón accompanying Sabrina and gets jealous, asking Benicio what he's doing with her. Benny says that he looks happy with her, not that she'd care, and Amber plays along with this, saying that she obviously doesn't. She is then also very unimpressed by Sabrina's performance of Thumbs. And I actually think this has gotta be like one of my favorite Disney Channel LA guest star appearances. Not just because I love Sabrina, but I also love how they actually made her a part of the story. Like seeing Amber be jealous of the Sabrina Carpenter has gotta be like one of my favorite Roman empires. But back to evil Amber. She then accompanies Benicio in uploading a video of Juliana freaking out on them, which causes her to decide to quit the roller team. And then afterwards, they almost kiss, which is just disgusting if you ask me. Especially because how long has it been that they've been teasing Simbar? And how many kisses have they had? Yeah, that's right. Get out of here, Benicio. Anyways, Amber then decides that she needs to get back to her original goal of tearing Luna and Simón apart. We see this when the 4 of them meet to talk about the competition. Then after Luteo leaves, Amber says that she feels bad for Luna because it's obvious that things aren't going well in her relationship. She then says that she hopes that she realizes how much Mateo sucks, basically, otherwise things could end badly. And so she's really just falling back into her old habits of meddling and stirring the pot, and who's to blame for that? I'll give you a hint, it rhymes with Fenicio. But one thing that I do love is the way that they're showcasing this through her wardrobe. For the first time since I think the Catch Me If You Can performance, we see her in an all black outfit, which is a color that I would argue we've never really seen her in that much before. I feel like it's a great way of highlighting that she's falling back into her dark ways and also foreshadowing what's to come. The next day, Benny asks Amber why she's always hanging around Simón. He then asks her if she really likes him or if she's just using him. Unfortunately though, Amber doesn't answer this, asking him instead what would bother him more. Or I guess maybe not unfortunately, because I doubt she would have told him how she feels anyways. Simón then walks in, interrupting their conversation, and of course he comes in right when Benny says that he has another plan. But Amber is able to cover for him here by saying that he's helping her with a plan to get back together with her friends. The boys then begin arguing and Amber asks them to stop, and she says that it's awful to fight with your friends. But then Simón retorts that Benicio is not his friend. And I just love hearing Simón say point blank that they're not friends. He's such a nice guy that hearing him talk badly about anybody is such a rare occurrence, but it is so deserved in this situation. Afterwards, Afterwards, Simón tells Ámbar not to trust Benicio and says that he knows him very well based off of the time that they spent together in Mexico. So Ámbar says okay, and that if she notices anything, she'll let him know. But now it is time for our next round of Roda Fest. So the team goes on to perform, including some moments between the couple, and Ámbar and Simón grab hands before the final team is announced. Obviously, they do make it to the next round, which is in Cancun, and afterwards, Ámbar congratulates Simón on his performance. He says the same to her and that they make a great team, and she agrees, causing him to ask if she's going to hug him or what. She then laughs as they share a hug.
Simón,
Ámbar.
felicitaciones. Estuviste muy, muy bien.
Gracias. Tú también. Creo que hacemos un equipo muy bueno.
Hacemos un muy buen equipo.
¿No me vas a abrazar o qué? Digo.
Now this moment is just so precious. I love the way that they say their names to one another and how she looks at him when he says that they make a great team. And although it's short, it's nice to have a moment like this between the two of them while we have all this other garbage going on around them. And speaking of good moments, we also have another one between them in this episode as well. This comes after Simón confronts Mateo for treating him badly in an interview, and Ámbar defends him and also holds him back as the two of them continue arguing. Then we have a big discovery at the end of this episode, as Ámbar finally finds out that Luna is Sol Benson. It only took her over 140 episodes, but we finally made it there. And now she has even more of a motive to try to ruin Luna's life. And we see this during one of her mirror conversations in the following episode. This is basically when she kicks her new and improved plan into gear, determined to make sure that Luna never figures out the truth about her past. And she also notes that Simón is almost hers, which she calls a good start and a good way to hit her where it hurts. But in reality, Ámbar actually has bigger problems to worry about, as Juliana has taken all of these attacks on her quite seriously. And so now she has started to question if maybe the fire from the beginning of the season is also related to these events. And we actually see Simón sit with her as she reviews security footage from whenever the camera was first broken. She points out a scarf that we see in frame, saying that whoever owns that scarf is responsible. And of course, we know that Ámbar is the owner of that scarf. She also finds out in this episode that Benicio is the one who destroyed her skate. And so in the following episode, she ends up banning him from the roller, which is just so lovely, and I'm just so glad that we never have to see him again in this season. But first, we do have to tie up some loose ends, and so he's not completely gone yet. Before that, though, we do get some nice rehearsal moments between the couple. We see Simón and Ámbar skate together in a routine that requires a hula hoop, which is fun, especially the moment where their eyes lock in the beginning and at the end when the hula hoop forces proximity between the two of them. Afterwards, they talk to Delphi and their other friend Gaston about how they have to find Benicio's accomplice, and Ámbar tells Simón to count on her for whatever he needs. Obviously trying to cover the fact that she's the one who they're all looking for. Now, before we get to what's next, I do have to give a little bit of a trigger warning for non-consensual kissing, to be specific, and I will have to give 2 more warnings for that throughout the rest of this video, which is just so insane that I even have to do this for this series that's meant for children, but for some reason Disney Channel LA just loved including sexual assault kissing in their show for some reason. If this topic is triggering for you, I will have a timestamp on screen to where you can skip to. So even though Ámbar is playing calm, the reality of the situation is quite different. And so she goes to Benny, freaking out about the potential of being caught. Benicio then kisses her, and Jasmine sees this happen from behind a tree. And now this is just so infuriating because, as I mentioned, this is a non-consensual kiss. She is physically recoiling throughout it, and then when we pick up in the following episode, she gets mad at him about it. She also tells him to leave, insisting that he won't steal another kiss from her. And I think the only reason why she didn't push him off of her to begin with is because they needed that kissing shot for the cliffhanger of the episode, which is also something that the show does quite often, which is unfortunate because then I feel like it allows people to victim blame when even if they didn't push them off to begin with, they were still assaulted. So like, no matter how long the assault lasted for, let's not blame the victim, all right? Sounds good. But like I said, Jasmine sees all of this, and so she goes to Luna and Simón and tells them that Ámbar is Benicio's accomplice. And she also tells them what she saw. Luna and Jasmine then talk about this possibility while Simón processes. Jasmine then reminds them of the previous year when she broke the sun prop before their final performance, but Simón is still unconvinced, saying that that was a while ago and that she's changed. But Jasmine just retorts that that's what she wants him to believe and that she wouldn't be saying all of this if it wasn't true. She then tells Simón to be careful and that Amber's using him. He doesn't understand why she would do that or what her goal would be, but Jasmine says that he's useful to her. Now that she doesn't have anybody, she needs him more than ever. Moving on, the roller crew have decided to plan a surprise for Juliana to get her to stay, and during this we see a lot of looks shared between Simón and Ámbar. We later see her take him into the dressing room to show him something for the surprise, and then when he's quiet with her, she asks him what's going on. He says that he's been thinking of Benicio and she tells him to forget about him, and that she's very happy that he's gone and that it's best to stay away from people like him. him. He then tells her that Hasmin saw them kiss and that he doesn't want to find out that she had something to do with breaking the skate. And so of course, Amber goes right into defense mode. She says that it hurts that someone would be so bored with their life that they would make up this lie to hurt her. But of course, what hurts even more is that he would believe it. He asks why Hasmin would do that, and so then she brings up her crush on him, saying that she's jealous of the two of them, that she's crazy about him, and that it kills her that they're friends. Which is honestly a pretty good cover, mainly because the first part is true. She then says that she lied about seeing them kiss because she's just trying to separate them. So Simón asks if that means that she didn't meet Benicio in the park. But she says that she did. That he asked her to meet in the park to say goodbye and then he tried to kiss her. And so Simón, now defeated, asks if she kissed him. But she says no and that she stopped him because she doesn't feel anything for him. And that she would never be interested in a guy like him and she knows very clearly what she feels. Simón then believes her and apologizes for doubting her.
Jamás me podría interesar un chico así. Yo tengo muy claro lo que siento. ¿Me crees?
Sí. Sí te creo. Siento mucho haber desconfiado de ti.
Yo también lo lamento.
Afterwards, Simón stops Amber as she's leaving. He tells her that he's there for her if she wants someone to talk to. She thanks him for this and then tells him that it looks like he's her only friend and that he should be careful. So first of all, jealous Simón, yes please, I love to see it. And I also have to admit that I am okay with her lying about her kiss with Benicio. Because as far as I see it, she didn't kiss him, he assaulted her. It would be better for her to be honest about the fact that they did kiss, but it was without her consent. But that concept kind of seems to be lost on characters in this show and in Disney telenovelas to begin with. So I'm honestly not upset about her keeping this from him, though it does still make me a little bit sad to see him fall right back into her trap once again. Like, as far as I see it, she didn't kiss him, but she was still his accomplice, and she is still lying to him about that. And so him saying that he believes her while he leans up against the wall, like, while it was cute, it did hurt knowing that she was still lying to him. But as you may have noticed, Amber is wearing black once again, and so it's time for her to get back to scheming. So she goes to Simón, trying to get information about Luna's search for her biological parents, but he tells her to go to Luna instead. Hasmin then walks in, and so Amber turns her attention to her. She asks her how she could make something up like that and says that she's really hurting her, but Hasmin stands strong, saying that she didn't make up anything. They then go back and forth a bit before Simón excuses himself, and then once he's gone, Amber drops the act, warning Hasmin to be careful. That nobody does this to her and that it doesn't matter what Hasmin says, that Simón will still believe her. But now with Benicio gone as far as this season is concerned, thank God, it is time for Simbar to kick into full gear. But unfortunately, all of these secrets that Amber has been keeping are also about to catch up to her. So it does not last long, but with all that being said, let's move on to our next chapter. So a couple episodes later, Amber finds Simón in the kitchen with Luna and her friend Nina. She asks if she can steal him for a sec, and the two of them leave holding hands. Once they're gone, Luna and Nina both talk about how weird it is to see them holding hands like that, and both agree that they don't think Amber is up to any good. Meanwhile, Amber and Simón have made it to a park, and she admits to him that it's nice for her to get out of the house, as she sometimes feels like she's drowning in there. She then apologizes for always talking about her problems, which was honestly nice to hear, especially because things have gotten pretty repetitive at this point. Anyways, he says that it's okay, and she thanks him, saying that it feels good to talk to someone. He asks her if she can talk to her godmother, but she admits that every time she tries, she ends up with a headache all of a sudden, adding that he's the only one that she can trust. That Delphi and Hasmin don't care about her anymore, and she is alone without any friends. Simón, of course, then says that she has him, she has Luna, and all of the other friends that they have at the roller, and she thanks him for saying this and then segues into her proposal for him. So she explains that she has 2 tickets for a movie that she's just dying to see. She was supposed to go with Delphi, but he knows what happened there. She admits that she doesn't want to go alone, and so she asks if he'll go with her. He then chuckles before admitting that he wanted to be the one to ask her, but then he accepts, insisting that the popcorn will be on him. She says that she might only have one friend, but he's the best of them all. And I'm kind of wondering as to why we're still using friend terms when he literally just admitted that he wanted to be the one to ask her out on a date first. But Simón isn't fazed as he takes a step forward. She asks why he's looking at her like that, and he says because she has the most beautiful eyes that he's ever seen, and because she's changed a lot and he really likes her like this. She says that all of her changing is thanks to him, and that since they started being friends, she started to see things differently. She then says that she might be embarrassed by saying this later, but it's almost like he's illuminated, and then she trails off before he finishes her sentence saying her way. She laughs at this, but then says that it's true, and then puts her hand on his shoulder saying that he's incredible. He thanks her and then leans in before he notices Luna and Nina behind her. He then clears his throat and backs away.
Es como si hubieses iluminado
mi camino, ¿qué haces?
Sí, iba a decir eso en serio. No, en serio, Simón. No te rías.
No, es que...
Simón, sos una persona increíble.
Gracias.
Afterwards, Amber brings up an excuse to leave, and Nina does as well. So obviously a very cute scene. I love all the date talk and the complimenting as well. One thing I will say though is that I still don't really like all of this change talk. I know that that's just something that I have to get used to with them, but it also feels like Amber changing is a little bit of a fixation for Simón. Like, crazy idea here, but maybe you should just love someone for who they are. Like, I know in Amber's case she's made a lot of mistakes in her past, but I just feel like he could use better language than change. I mean, maybe he's just repeating it so much because he wants it to be true, but I wish that the language was more around like him seeing the good in her and wanting her to show that side of her more. And I guess they do that somewhat better in the following season. But now that Luna and Simón have been left on their own, he pretends to be on the phone with his mom to avoid any questions. But she tells him to knock it off, and Simón says that they just came there to talk. Luna then teases him, asking if kissing is the new way of talking, and he says no and that they didn't kiss, which is like somewhat true, but their lips were pretty much centimeters apart from one another, so I feel like that practically classifies as a kiss. Luna then asks if he likes Amber, and he avoids answering the question, saying instead that she's changed a lot and that she has beautiful eyes. She then comments on him walking around the question and asks it again, and he ultimately says that he's confused, but he can't deny how he feels. So there we have it, our first real confession of feelings from Mr. Simón. But of course, Amber does not have any friends to talk to about this, and so instead we see her talking to herself in the mirror once again. She tells herself that she has no doubt that Simón is hers and then smiles bashfully at this. She then gets upset, telling herself not to get it confused. That Simón is just a part of her plan and that's all. That she can't have feelings for him and that if she mixes her feelings in, then she will ruin everything. And she decides that she needs to be perfect, and so then she goes and looks for the perfect outfit for her date. She then pulls out some things for her closet and we pan over to her open drawer where we can see the incriminating scarf inside, obviously foreshadowing what's to come. Then we have a bit of a lull as we have some other things going on, like Simón getting kicked out of his apartment, for example. And in episode 69, Amber finds out about this and asks where he's staying. Nico doesn't want to tell her, but Simón says that they can trust her and admits that they've been staying in the roller. She's shocked by this and then tells him that they can actually stay in her house because she has a ton of rooms. And Simón laughs at this, saying that he stayed at her house before, be it illegally, and it didn't go well. She says that this time it'll be different as they'll be her guests. And I do really like this callback to the first season and also foreshadowing for the third season. But Simón thanks her for the offer and tells her that they'll find a place. And something else that I find interesting about this scene is I wonder what Mirror Amber would think of it. Because I don't think what she's doing here would really serve her final goal of like ruining Luna's life. I genuinely think that she's just being nice here and offering this to him because she likes him. But I guess she could just brush it off as being like a keep your enemies close sort of situation. That night we have another conversation about Amber between Simón, Nico, and Pedro. He says that she's changed a lot and that they can trust her wholeheartedly. But they're not as convinced about this, and so they warn him to be careful. He then calls her and she tells him that she's worried about him having nowhere to live. She then offers to send over some blankets, but he says that they're okay and that this is only temporary. This is because where they live is owned by Nico's uncle Getty, and they have a skating duel plan to decide as to whether or not they can continue living there. So she tells him that he'll win, but hopes that with everything going on that he hasn't forgotten about their date that they had planned. He says that he hasn't, as he would never forget something so important, and she smiles, saying that she's glad to hear that. After their call, Amber plots to herself about how she's going to take Simón away from Luna for good, and she does this while holding her very incriminating scarf. Now, before we get to their date, which I promise is up next, we first have this one scene between Amber and Luna that I feel like also includes some foreshadowing. So Luna tells her that she doesn't know what's going on between the two of them, but she asks that no matter what happens, she promises not to hurt him. And Amber says sincerely that she doesn't think that she's capable of that, and that Simón is really important to her. And I really don't think that she's just saying this to save face here with Luna. It sounds very sincere, and this whole conversation about Simón seems to really affect her, which just makes what's about to happen hurt even more. So then we move on to our next skating practice. Luna and Simón are talking when Amber interrupts them and grabs Simón by the arm, asking to borrow him, which is very flirtatious and quite forward if you ask me. It also gave me the vibe that Amber was trying to show the priority of her relationship with Simón over Luna's as like a power dynamic, which I found to be really interesting. So they skate off and Amber asks if he's remembered their date tonight. He says of course and tells her that she hasn't even left yet, but he already wants to see her again. And then we finally reach their date. On their way to the theater, Simón asks if she's excited, and she admits that she's been waiting for this day. He says that he can tell because he's never seen her smile like this before. He then stops to pick a flower for her as he tells her that she should smile more because she looks very beautiful like this. And so she counters if he wants her to smile more, then he's going to have to take her out more often. And so he agrees and says that he's got the next 3 years reserved for her. And I just love this. I love their flirty banter just so very much. Amber then admits to Simón that she feels different when she's with him, that she feels at peace and that no one else can make her feel that way. He says that he feels the same and that she's changed a lot. She again says that that's thanks to him as he takes a step closer. He then pushes the hair from her face as he says that it's actually thanks to her, that she always had that light in her, she just had to learn to show it. She tells him that all she knows is that when she's with him, it's like the world around them slows down and that it's like nothing exists except for the two of them. He kisses her hand and says that he feels the same way and that he doesn't want that feeling to ever stop. He then pulls her in and the two of them finally share their first kiss. All right, so about an hour and a half in and we finally have our first kiss. And I do feel like it is just such a sweet moment. And I love how she says that she feels at peace with him, and I just wish that she could give into that feeling just a little bit more. Now, unfortunately, there is some more change talk here, but what I like about this comment is how he says that she always had it in her, because I feel like that alludes to her not so much as changing, but just learning how to show her true self and to let her true emotions come out of her. And then, of course, seeing him do the hand kiss once again was a very nice touch. Now, what happens after their kiss is just as cute in my opinion. Simón lets a wow slip from his lips before stuttering over what just happened. And then she goes on to tease him, asking if he never thought about them kissing before. He then stutters between a yes and a no before admitting that he has thought about it, but that it was never as beautiful as it just was, relating it back to her and how beautiful she is. He then repeats that he never wants this moment to end before going in to kiss her once again, but then she tells him to stop. He then immediately becomes self-conscious, asking if she regrets it, and she has to grab his face and tell him no and that she liked it, but also remind him of the movie that they are now running late to. He says that they're going to have to run, but she says that she can't as she's wearing heels, but luckily Simón has another idea, asking if she's familiar with the Simón mobile. She is confused by this until he picks her up bridal style and starts running.
No.
No te gustó. No,
No,
si
no,
no te
no,
gustó, te
no,
entiendo
no,
porque-
no, me re gustó. Pero la película. O sea, acá vinimos a ver una película y la re quiero ver y estamos llegando muy tarde. Nos olvidamos, ¿está bien?
Creo que tenemos que correr.
No, no puedo correr porque tengo tacos, pero no importa, caminamos.
No,
rápido.
¿tú nunca escuchaste hablar del Simón móvil? Simón.
¿Del qué?
Now, I would almost argue that their scene after their kiss is even better than the one before it. I love how they're already kissing before the date even started, and that their kiss had such an effect on Simón that he completely forgot about what they were supposed to be doing. Also, his immediate insecurities, which I just love her reaction to, and how she just doesn't hesitate in grabbing his face and grounding him. And I know we've talked a lot about Amber and her traumas, but we gotta remember that Simón has some too. His exes go from Daniela, who was awful to him in the first season, and to Luna, who was his friend and had no actual feelings for him. And so things going so well with Amber might even feel like a too good to be true kind of situation for him. So obviously we don't actually get to see them on their movie date, but we do get to see Simón after. He basically comes home all love-struck and starts yelling about love. Nico then asks him about Amber and he says that she's a really fun girl and that they had a really good time. Pedro notes that he hasn't seen him smile like this in a long time, and Simón confesses that they're going to take it slow and see how things go, causing Nico to say that that would suggest that something's going on, to which Simón says that there is, basically confirming their relationship. The following day, we see the two of them meet at the roller getting ready to skate, and of course they meet on their special bench. They both agree that they had a good time yesterday and talk about how great the movie was, and then Simón teases her, asking if it was just the movie that she liked. And so she laughs and says no, and that there was something she liked a little bit more, which is the person that she went to it with. He admits that he feels the same and then jokes that he has bad news for her and that they're going to have to do it again. She then plays along, saying that she has even worse news for him, which is that they're going to have to do it again today at her place. He loves the idea and says that he'll be there. Amber then confesses that it's been a while since she enjoyed herself this much and doesn't think that she ever actually has enjoyed herself this much with anybody. The mood then shifts as he moves closer to her, admitting that he loved going out with her. He then shifts his gaze down a bit as he says that he can't stop thinking about their kiss, calling it beautiful. And I should also add that Jasmine does overhear all of this and is heartbroken, which is just so unfortunate, but I'm sorry, like this is still just such a good moment and I will not let her ruin it for me.
Creo que con nadie me divertí de esa manera.
Me pasó lo mismo.
En serio.
Ámbar. Me encantó salir contigo. Y no he dejado de pensar en el beso que te di. Fue súper bonito.
So as I said, despite the unfortunate hurt that this moment causes Hasmin, I still just love this scene so much. I love the playful banter that they share about having to go out again, and also like big moves from Amber for already inviting him over after only one date. But I guess like they have known each other for quite some time and he has been to her house many times, so it's not that big of a deal, but still it like feels like one to me. And we talked a little bit about Simon's dating history on their date, but I failed to mention Amber's. And when she says that she's never been so happy with anyone else before, I just couldn't help but think about her relationship with Mateo. I mean, that comment alone proves how lack of any substance that relationship actually had, and I feel like it makes this relationship with Simon even more impactful on Amber. But we mentioned Hasmin, so Simon finds her upset and asks how he can help, and she advises him to be careful with Amber because she doesn't want to see him getting hurt. He repeats that she's changed a lot, and she argues again that's just what she wants him to believe. She encourages him once more to be careful with her because there are a lot of things that he doesn't know about. And unfortunately, he's about to find out those things a lot sooner than you may think. So we're on to date 2 and we see the two of them in Amber's room. She asks if he's ready to watch a movie and he admits that he loves spending time with her. She then calls him sweet in response and then takes his hand. During the movie, Amber says that she's cold and so he offers her his shirt, but she says no. She then starts to get upset and kind of lets the other side of herself show as she rants about the people in her house being useless. She then catches herself in this rant and settles on the AC being up too high. She decides to go get a sweater and shows him 2, asking which one he likes better, and he replies that everything looks beautiful on her. They're then interrupted by Sharon calling for Amber, and she goes on to leave Simon alone in her room. A bored Simon then gets up and starts looking around and finds himself in her closet. He then notices in one of her open drawers the scarf that was seen on camera and is in shock. So I love these two, as you guys know by now, but there is just something about this scene that is just so awkward to me. Them sitting in chairs far away from one another is weird. Like, they're in their honeymoon phase at this point. They would probably be cuddling and on top of each other. But I also understand at the same time that this is Disney Channel, and so maybe they couldn't show that. It's also just a bit odd in general to see Simon in her room to begin with. I felt the same way when we saw Luna in there earlier. I feel like it creates this interesting juxtaposition where like these two worlds are colliding and it's almost like Simon doesn't like fit in there. And then the whole asking him what sweater she should wear was a little bit cringy to me as well. Not to mention him like looking through her stuff was just like the cherry on top. I know that he was just wandering around, but I still felt like he should have stayed seated. And like, what was he doing over by her dresser? In the top drawer? No. I don't like that implication at all. But at the same time, I do also understand that they needed him to find that scarf for plot reasons, and so it is what it is. And with that being said, there is also a part of me that wonders if all of that was intentional and that I was supposed to feel that way. I mean, this is basically the start of everything going south. So maybe they placed them in those separate chairs to force distance instead of proximity, and maybe the awkwardness was all intentional as well to make us feel like something was off. I also think the AC comment was quite clever as well as a way to place some doubt in Simon and to show that her game was kind of coming to an end. This is all speculation, of course, and maybe I am giving them more flowers than deserved, but I do think that the creators of this show are a lot smarter than people maybe give them credit for. So Simon decides to put the scarf back and leave without a word, which is kind of disappointing to me. Like, I would have rather seen them go at it right then and there. Amber then returns and thinks that he's hiding at first. She then calls him and gets no answer, and so she leaves a message asking why he left. She then goes downstairs and asks their maid Amanda if she's seen him, and she confirms that she saw him leave through the service entrance. Amber is confused by this until she receives a voice note from Simon saying that something came up and he had to go. And once again, since Amber has no friends to talk to about this situation, we see her talking to herself instead. So that night she wonders what could have happened to him to have him leave like that, but she tells herself not to worry as it's very clear what he feels for her. And then we finally get our confirmation of feelings from Amber, as she tells herself that she just has to accept it, that she's in love with Simon and he is the best thing that's ever happened to her. And don't get me wrong, it is just so great to hear her say that. I love that she's finally admitting it to herself, and I love that she's not ashamed of it anymore. But the timing is just so unfortunate and it just makes it hurt even more.
Basta, tenés que aceptarlo. Decilo en voz alta. Estás enamorada de él. Simón es lo mejor que te pasó en la vida.
So then I guess Simón doesn't know exactly how to confront her, and so he decides to avoid her instead, which is obviously not the best thing to do, but it is what it is. And just a warning before I show any scenes from this next part to my Simbar fans, you're going to recognize the shirt that Ámbar is wearing, and I am just so sorry for any hurt that it has caused. And honestly, for what is gonna be caused again once I go over what happened. So Ámbar finds Simón in the roller the next day. She asks if everything's okay, and he says that it is, but that they're rehearsing right now, and so he can't talk. She tells him that she can wait, and so he says okay, and then no, and then settles on him not having time right now. And so obviously she can sense his uncertainty, and so she tells him to call or text her then. She then goes to leave before coming back upset and telling him that when he do that, to explain what's going on, because she likes to have things very clear. And I like this. I like seeing her stand her ground and be like, I'm not playing these games, you better tell me what's going on, like, or else, basically. And it also has me wondering if maybe she's starting to panic and like questioning as to how much he knows, but I honestly don't know. And I also imagine that she doesn't like feeling this vulnerable after she literally just accepted the fact that she does have feelings for him. So then we move on to rehearsals, which also doesn't go over very well. Ámbar and Simón are tasked with trying a new move, and Simón isn't too sure about it. He then goes to lift her and says that he can't do it. She again asks him to tell her what's wrong, but he just says that he's having an off day, and then he goes on to excuse himself, saying that he's not feeling well. And then things finally come to a head afterwards in the lockers. And again, I feel like this location is such an iconic choice because it brings us right back to where it all started. So she asks to talk, but he says again that he doesn't have time right now. But she retorts that she doesn't care because he owes her an explanation. She then calls him out for avoiding her and says that she doesn't understand what's going on. And then Simón kind of walks around the situation, saying that she disappointed him, that he thought that she was a different person and that he thought that she changed. But she lied to him and she lied to everybody. And I'm kind of like, maybe that was your problem, bud. Maybe you shouldn't have put all of your eggs in the change basket, Simón, but that's just my 2 cents. He then says that he saw her scarf in her room and that it hurt him a lot. She laughs at this, unsure as to what scarf he's referring to, until he explains that it was the scarf seen on camera before it was destroyed. He then asks if she had it all planned out and says that the worst part is that she tried to frame Luna for it all. He asks her why she would do that, but then answers his own question, saying that she had to get rid of the cameras so that she wouldn't look bad. He then asks if she's going to deny that it wasn't her who poured her drink all over the camera hub and burned down the rink. She argues that it wasn't like that, but he's kind of busy like going off on her at this moment. And so he heartbreakingly tells her not to lie to him because he gave his heart to her. He trusted her and what she did was so horrible. He then asks her for once in her life to tell the truth. She says that it was an accident, which is sort of true. She did pour her drink intentionally, but her goal was to ruin the cameras and not set the whole rink on fire. She then tries to get closer to him and he tells her not to touch him. He then asks her again how she could burn down the rink right when Juliana and Luna enter.
¿No fuiste tú la que quemó toda la pista, Ámbar?
No, no fue así, no.
Pero no me mientas, Ámbar, no me mientas a mí, porque yo te entregué mi corazón a ti. Yo sí confié en ti, Ámbar. Y tú no. Y es horrible. Por una vez en tu vida, di la verdad, Ámbar.
Yo también confío en vos y te estoy diciendo la verdad, fue un accidente, no fue así, no
Es
quiero
que
ver...
no me toques, Ámbar. ¿Cómo pudiste quemar la pista?
So I do really feel for Simón here. It breaks my heart to see him with watery eyes, but I also love seeing him not back down, and I honestly feel like a lot of characters on this show are so good at standing up for themselves. And I feel like that aspect is such a great demonstration for kids watching. And obviously I'm glad that Juliana entered here because obviously this news needed to get out, but I also kind of wish that we could have seen them just continue to go at it here, which we do get more of in the following episode, and I guess I should be happy that we got more of them hashing it out, so I can't complain. First though, we do have the continuation of this scene. So Simón asks her to answer him as he asks again how she could burn down the rink. She says that she can explain that it was an accident and that she didn't do it on purpose, but Simón asks her again to stop lying and asks if it hurts that nobody trusts her. He is now full on crying himself, unsure as to how he could have ever trusted her, and then he excuses himself while she goes after him. And then we reach this wonderful scene outside that all of us Simbar fans just love so much. So we see the two of them outside and Ámbar is running after him, asking to talk. But he asks her to leave him alone and says that he's not interested in anything that she has to say. She then begs for a chance to explain and he finally stops, asking her again how she could do it. He also asks again why she lied to him and says that he seriously thought that she felt something for him. She argues that she never lied to him about how she felt and confesses that when she first started getting close to him, it was real. It was weird for her and different, and then she changed. She then asks that he believe her when she says that she she loves him. And then he almost tries to stop her from saying it, like hearing it come out from her is going to hurt even more, because he thinks that all of this is a lie, which just makes it that much more painful. So he tells her not to say that she loves him because it's not true, and asks again that she stop lying. He then confesses that he thought that she trusted him and that they could have been something amazing. And honestly, just like reciting this, I feel like I'm gonna start crying, and I'm gonna hold my composure to the best of my ability. But she argues that she does trust him, but he says that she doesn't because she lied to him. She goes to interrupt him, but he tells her to listen to him, continuing to say that she disappointed him. She then admits that she knows that she messed up, but that she wants another chance to prove to him that that person that messed up isn't here anymore, and that she never in her life thought that she could feel what she feels for him. And then this obviously strikes a nerve, as it causes him to lay his hardest blow, as he asks her how she can talk about love when she is so full of hate. Amber is speechless in response to this insult, and he apologizes but says that it's true. He then asks if she's aware of the fact that she put all of her friends in danger. She goes back to saying again that it was an accident, and this causes him to sarcastically say that it was an accident that she burnt down the rink and tried to frame Luna for it. She then retorts that that obviously wasn't an accident, and that she was mad and lost control. She then goes on to beg him to please not leave her, that when he's not by her side, everything goes dark and ugly. She feels as though she can't go on without him and that she needs him. And I believe her like 100% here, which just makes it that much more heartbreaking. I mean, just look at what happened when Benici-no came and brought her back to that darkness. I feel like that was all foreshadowing for what's to come after this. But nonetheless, Simón says that he can't trust her anymore, and he leaves as Amber cries.
Simón, te pido por favor que no me dejes. Si vos no estás al lado mío, todo se vuelve oscuro, feo. Simón, yo sé que sin vos no puedo. Te necesito. Por favor.
No puedo hablar confiando en ti, Ámbar.
Pero...
Now, what an amazing scene. I feel like ever since you first see Amber start her scheme with Simón, you're kind of waiting for this moment to happen. You're anticipating him finding out and everything falling apart. And then once we see her actually catch feelings for him, I feel like that anticipation increases and almost turns more into dread. And so all of that is coming to a head in this moment, and I feel like this scene 100% delivered. Once again, it is just so hard to watch Simón here because I can just feel him breaking down. Like how throughout this scene and whenever she's talking and he just goes stone-faced, almost like he has to tell himself that he's not going to fall for her again, which honestly is just such great acting on Mike's part. But then also to see Amber just be so hopeless is also so hard to watch. Like, I know that she's the one who messed up, but I really feel for the both of them in this situation. Simón really was the last person that she had on her side, and now she truly is alone. But nonetheless, I feel like this will always remain as one of the most iconic and impactful scenes from this entire series. But now it is time for Amber to face the other consequences of her actions. So as far as skating goes, she is then kicked off of the roller team, and her punishment at home is that Sharon ends up canceling her plans to study in Paris the following year. And I know that what she did was bad and she could have been sent to juvie for vandalism, but to me, I'm just like, taking her future away as her mother is just like next level cruel. And it just makes me think back to when she was talking to Simón about how that was the only thing that was keeping her going, and it's just so incredibly heartbreaking. But speaking of Simón, let's check in on how he's doing. So he confides in Nico and Pedro about how he was a fool to trust her, but Pedro argues that the fool was the one who fooled him and not himself. And Nico agrees with this, saying that all he wanted was to help her. But he argues that they, along with Hasmin and everybody else, all warned him not to trust her, but he, like a fool, trusted her anyways. And then we come to see where Amber's at. And I think out of all of the situations that she's been in this season, this one is probably one of the hardest ones to be without friends for. So instead, we see her crying by herself in her room before she gets up to her mirror and tells herself to stop. She tells herself that it doesn't make sense for her to cry, especially not over a boy. She then goes on to laugh at herself for actually thinking that he could be in love with her. If he was, he would have forgiven her, but he didn't. She then decides that she can never let her emotions control her ever again. She insists for the final time that Simón was a part of her plan, nothing more, and gets upset with herself for actually falling for him, calling it a mistake that she will have to pay for. She then tells herself that it's fine because she learned her lesson, and now she can think clearly and control her emotions like she used to.
Al final, tu madrina tenía razón. Nunca tenés que dejar que los sentimientos te dominen. Simón era parte de un plan, nada más. ¿Cómo? No puedo creerlo, me causa gracia. ¿Cómo pudiste enamorarte?
So as heartbreaking as it is to see Amber like this, I also feel like it's so hard to watch her come so close to the right conclusion and then miss it altogether. First of all, I don't agree with her logic of Simón not actually loving her because he didn't forgive her, because I feel like his actions are proving even more so that he did love her, because now he's feeling that he fell for her lies and doesn't understand how he could have been so stupid, which is just even more so a confession of his feelings. And also, love doesn't always necessarily mean immediate forgiveness, especially not when the actions are as extreme as they were here. She also says that she learned her lesson, which is that she can't let her emotions control her ever again. But I personally feel like the real lesson is that she messed up and now she has to own it, because that's the only way that she would have actually been able to prove that she did change, by taking accountability for it. But instead she was like, all right, you guys think I'm terrible? Okay, I'm gonna be terrible then. And honestly, I just feel like it's so sad that she doesn't have any friends that are able to say any of this to her right now. Like, I know that she's in this situation because of her own actions, but it's still sad and you can't deny that. So this is also when she comes up with the idea of aligning with a new character, which is Amelia. So she is someone that we met at their last competition, as she is a part of their rival team, which is the Sliders. And so she joins this team with the intentions of getting revenge on the roller and beating them in the finals. But now it is time for some weird little plot points as we wrap up this season. So in the following episode, Simón finds a love letter on his locker that he assumes is from Amber, and then he tears it apart. We see Simón coincidentally run into Amber in the park in the same spot where they broke up. And by coincidentally, I mean on purpose, because nothing about Simbar is coincidental as far as I'm concerned. She asks why he's not at rehearsals, and he snaps back by saying that he doesn't have to explain anything to her. She understands that and says that it's very clear as to how things are between them. He then retorts that it doesn't seem that way, and so he wants to clarify. He says that they are no longer friends, teammates, or have any connection between the two of them, and says that he doesn't want to receive any more gifts from her. She obviously doesn't know what he's referring to, and so he tells her about the note that he received on his locker. She then informs him that she did not leave anything for him and says that she never would. That she tried to explain things to him, but he didn't listen to her, and so he disappointed her as well. Obviously, he doesn't see how he could also be in the wrong, and so she tells him to relax and says that she doesn't want anything to do with him. He tells her the same and says that he will never trust her again before leaving.
Yo no te mandé ninguna carta, Simón. Jamás en mi vida hubiese hecho eso. Yo intenté hablar con vos. Intenté explicarte las cosas y no quisiste. No me escuchaste. Vos también me decepcionaste.
¿Yo?
Sí, vos me decepcionaste. Y quédate tranquilo porque a mí no me interesa arreglar nada con vos.
Está perfecto.
No me interesás.
Bueno, y tú también quédate súper tranquila porque yo no voy a confiar en ti, ¿ok?
So I feel like that was basically just a rehash of their breakup. I mean, they're in the same spot, the endings are almost identical, and it almost brings you right back to that initial breakup scene and makes you want to cry all over again. But what I do love is how she calls him out as well this time. And even though he's kind of in shock by this and doesn't believe it, I do hope that this is something that he thinks more about later on. But now that Amber kind of has a friend in Amelia, we don't see her talking to herself anymore, which is why I don't think we get any mirror scenes that I can think of in the following season, which I've often wondered what the reason for that was, but now that I realize that they were basically just a device for Amber to be able to talk to somebody, I understand more so why they didn't really need that in the next one, but I do still miss them nonetheless. So Amelia comes and asks Amber not to tell her that she's crying over a boy. But then Amber lies and says that it's just allergies, and that Simón is just a person who reminds her of an Amber that doesn't exist anymore. Amelia then notes that he makes her very nervous and hopes that she can control that by the time that they come to face them. So obviously Amelia is not a very good role model for Amber, as this is just another person to add to the list of people telling her to control her feelings. But now it is time for Luna to find out about Simón and Amber's kiss. So the following day, Luna finds Simón in the roller and he rants about Amber once again. He tells her that he thought he met a version of Amber that nobody knew, which I think that he did, but I understand that he probably doesn't want to hear that right now. He says that he trusted her and that he can't believe that she did all that she did. Then says that on top of all of that, he kissed her. Luna is shocked by this, and then he clarifies that he obviously kissed her before he knew about any of this, and then he continues talking about how hurt he is, that he thought that they had something special and that they could help one another.
Y aparte yo le di un beso a esa persona, ¿entiendes?
¿Qué? ¿Se dieron un beso?
Sí. Sí, nos besamos. Obviamente yo no sabía nada de esto.
Wow.
Ya sé. Luna, es horrible porque yo confié en ella. O sea, yo pensé que ella y yo teníamos algo especial en común. Pensé que nos veíamos y no sé, como que nos admirábamos o yo sentía que ella me podía ayudar y yo a ella, ¿entiendes?
He then continues further, saying that he thought that their relationship was beautiful, and then suddenly it crashed into a wall. And I know that he's basically been repeating all of this since their breakup, but I do feel like that analogy is just so sad. So Luna is then able to compose herself from the shock of finding out that they kissed, and she chimes in advising him to not focus on the past and to live in the present instead. But he says that that's not easy when the person is in your heart like Amber is. But now let's get to Cancun. So a couple episodes later, after everybody arrives, Amber ends up running into Luna and Simón while she's on the way to do an interview with Amelia. Obviously, Amber is not supposed to be there as they don't know that she's competing as well. And so Amelia hides and Amber puts on her nice act. She says that she got there a few days ago and decided to go out skating. She then lies and says that she misses the roller, but she misses them even more. Luna is confused by this comment, asking if she knew that they would be there, but she says no and that she came to Mexico purely to support them in the final. She then wishes them the best before leaving. So just a couple things. I love how confused Simón looks during this entire interaction and he isn't even trying to hide it. And also I feel like I don't always value just how strong of a character Amber is. I know that Simón says it all the time, but I feel like it's demonstrated so well in this scene. Like I can only imagine that the events that transpired are still quite fresh for her. And so for her to put on a brave face and wish them well, even though it was an act to cover her true intentions, I still feel like that does speak volumes. Anyways, Simón tells Luna that he doesn't believe a word that she says, and Luna argues that she never fails to surprise them. But Simón retorts that those surprises are never good. Luna then encourages him to not be sad, but he says that he can't, that it's too hard for him and it hurts when he sees her, which just makes me feel so bad for him. But now Amber can't hide anymore as it's time for the roller team to discover why she's really there. So later that day, Simón, Luna, and Mateo run into Amber and Amelia. Amber panics and Amelia tells her to face them and that she can't hide anymore. So Luna asks Amber if she's with the Sliders and she confirms that she is. And I'm sorry, but just every time I say the Sliders, it just makes me think of hamburgers. I feel like it's just another example that they had absolutely no fluent English speakers advising them behind the scenes. That and roller track. Oh, and Mateo dedicating a full-on breakup song to Luna mid-relationship. Anyways, Amber rhetorically asks them if they really thought that she would stand there and do nothing while they kick her off the team, and tells them that now they have to deal with the consequences. And I think that Simón is just too hurt to say anything, which is why Luna and Mateo do all of the talking. So he says that he can't believe that she could do this to her friends, but then says that he can believe it because they're not friends. And Luna admits that she thought that she regretted her actions, but obviously she does not. But now it is finale time, which means it's time for some big events as far as the series is concerned. So the Sliders do end up beating Jam and Roller at the Roda Fest, but in bigger news, Luna finally discovers that she is Sol Benson. This causes Sharon to go into hiding and completely abandon her adoptive daughter, Amber, which is just so incredibly sad. Like, no matter what she's done, I feel like nobody deserves that. And then it's also like, this girl already felt like she was alone, and now the only mother figure that she's ever had is abandoning her. And then to add salt to the wound, we later see Simón confront Amber in the hallway. He solemnly congratulates her on winning and asks if that's what she wanted. She replies that it's what everyone wants, but not everyone gets. Simón isn't too sure that that's what winning is, and so she asks him what winning is to him. And he says that it's something very different, and that she may have won the award, but she lost him, every one of her friends, and the trust of so many people. He finishes by saying if that's winning to her, then congratulations, sarcastically clapping and telling her to enjoy it before leaving.
Pero me perdiste a mí. Perdiste a todos tus amigos. La confianza de un montón de personas. Si de verdad para ti eso es ganar. Felicidades. Disfrútalo.
Now, I really like this scene because I feel like Amber has been putting on such an act in these past 2 episodes, but I feel like in this moment, she breaks. This is the moment where I feel like he's finally able to get through to her, and it hurts. It is painful to watch, but I feel like it's so necessary. Afterwards, Amber goes into her dressing room and ends up throwing everything on the ground in her rage. She then smashes the mirror in front of her with a hairbrush before talking to it one last time. She says that she's going to get everything back from Luna, including Simón, and that the Amber that everybody knew is gone. Finishing it off by saying that you have nothing to lose when you have nothing left.
Voy a recuperar mi pista, mi casa. Ya, Simón, se terminó. Se terminó la ámbar que todos conocían. No te queda nada, así que no tenés nada por perder. Ya está. Que se preparen. Van a conocer mi verdadera cara.
Now talk about a great moment and a great response to the scene that we just saw. The breaking of the mirror signifying the end of an era, and truly being the perfect intro to the Amber that we see in season 3. I feel like it's the perfect finale for Amber and just gets you filled with anticipation for what's to come. But before we get to that, I feel like I do have to give a special shout out to the non-canon Footloose scene that happens at the end of this episode. Simón and Amber share a few moments during it, which is why I can only assume that it is non-canon, as I don't think that they would be happily dancing together after everything that just transpired. But now that we wrapped up season 2, it is time for us to go into our final season of the series, which I do kind of enter a little bit solemnly. Honestly, season 2 Simbar is where it's at for me personally. I feel like they were the most compelling in the second season, and there was just something special about them that I feel like they weren't able to replicate. I mean, they say it all the time, you could never beat the original, and I feel like this is one of those cases. But on to season 3, where Simón forgets everything he just said to her and does a classic Soy Luna season reset. Alright, so in season 3 we have the introduction of Dark Amber, and so I thought it would be only fitting that I would change the ambiance here to match. And that is definitely the only reason for this change, and it's not that I wanted to have this look throughout the entirety of the video and then accidentally left the overhead lights on when I filmed the first half. First off, we see Luna's family return from Cancun and confer that Amber's godmother has fled. We also see Amber return on her own with her new and improved goth look. Before we were kind of hinting to this transition, but now it is just in full swing. And so she's back now and ready to make some changes. The first thing on her agenda is adjusting her room to fit her new style. So she begins with her old duvet. We see her toss it over the staircase and then it accidentally falls on Simón as he enters. So she runs downstairs to get it off of him, and then the two of them end up close together during the shuffle. Simón explains that he came to see Luna, and Amber explains that she's trying to get rid of things that she doesn't need anymore. And she feels as though a few changes in her life will do her some good. He hopes that those changes are positive ones, as he knows that she's going through a hard time right now, and tells her that if she needs someone to talk to, he's there for her. But she retorts that she doesn't need anything from anyone and is very capable on her own. But Simón doesn't back down from this and tells her that she doesn't have to be so stubborn, that he knows her well and knows that there's a nice person behind all of that makeup and dark clothing. But she just laughs in response and says that that's just what he wants to believe. But she tells him not to get it wrong and that this is who she is and that this is the real Amber. He still disagrees with this, and so she says that she knows very well who she is. She then steps closer, asking if he's just afraid to accept that he has feelings for someone like her before she walks off.
Esta que ves acá es la verdadera Ámbar.
Tú no eres esto.
¿Estás segura? Yo sé muy bien quién soy. ¿Qué pasa, Simón? ¿Te da miedo aceptar que te pasan cosas con alguien como yo?
So honestly, these Simbar scenes from the early episodes of this season used to really bug me, because when watching the show, especially in a binging format, I was always quite discouraged by how quickly of a 180 turn Simón makes. Last time we saw them, he was fake applauding her and telling her that she won the competition, but she lost him, and he was honestly quite hostile with her in general, whereas now he's empathizing with her, offering her help, and claiming to know the real her. He even gets a bit flirty with her later on in this episode, and so before I was like, when did this change happen? But now I'm more so of the belief that there are just a lot of things here that remain unsaid. Like, Simón is a nice guy and he's not the type to be vindictive, at least I don't think he is. And also from his perspective, he has since learned that she's been abandoned by her mother and was lied to by her about who she really was. And so now he can really see and understand that she's acting out now because she's overcompensating for the hurt that she feels on the inside. And I can only imagine that this has all helped him realize that the girl that he got to know in the last season is who she really is underneath it all. Now, it would have been nice to see this happen over the course of this season instead of it all happening off screen and making the viewers kind of jump to their own conclusion. But I also feel like I have to remember that when this show was airing, there was still a significant time gap in between the seasons. And so if they would have had Simón come into this season like still angry out of his mind and ready to fight, it probably would have been quite off-putting to the viewers. Because from their perspective, it's already been a few months and they've already gotten over what she did by now. That is just my own 2 cents though, and I do understand if that is something that still bothers you, because it does still bother me sometimes as well. Especially when their arc gets so repetitive over the next few episodes. Like, I do wish that we could have seen Simón slowly starting to forgive her instead of him just like immediately being there at the start of the season. But let's continue on. So Alfredo, who is Luna's now biological grandfather, decides to host a party in celebration of them being reunited. Amber invites Amelia over to this party and she tells her that she couldn't think of anything worse than staying there. That is until she turns to go and Simón ends up blocking her path. He asks her if she's leaving already, and so she asks him why she she would stay. And then Simón replies kind of flirtatiously saying to dance with him. He then puts his hand out to her and teases her, asking who's the one that's afraid now. Ámbar smirks at this in reply, and then he grabs her hand, taking her away to dance with him.
¿Qué onda? ¿Ya te vas?
Sí, sí, obvio, ¿para qué me voy a quedar acá?
Pues para bailar conmigo. Ahora, ¿quién es la que tiene miedo?
Okay, so I know that I just went on about how this shouldn't bug me, but this moment still does, just like a little bit more than the last one. I think because it does feel like a little bit more flirtatious than the previous moment did, and that kind of feels like a bigger step for Simón to make. But at the same time, I also understand that the kids wanted their Simbar content, and so they had to deliver. And I also kind of see this moment as Simón kind of challenging her in response to how she challenged him in the earlier scene. I also love seeing them slow dance together to an orchestra arrangement of Eres and Quédate. I honestly feel like it's very Bridgerton of them, and I wish we could have gotten these versions on streaming. But moving on to episode 2, so like I mentioned previously, Ámbar has a friend now, and so instead of hearing her talk to her mirror about this interaction, we see Amelia question her about it. Ámbar tells her not to get it twisted and that there's nothing going on between the two of them, but Amelia just retorts that it's nothing that she wants to admit. She then tells her that she's told her 1,000 times to control her feelings, and asks her if she wants to be the same as before, warning her further to be careful and not go falling in love. So once again, not a very healthy relationship for Ámbar to be in, and while she might not be talking to her mirror anymore, she's kind of in the same position where she's just having someone tell her to keep her feelings bottled up. I would even argue that it's a worse position because it's even easier to disobey yourself than it is to disobey someone else. But moving on to Simón and his friends as Nico and Pedro talk about Amber's outburst at the party, as she basically just let all of their family laundry out to dry, announcing to everybody how quickly they're all trying to erase Sharon from existence. Which, like, to be fair, she wasn't exactly wrong about, but it was still very disrespectful to Luna. So Simón then admits that he feels bad for her. Nico then asks how he could defend her after all that she said, but he argues that he's not, and that it's just that Ámbar is alone, asking them if they hadn't realized that. Pedro then asks him if he's speaking out of pity for her or if he still has feelings for her, and Simón doesn't answer. So I really like this scene, and I feel like it explains more as to what Simón is processing in regards to his feelings towards Ámbar and why he's empathizing with her. Moving on to the following day where we get this great moment. Basically, Simón finds Ámbar walking in the same direction as him and comments on how that's a coincidence. He then tells her that he wants to talk about what happened last night. She tells him that she's not in the mood for one of his life lessons and asks that he keep his comments to himself, and so to grab her attention, he then steps in front of her, telling her that what she did last night wasn't cool. And I really like this. I like how even though he was defending her yesterday, he's still not excusing it. But instead, he's taking the time to talk to her directly about it. So Ámbar argues that all she did was tell the truth, that since they got back, nobody's paid any attention to her. Her godmother disappeared and nobody knows where she is, but instead they chose to organize a party, which felt super inappropriate to her. And again, I'm not saying that Ámbar is wrong here because I agree with everything that she's saying, but I do still think that there are better ways to go about this, which is kind of what I feel like Simón's point is as well. And so he tries to show her the other side of things. He asks what part of her grandfather finally finding out the truth and Luna finally finding out about her past is a facade. But then Ámbar asks if anyone thought about her, if anyone thought that maybe she wouldn't have anything to celebrate. Simón then admits that he hadn't thought about it that way, but understands that she's been affected too. And then Ámbar goes on to tease him for saying that she's right. He argues that he's not saying that, just that he understands her. She then questions him further, asking if he's a little bit on her side, but he argues that there are no sides. She doesn't agree with this, but admits that it doesn't matter because she likes that he understands her. And then things take a little bit of a turn as Ámbar takes a step forward, asking if deep down he still has feelings for her before turning away. But then it's as she walks off that this time he calls after her, asking if maybe she's the one who likes him, which is why she asked him that.
¿No será que muy, pero muy en el fondo, a vos te siguen pasando cosas conmigo?
O tal vez yo te gusto a ti y por eso me preguntas eso.
Ámbar then caves in response to this and does come back. He then says that he wanted to tell her that what she did wasn't okay, and that she thinks that she's hurting others when in reality she's just hurting herself. He then hopes that she won't do what she always does this time, but at the end of the day, the choice is hers. And I just love this. I love how he's not just like whining about how she needs to change, but instead he's turning things on her and saying that she needs to realize that all of these behaviors are just hurting herself. And then of course I also like how she checks him out before leaving. It's very early season 1 Simbar of her. Now I do think that this moment has an effect on her because in the following episode we see her have her only mirror conversation in this season. She basically just gets mad at herself for talking to her mirror again and says that that's over and that she's a totally different person now. And also something of note during this scene is that laying on her chair is the shirt that she wore during her and Simon's first almost kiss, which I think was done to maybe reference that she's going through the same thing now that she was back then, but this time she's just coping with it very differently. But now I have some bad news, as it is unfortunately time for Benici-no to return. And he's actually even worse than he was in the last season, if you can believe that. And I honestly think that what makes him even worse this time around is that last time he came, he did his damage, and then he left. Whereas this time he's here to stay and is just so incredibly insufferable in the process. But anyways, he's back and he can skate now, and so he joins the Red Sharks. And if you're wondering what the Red Sharks are, basically Nico's uncle has returned and taken over the Jam and Roller. And he has turned their former skating team into the new and improved Red Sharks team led by Amelia and Ámbar. In episode 5, Simón watches the couple skate together and is not happy about it. And then in the following episode, we get a little bit of a confrontation. Basically, Benici-no pulls Ámbar close as he sees Simón walk by, and Simón tells him that nobody here is going to fall for his tricks. But then he retorts that somebody here, referring to Ámbar, likes them. Simón then argues that those kind of games always end badly, looking to Ámbar as he says that they all know that. And then once Simón leaves, Ámbar pushes Benici-no off of her, which I honestly think is the perfect demonstration of their relationship throughout this season. He's basically just a tool for her to use to make Simón jealous, and that's pretty much it. Then we have a bit of an interesting moment where Ámbar basically tries to convert Simón to the dark side, which I think we all know is never going to happen, but I like her attempt nonetheless. So Ámbar finds Simón in the roller and can tell once again that he's upset about something. She asks if it's because of the roller team and then admits that she thinks that he should join the Red Sharks. He obviously says no to this, and then she admits that she does care a little bit about him, or else she wouldn't be there trying to help him. But then he argues that her asking him to join the Red Sharks isn't helping. She then offers up an interesting perspective when she asks him why he always thinks that she's the one in the wrong. She then asks if it ever occurred to him that maybe it was the other way around. She says that he always wants to do the right thing and what he thinks is good for others, when it really would be more honest for him to act on what he feels. And like, I don't know, I kind of like this argument. Like, really all Gary has done is change their team name and invite a bunch of people to be on that team that they don't like. I know Ámbar and Benici-no have done some bad things in their past, but like, if the Jam and Roller crew really wanted to skate, I really don't see what's the problem with them joining the Red Sharks. But Simón still remains strong, saying that he wouldn't be able to sleep at night if he knew that he was doing something that hurt others. Ámbar then says that that itself is the problem, that he always thinks of others first, and that sometimes he has to think about himself and be a little bit selfish. She then asks him who gets to decide between what's right and what's wrong, and if he really doesn't want to be on her side. But unfortunately, Simón doesn't get to answer this question, as he then notices Luna approaching them. Although, to be fair, he probably would have just given the same answer as usual.
Pues yo no podría dormir pensando que le estoy haciendo daño a otras personas.
Claro.
¿Sí?
No, es que ahí está el problema. Es que vos siempre pensás en el resto antes que en vos. Y eso no está bien, Simón. Tenés que ser un poco egoísta. ¿Quién dice qué está bien y qué está mal? Dale. ¿De verdad me vas a decir que no te gustaría estar de mi lado?
So Ámbar asks him what's wrong, and if he doesn't want to answer her in front of Luna, he says that he doesn't have anything to say, but then she continues to instigate with him. He then asks her to stop a bit more firmly, and then she retorts that he's cute when he's angry. And to be honest, I do really like this dynamic. Like, I find a flirty, evil Ámbar to be quite fun. And as I touched on during my outline of the scene, I do feel like Ámbar brings up some good points here. And I do wish that Simón was more capable of seeing things as not so black and white. Maybe he needs to watch the new Descendants movie, I don't know. I do agree with Ámbar when it comes to his like this is wrong and this is right perspective not always necessarily being the right thing for him. Though I'm not too sure him joining the Red Sharks would have been what was right for him either. But I also wouldn't see anything wrong with him like at least considering it. Moving on to episode 8, where Amber sees Luna and Simón practicing for the upcoming Open. She then goes on to hallucinate the two of them performing a hard rock song instead. It's honestly a great music video with the both of them entering on motorcycles and having some of the most intense sexual tension that I have ever seen on a kids show. There's also lots of up close singing and jacket grabs that will probably stay with me until the day I die. Afterwards, Simón asks if she's okay and then she's snapped back into reality. Now, before we move on, I kind of have to bring up this really weird subplot that is currently going on. So basically, Luna is going through some problems with Matteo, which is really nothing new. But during this, she has gone on to develop some very confusing feelings for Simón. I assume they're just out of the appreciation for how supportive he's been to her throughout all of this, but she's gone on to confuse those feelings for romantic ones. So in episode 10, we see Amber interrupt the two of them right as Luna's about to confess these feelings to him. Amber then asks if she should leave the two of them alone, but Simón says that they were just rehearsing and Luna goes forward in excusing herself. Once she leaves, Amber questions what's going on between the two of them, but he laughs and says that they were just rehearsing. Anne goes on to say that they're more connected now than ever. This causes Amber to ask if they have the same connection that the two of them have, as she admits that she doesn't skate with anybody else like she skates with him, stating again that it's too bad that he's not on their team as they would make a good pair. And he basically says that that's yet to be seen before wishing her a good night and kissing her on the cheek.
No, ámbar. Estábamos ensayando y estamos más conectados que nunca y yo estoy súper contento por eso.
¿Ah, sí? ¿Y tenés la misma conexión que tenés conmigo? Porque yo no patino con nadie tan bien como patino con vos. Qué lástima que no estás en mi equipo. Haríamos una pareja muy linda.
Eso está por verse. Buenas noches, ámbar.
So once again, we have Amber trying to recruit Simón to the dark side. We also get a little bit of jealous Amber in there, which I personally always enjoy. But now it is time for our first real almost kiss of the season. So Juliana is now the coach of the Red Sharks, and so she asks Simón to do a move with Amber so that Benny can see how it's done. Once they get to the rink, Simón asks Amber if this is one of her great ideas, but she doesn't answer him, instead asking if skating with her bothers him that much. This back and forth doesn't last too long though, as they both agree that they don't have much time and go on to do the routine. And then in perfect Simbar fashion, they do the routine flawlessly and end with the two of them face to face. They then both lean in for a kiss before they are interrupted by Benicio's arrival. Now, I personally find this almost kiss to be quite comical because like a few of their almost kisses, I'm not even sure if you could call them almost kisses because their lips are practically touching. And then I also like how afterwards when Benicio asks if he's interrupting them, they both like look at each other and try to hold back their laughter. Later on in this episode, we also have our first open of the season. Simón performs a song that he wrote about Amber called Tiempo de Amor, which talks about him being in love with somebody who's very cold and distant to them, and he just wishes that they would just give in to their love. And of course, throughout this performance, Amber has some great reactions to this song. And then on the flip side of this, she is then unhappy to see him perform his song with Luna. And speaking of Luna, that other weird plotline also comes to an end after their performance. So Luna and Simón meet in the dressing room and she freaks out to him about having to confess something. He then tells her that he has something to confess to her as well, and then he admits that some really strong things have been happening to him and that he has to say them out loud or else his heart will explode. He then breaks the news to her that he is in love with Amber, if that even classifies as news, because I feel like everybody knows this at this point.
Me están pasando cosas súper fuertes. Y siento que lo tengo que decir en voz alta, porque si no, el corazón me va a explotar.
Wow. Simón, es que en serio yo siento lo mismo. Bueno, bien rápido, dime.
Bueno, es que estoy enamorado, Luna. Muy.
Sí.
Sí, de ámbar.
So I know a lot of fans really like this scene as they see it as Luna kind of getting her comeuppance, if you will, especially after everything that happened between the two of them in the first season. But looking at it from a Simbar standpoint, this is the first time that we've seen Simón confess his feelings, or I guess the first time in this season, and I just love that it only took him about 10 episodes to do so. And also just how happy he is to share this news to Luna despite everything that's going on, but at the same time he also isn't blind to it. So he says that he knows that Amber might not be the ideal girl, but he argues that we all make mistakes, and when someone has a beautiful heart, then they deserve a second chance. He then promises that Amber can change and feels as though he can help her, which is kind of like giving me some PTSD to the previous season. Afterwards, Luna goes and tells Nina about Simon's feelings, and the rumor mill herself, Jasmine, overhears them talking about a forbidden love. The next day, we see the couple back on the rink doing the same routine as before. Simón then comments on how many times they've gone over it, and Amber uses Juliana as an excuse, because she told the both of them to rehearse it for Benicio. But then they both go on to note that he's not even there. Simón then goes on about how much he doesn't want to be there and all the other things that he has to do, and she basically calls his bluff, saying that she thinks that he loves having this excuse to spend time with her. And then he does what he does best in this season, which is throw that back at her. And I find this little back and forth to be quite funny, as obviously they're both right and they just don't want to admit it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been doing that routine over and over again when they actually didn't need to. And then Amber tries to recruit Simón once again. She says that she likes skating with him more than anyone else, that they connect really well, and that it would be incredible for the two of them to share the rink once again. Simón agrees with this, but says again that that will never happen because he's not on their team. She then challenges him on this, saying that what he feels and what he does are two separate things, and then he goes on about how he's not lying and that he speaks the truth, which is something that she's probably not used to, and then she gets annoyed with him, telling him to hush. He then goes to leave, but she yells at him to wait because she wanted to congratulate him on the open. She then asks when the two of them are gonna have the chance to sing together, and he's quick to say never. She laughs at this and then asks if he's scared as she takes a step closer, asking him to look her in the eye and tell her that he has no desire to do a duet with her. He then takes a step even closer to her, asking if she wants to know what he wants. She then looks down to his lips as we fade to black.
¿Cuándo vamos a cantar juntos nosotros?
Nunca.
Ay. ¿Por qué? ¿No me tenés miedo, Simón? Mírame los ojos y decime que no te morís de ganas por hacer un dúo conmigo.
¿Quieres saber de qué tengo ganas?
So I really like that we see this scene happening after we already know about Simon's feelings for her. I mean, we already knew about them before as well, but it's a bit different now that he's actually said them out loud. Because now we know for sure that he is just overcompensating here. We see this when he's trying to hide the reason as to why he's rehearsing with her when he really doesn't need to be, and then how quickly he tries to deny that he doesn't want to do a duet with her. So then we come back from our commercial break and Simón tells her that she has no limits. He says that he just wants the best for her, and then she gets exhausted by him basically trying to therapize her again. He argues that he's just trying to give her advice as someone who, and then trails off before he settles on someone who wants the best for her, and says that she's too busy spending time with people who hurt her without realizing that he's the one who's there to help her. She acts tired by this speech once again before deciding to tell him what she wants, which is for him to stop lying and admit that he doesn't want to be her friend and that he actually wants to be much more than that. And I personally feel like Simón couldn't handle this truth bomb, as he doesn't respond to her and skates off the rink instead. But even though Simón didn't answer this question, Amber basically uses this moment to confirm his feelings for her. We see this later that day when she eavesdrops on a conversation between Juliana and Luna. She wants to know what they're planning and assumes that she can get Simón to tell her because he likes her. So Amber finds him in the lockers and pretends to not be able to get hers open. He then opens it for her and goes to leave, but she stops him. She then tells him that she actually needs his help with something else and asks if he can tell her what the roller team is planning. He says that he can't tell her, but she pushes further, saying that she'll keep it a secret, but Simón doesn't believe her and tells her that if she wants him to trust her, then she's going to have to put the work in as well. She then asks how she's supposed to show him that she's trustworthy if he doesn't give her the chance, and then she tries to play the victim by saying that he thinks that she's a monster just like everybody else. She then continues begging until Luna interrupts their conversation. So obviously I don't love seeing Amber like intentionally manipulating him here, and I feel like it's different in comparison to when she did it to him in the second season, because now they more so like mean something to one another. And it is smart to be like, how am I going to prove to you that I'm a good person if you don't give me the chance to? But what I do like is that Simón still stands his ground here, and he knows that he just can't trust her yet. I mean, he said it himself numerous times in the previous season that she lost his trust and she's gonna have to work a little bit harder than that to get it back. But remember earlier when Jasmine overheard Luna and Nina talking? So she posted a video speculating as to who the forbidden lovers at the roller could be. And then this causes Simón to get upset with Luna for telling someone else what he told her. This is then escalated the following day when Amber finds finds Simón in the lockers. She asks him what him and Pedro were talking about before she entered, but he says that he can't tell her. She then rants about Luna turning him against her, but he says that that's not true and says that he doesn't like her talking about Luna like that. She then apologizes begrudgingly and admits that she doesn't like talking about his friends like that either. But she then continues her scheme by grabbing his hand and getting close to him. She then tells him that she knows that he wants to trust her, but what they don't know is that Jasmine is actually filming all of this. And then she asks her audience if they could be the forbidden lovers.
Pero, no sé, me parece raro. Yo sé que vos me lo querés contar, ¿o no?
¿Serán ellos los protagonistas del amor prohibido?
So despite Amber continuing her manipulation here, I do like seeing her taking some accountability. I like seeing her grumpily apologize for bad-mouthing one of his friends, and I do believe that she is genuine in that. But before I move on, like, what was up with Jasmine commenting on the moment that they just shared, like, 2 feet away from each other? I don't think that that was necessary, and it was very much so a commentary that she could have just added in later. And I honestly just don't understand how they didn't hear that from 5 feet away. But what is also weird about this is that I can only assume that Jasmine never actually uploaded that video. And I'm not exactly too sure as to why, as I feel like that's very out of character for her, but there were no repercussions towards Jasmine in regards to any of this, and nobody goes on to question Simón or Amber about this moment either. So I just have to assume that it wasn't shared, and this could maybe be because of the events that she witnesses later. And speaking of those events, it is now unfortunately time for us to move on to our next chapter. So then we have a bit of a lull as unfortunately Benicio and Amber take the forefront. They share a kiss in episode 15 and afterwards Amber tells him that it didn't mean anything and that it won't happen again. Jasmine sees this kiss happen and so she decides to post a video saying that she saw them kiss and that they're together. Mateo shows this video to the guys and of course Simón is not happy about this new information. But at this point the Bembar rumor train has really taken off and Simón is basically handling all of that internally. That is until the next episode when he's finally had enough and decides to confront her himself. He asks her if it's true that she's going out with Benny and she retorts asking why he cares. He says that it's because he doesn't want her getting hurt and then repeats that again, almost like he's proud of himself for coming up with a reason that doesn't involve his feelings for her. He then goes on about how well he knows him and the type of person he is before Amber asks why he won't just admit that he's jealous.
¿Por qué? Me importa. Porque no quiero que te hagan daño. Por eso, ¿ok? Porque me preocupa. Eso, porque me preocupa. Es por eso. No es por otra cosa, es porque me preocupa. ¿Ok? ¿Sabes por qué? Porque yo lo conozco perfecto. Tú no. Yo lo conozco desde México, Ámbar. Y tú no. ¿Entiendes? Sí. Y él no es una persona que te conviene. ¿Entiendes eso?
Sí, perfecto. Siempre con la historia de México, de que lo conoces de antes. ¿Por qué no admitís que estás celoso y punto
porque
final?
No estoy celoso.
No estás celoso.
No estoy celoso.
100% seguro.
He then denies this, of course, insisting that he's just worried about her, and tells her not to get it confused. But she argues that she's not confused and knows exactly what she feels, and suggests that maybe she's with him because the guy that she actually likes isn't interested. This causes Simón to get serious as he sits down and says that he thinks that she doesn't know who she likes. Therefore, she doesn't know how she feels. She repeats that she knows very well what she wants and feels, and then tells him to watch as she gets up on stage and performs solos to him in a very campy moment. It does not take long for Simón to jump up on stage and perform it with her, letting all of their angst out and feelings for each other in song. And I just have to say it is always fun to see a jealous Simón, like that part never disappoints. But I don't like to think too much into it because then I just get sad to see her playing with him like this. And I also was confused by Simón saying that she doesn't know what she wants or feels, but I think that that just goes right back to how Simón would define love. And so from his perspective, if she really did love him, then she wouldn't be hurting him like she is now. And so I think that that's what he's getting at here, or he just actually thinks that she likes Benicio, and so that's what he was complaining about, but it's unclear. But this moment does not come without its consequences as both Luna and Benicio see the couple perform this duet. They end it face to face in a typical Simbar fashion, and then Benicio steps in telling him to watch it with his business partner. Simón then retorts that if anyone has to be careful here, it's Amber with him, and then he asks why he's so jealous. Amber then tries to separate them, saying that they don't have to fight over her, and of course Benny argues that he should tell Simón that, and that he has no reason to be jealous as he's the one that she kissed. Unless they don't believe Jasmine, and if that's the case, then he offers to show it to them live, which I feel like is just such a weird and just disgusting thing to say. And so Amber reacts to this, and Simón gets even more defensive, telling him that he doesn't see the relationship as having any any future anyways. And then this is when Luna steps in, breaking up their fight and taking Simón away. So I just love like every single time we see Simón stand up to Benicio and just not being afraid to call him out. And then I also really like how Ámbar is kind of situated behind him here. It almost shows that he's the one protecting her, which I feel like is a really nice touch. This then results in quite the scene between Luna and Simón. Basically, Luna is lecturing him on how all Ámbar wants is to play with his feelings, but Simón is more interested in the napkin dispenser than what Luna has to say. He then is able to use the napkin that he's fiddling with to demonstrate what it's like when he's with her, saying that his mind just goes blank. And I just absolutely love this moment so much, and it just makes me wonder if it was scripted or improvised because it just seems so random. Moving on to episode 19, where we get some great insight as to what Amber's going through. She receives a call from Sharon, and so Ámbar lets her know that she's sick of being left alone. She then begs her to come back and to get her out of that house. But unfortunately, Sharon is too clouded by her own desire for revenge that she's unable to see this cry for help from her daughter. And then this is when Simón comes in and does what he does best. He picks up the phone that she threw and hands it back to her, then asks if she's okay, and she doesn't respond. Instead, she pulls him in for a hug and asks him not to let her go. He says that he doesn't know what's going on, but tells her not to worry and that it's all going to be okay. He then pulls back and holds her face in his hands as he tells her that she's not alone, before she hugs him once again.
No me sueltes, Simón. Te lo pido por favor que no me sueltes.
Ámbar, no sé qué está pasando, pero no te preocupes que todo va a estar bien. No estás sola, de verdad.
Now, I just love this moment because it brings me right back to my favorite Simbar arc. I feel like it really was the foundation that their relationship was built on, and so seeing them go back to that here, I feel like was such a great move. And I also feel like it does a really good job of reminding us what Ámbar is going through right now, which I honestly wish that they could have focused even more on in this season, but I digress. Back to the episode though, Jasmine and Luna end up seeing this hug interaction happen, and Jasmine asks Luna if Simón and Ámbar are the forbidden love. And now I'm just confused all over again because I thought that Jasmine already confirmed that to herself way back in episode 13. I feel like it's definitely a plot hole, and it makes me wonder if it has something to do with them cutting out those 20 episodes at the end of the season. Anyways, Luna confirms that it is them, but begs her not to post about it online. Simón then interrupts the two of them and defends their hug by saying that they were just hugging as friends. And then of course, both of the girls warn him to be careful with her. We then have another scene in the following episode that is also very season 2 coded. Essentially, Simón brings Ámbar a drink and she tells him that she didn't order anything. He says that it's a gift as she was upset yesterday, and he wants to know how she's doing. She basically writes him off saying that she's great and that yesterday was nothing, and so he tells her that if she needs someone to talk to or to listen to her or to sing with her, that he's there for her. But she does not engage with this either, telling him to take the drink back with him as she doesn't like passion fruit and he should really know that.
Bueno, si necesitas que alguien te escuche, o necesitas hablar, o necesitas cantar, lo que sea, avísame, Ámbar. Yo estoy encantado en ayudarte, ¿ok?
¿Sí sabes qué es lo que necesito?
Dime.
Que te lleves esto. Odio el maracuyá, es nefasto, deberías saberlo.
Alright, so a couple things. First off, I feel like you guys know that I just have to comment on their location. It's the same spot in which they had all their other drink moments in the previous season, and I honestly feel like it was a little bit out of character for him to only bring her one. But I'm not really too sure how she would have engaged with that reference this time around, so I am kind of glad that he didn't do that. And then I also find it kind of funny just like how hard Simón is trying to do his old tricks here, and she's just like not falling for it whatsoever. In his mind, he's probably like, yes, she's vulnerable, and so this is my in. I know how to charm this Ámbar, like this is my specialty. Him bringing up singing together to cope and just how eager he was to help her was just everything to me. But I think her shutting him down here was just their way of showing that she's not quite there yet. And she's not going to be for quite some time, as now we have more Bembar. Yay! So in the following episode, we see them kiss again to generate attention to the red sharks, and afterwards, Ámbar makes it very clear to him again that she has no feelings for him and that their relationship is fake. And then of course, Jasmine films their kiss and posts it because I don't think this couple ever kissed without Jasmine around. And then also because of this, we see a sad Simón in episode 22. His friends of course tell him to forget about her, and Nico adds that sooner or later she's going to hurt him, but Simón says that she already did. Later that day, Ámbar finds Simón rehearsing in the dressing room, room. She tells him to keep going, but he says that he doesn't feel like playing anymore. He then asks her if she needs something, and then she asks him if he really doesn't know what she needs. And so obviously she's trying to continue their flirtation from before, but I feel like things have kind of changed for Simón after the release of Hasmin's video. And so he gets serious with her, asking her why she doesn't ask her boyfriend instead. Ámbar is then amused by his jealousy and tells him to relax as they're alone. And then he replies that they're not alone, she is, and then leaves.
Ay, no. Me muero. Ay, cómo me gusta que te pongas celoso. ¿Qué te pasa? ¿Tenés miedo de que nos vea Benicio? Tranquilo, Simón. Estamos solos.
No estamos solos. Tú estás solísima, Ámbar.
And now, despite their history and just how charged that comment is from Simón, I do also kind of understand where he's coming from. I feel like their back and forth flirtation was one thing, but now that she's brought someone else into the picture, he's basically just like making it clear that that's done now. And I feel like it doesn't help that she's now quote unquote dating someone that he constantly told her to stay away from. But he does pay for this comment in the following episode as they run into each other at her place. He asks her if she's okay, and she notes that he cares now. He argues that he did that because he's tired of watching her make the same mistakes, but then she retorts that this has nothing to do with Benicio. This of course just causes him to repeat that she needs to surround herself with people that are good for her and not people who hurt her. He then admits that it's super exhausting for him too, but she has to realize that she's on the wrong side. He then wishes her a good night before leaving. And then Ámbar, clearly frustrated with their conversation, angrily throws her purse on the table. And I feel like although Simón is kind of starting to sound like a broken record at this point, I can't ignore the fact that he is still right. Like, I do still agree with him. Amelia and Benicio are just really the worst influences on her, and I do feel like the sooner she distances herself from them, the better. And this moment kind of had me questioning if she knows that, but she just doesn't want to admit it to herself, which is why we see her get upset after their conversation. Or if she's just mad that Simón isn't on her side and she thought that she could like have her cake and eat it too kind of situation, where she could have this fake relationship with Benicio and still continue this flirtation with Simón, but now he's making it very clear that that is not going to be the case. But now it is time for our next open music. Gary has banned them from hosting it at the Jam and Roller, and so Luna has decided to host it at their house instead. And so of course the Red Sharks decide to try and sabotage it. So Simón finds Ámbar trying to disconnect something while they're all preparing for the open. He grabs her hand, stopping her, and asks her what she's doing. And then she retorts by asking him why he always distrusts her without any proof. And he apologizes but says that if something happens, he'll know who's responsible. He then asks her not to do anything because this open is very important to Luna. And I should mention that this whole time they've failed to remove their hands from one another, which I feel like is a nice touch. So then of course Benicio comes and asks him why he's holding his girlfriend's hand. Ámbar is then quick to let go, and Benicio asks Simón if he's trying to steal her from him. Simón then argues that Ámbar doesn't have an owner, so he can't steal her from anybody. And then of course the Red Sharks do end up doing something to sabotage the open. What a shocker. And then this is when I have to give another trigger warning for sexual assault in regards to non-consensual kissing once again. Basically, the Red Sharks put up a picture of Amelia assaulting Mateo after him and Luna share a kiss on stage. Luna is hurt to find out that Mateo and Amelia kissed, obviously not knowing the circumstances, and then she runs off stage heartbroken. This then brings us to episode 26, where Simón confronts the Red Sharks on their actions. He tells them that when people speak about his team online, they talk about their achievements as skaters, not about gossip or schemes. He then notes that it's not the same with the Red Sharks and calls out Ámbar specifically, saying that he remembers the girl who was a really talented skater and who loved being the best, and comments on how sad it is that now she settles for this.
¿Y tú? ¿Qué onda, Ámbar? Yo me acuerdo de la chica súper talentosa en el patín, que le encantaba ser la mejor. ¿Ahora te conformas con esto? Qué triste.
Now just talk about a mic drop moment. Simón is just like speaking straight facts in this moment, and I just love how he's able to remain so calm. He's not letting himself get worked up, but instead he's letting his words speak for themselves. And I feel like they just speak so incredibly loud because he is 100% correct. The Red Sharks have been going on and on for the past like 26 episodes about how great they are, when in reality they have actually yet to compete in anything. Instead, they've been wasting their time on scheming and creating drama that has nothing to do with skating. And this right here marks a real change for Ámbar Amber's character in this season as she realizes that Simón is right. She even goes on to tell her so-called friends this and emphasizes that they all need to bring their focus back to skating. And that is exactly what she does. And now we actually have to jump forward 10 episodes as we don't get any simbar during this time. Amber is too focused on changing and being a good skater, and this is also when the Red Sharks plan on making their debut as a team. But then unfortunately, this big event that they have planned ends up getting overshadowed by the roller team performing outside. And then this is basically what causes the Red Sharks team to collapse, which we will see more of moving forward. But then also during all of this, Luna ends up getting approached by a professional skater who leaves his number for her. The Red Sharks then steal this note and forge a new one for her, leaving her a fake number. And then when she does call, they have someone else answer it saying that he's on vacation. Now you may be thinking, Caitlin, why are you telling me all of this information? It does not seem very relevant to Simbar, but it will become relevant to them later on, so just try your very best to remember all of that. So then we have some more season 2 deja vu when Gary kicks the band out of the loft, but this time it's for real. But things have changed a bit since the previous season, as now Luna is the owner of the mansion. And so she invites Mateo, Simón, Pedro, and Nico to move in with her. And so then this brings us to a scene where we see Amber and Simón discussing their new living arrangements. Essentially, Amber finds Simón rehearsing in the living room and says that she can't believe that they ended up living together, and he agrees. She then admits that she likes it, asking if he does as well, and he admits that it depends, and that if things were different between the two of them, then he would like it a little more. She begs him to elaborate, and so he clarifies that things would have to change, that she thinks differently from him and vice versa, and so it's impossible. She admits that that may be the case, but nonetheless, she still likes an impossible love story. He argues that what she feels isn't love, which causes her to ask how he knows what she feels. He then goes to answer her, but then our boy Benicio interrupts at just the perfect time.
Honestamente, tú piensas diferente a mí, ¿no? Y yo también pienso diferente a ti, así que es como imposible, ¿o no?
Puede ser. Igual, a mí me gustan los amores imposibles. A todos, creo.
Es que lo que tú sientes no es amor de verdad, Ámbar. Perdón, pero...
¿Y cómo haces para saber qué es lo que yo siento?
So although Amber has made some progress in regards to her skating career, we can still see that her social life still needs some work. And I am so mad that this conversation keeps getting interrupted, because this isn't the first time that Simón has made comments on what he thinks that she feels. And I would really like him to finish describing how he sees her feelings. Like I said earlier, I feel like he's trying to get at the fact that if she really did love him, then she wouldn't be treating him like this. But it would still be nice to hear him actually say that instead of having to speculate it. But something else that I wanted to comment on in regards to this scene is them talking about living together, because it is just such fun circumstances, and a forced proximity plotline has just got to be one of my favorite things. In episode 38, we see them having breakfast together. They then both reach for the same piece of toast, and then it turns into a bit of a flirtatious moment. They then go back and forth about who grabbed it first, and Amber says that now that they live together, he needs to be nice to her. But then he argues that it's the other way around, as now he's her guest. So she agrees that she will if he gives her the piece of toast. He flirtatiously asks what happens if he doesn't, and then they continue until Pedro interrupts.
Yo creo que a ti te conviene llevarte bien conmigo, porque yo soy el invitado, ¿o no? Y a los invitados hay que tratarlos bien, ¿o no?
Claro, claro. Yo puedo tratar muy bien a mi invitado de honor si me da la tostada. Por favor, en serio, me la quiero comer de verdad, es la que más me gusta.
¿Y si no qué?
¿Me estás desafiando vos?
Now this is just such a great moment, and it's honestly just like a breath of fresh air to see them share one like this in this season. I feel like this is the first truly positive moment that we've seen between the two of them since like season 2. But moving on, we have seen a lot of jealous Simón in this season, but what we haven't gotten to see much is a jealous Amber, but that's all about to change with the introduction of our new character, Emma. So later that day, we see Amelia and Amber at the roller. She calls Simón over, and then the girls go back and forth about what to order. Pedro then comes over to the three of them and interrupts them, introducing Simón specifically to Emma. And to explain where she came from, I kind of have to give a little bit of context. So the roller band, as we know, previously consisted of Simón, Pedro, and Nico. But then in the previous episode, Nico moved to New York with his girlfriend Ada. So Pedro introduces Emma, saying that she's a friend of Ada's, and I think that we're supposed to believe that she's from New York, as her Spanish really isn't very good. But I'm really not too sure as to why she's here to meet Simón specifically. I mean, maybe Ada was just trying to set the two of them up, but like I really don't know. But I think we're supposed to believe hear that Simón has somewhat of an interest in Emma because of how long he stares at her. But I personally don't think he ever really was interested in her. I mean, just like look at his absolute blank stare here. Like I can tell you for a fact that he's never looked at Amber that way. I think we all know who he has feelings for at this point, and it's definitely not the random girl who doesn't speak Spanish. But then another big turn comes for Amber in this episode as Gary leaves and puts Amber in charge of the roller. And I think this newfound responsibility is another aspect that allows Amber to change. Or maybe not change, because like I said before, I don't really like that word, especially in relation to Amber, but it definitely allows her to smarten up for sure. But this newfound authority does also cause some tension between the couple, as now Amber is Simón's boss. The following morning at breakfast, she asks why Simón and Pedro aren't at the roller. They explain that it doesn't open till later, but she says that they're going to be opening it earlier now. Simón is confused by this as nobody comes in that early, but she says that that's the point, as she wants them there earlier to get it ready. They argue with her again, saying that they do all their prep to get ready the night before, and Amber really starts to get upset with them. She tells them that they should do what she says as she's their new boss, and Simón asks if she's threatening them and if she's going to be like this all the time, because if that's the case, then he's going to quit. She doesn't believe him in this threat, but tells him to let her know if he does, because then she's going to have to look for his replacement.
¿Va a ser así siempre entonces?
¿Así como?
Sí, como que si no hacemos lo que tú quieres, entonces todo está mal.
No sé. ¿Y si es así, qué?
Es probable que renuncie.
Ah, sí, claro, no te animarías. Qué asco, está helado esto. Bueno, avísame si renuncias porque tengo que buscar a otra persona y todo eso, ¿ok?
So I love this moment and I love this development. I feel like it creates a very new and interesting power dynamic for the couple, and I love that Amber isn't giving Simón any favoritism whatsoever. But at the same time, I do think that Simón and Pedro are right here. I mean, they've been working at the roller for years now, and Amber is new to this and she's never been in a management position, so I feel like it would have been smarter for her to listen to them in this situation. But at the same time, I also get where she's coming from, as she's just stepped into this new role, and so she wants to make some changes and prove herself. Later on, we see Simón and Pedro rehearsing at the roller, and they invite Emma to rehearse with them. Amber watches over this annoyed and then snaps at Eric, who is another employee, for applauding them instead of working. She then tells the guys to get back to work, and then Simón goes over to talk to her. He tells her that they always rehearse at this time, but she retorts that things are changing. And then she asks if he's going to keep working there or not. He tells her that he'll leave right now if she doesn't change her attitude, and she argues that not everything is how he thinks it is. She then finishes by telling him that she wants to talk to everybody today, as she has something important to share with them. So everybody gathers together, and she informs them that they're going to be hosting a retro theme open tomorrow. This is being done to unite both teams as one and to squash the rivalry. She thinks that now that Gary has left, they can start over, and that there's no point in fighting anymore. And overall, I think that this is great. I feel like it shows that Amber is turning over a new leaf and wanting to bring the roller back to its former glory, and I also don't think that it's coming out of nowhere. I think that Simón planted the initial seed when he basically told the Red Sharks to smarten up, and I think that now she's decided to use her power for good, which is probably something that not many expected. But before we can get to that, Amber does first have to clean up some mistakes of her past. So after a run-in with Benicio, Simón goes to talk to Amber. She asks if he wants to congratulate her on the open, but he retorts that if she's doing this that they'll all fight with one another, then her plan is working perfectly. He then expresses how impossible it is to work with Benicio, and she reassures him that she'll talk to him. He then pulls out the list of songs that Benicio gave to the guys, and also pulls out the note that Luna got from that professional skater. He then notes that both of the handwriting on each note is identical and asks Amber if she knows anything about this. He then flat out asks if they're the ones that did it. Amber then struggles in her reply, basically confirming that she did, and Simón gets upset with her. He tells her that what they did was terrible, but then she throws it back on them, saying that they're the ones who ruined their festival. Simón replies that they didn't and that Luna doesn't deserve this, but she doesn't see it that way and argues that they took an opportunity from them, and so now they're even. And now he knows that she's angry, which is why she can't see things for what they are, but he asks her to open her eyes. Amber argues that it's not about that, and that from her perspective, Luna is at fault, adding that she can't control that she's full of rage. And so then he comes closer to her, saying that he knows that she can control it, that the Amber that he likes knows that what she did is wrong. Amber then starts to doubt herself, and then he tells her that that's the first step. She is shocked that that's all it took, and then he tells her that he's going to give her the chance to make the second one. It's a bigger one and it's a harder one, but she has to talk to Luna. She says that she's not doing that, but he says that she is, that she's going to talk to Luna, she's going to tell her the truth and apologize. He then thanks her in advance, and she says that she can't believe this.
¿Cuál sería ese segundo paso?
¿Vas a hablar con Luna?
¿Qué?
Sí.
No,
Sí,
estás
sí,
equivocadísima, no, yo no voy a hacer
por
eso.
favor. Vas a hablar con Luna, le vas a contar la verdad y le vas a pedir una disculpa sincera. Gracias.
Ah, no lo puedo creer.
Bueno, yo sé que puedo confiar en ti.
So I absolutely love this scene, but there is one thing that I have to say, which is that I do kind of feel like Amber is right in a sense. They did ruin their festival, and they are the reason why the Red Sharks doesn't exist anymore. It wasn't intentional and it wasn't done maliciously, but those are the events that happened. And I do wish that Simón could have given that to her at least, but I feel like he probably sees what happened as being karma. And I do understand that his focus was trying to get Amber to see that what she did wasn't right. And now just talk about a change from the Amber that we've seen earlier on in the season, who was trying to like manipulate the trust out of Simón. I love that he's giving her this chance, and I feel like her actions leading up to this have proven that she is capable of doing this. And then of course I also love her denial in this moment that she can't even believe herself that she's going to do what he's asking of her. And now this issue basically takes precedent over every conversation that they have, at least for a little while. So that night he goes to her room and she teases him, asking if he came for a goodnight kiss, but he says no and asks if she talked to Luna yet. She suggests that maybe he's using all of this just as a way to get closer to her, but then he gets serious, telling her that he's not joking. Then gets upset with her, asking when she's going to do it. She says that this is all very hard for her and that she has to find the right time, but he's not sure that he can give her more time as he's worried about his friendship with Luna and having to keep something like this from her. And so he says that if she doesn't tell her, then he will. And then Luna interrupts. She asks what he has to tell her, and then Amber covers for him, asking if she'll perform at the Open to represent the girls. Simón then asks Amber if there's anything else she has to say to Luna, but she says no. Then after Amber leaves, Luna comments on how much she's changed. So if I'm being honest, I don't really like seeing Simón pressure Amber into doing something that he asked her to do just a few hours before, but I feel like I can give him some grace because I do understand that he's stressed about his friendship with Luna being on the line. And then we get a little bit of a break from this conflict for some more Amber jealousy. So she sees Emma and Simón greet one another and then goes to interrupt them, going into boss mode, asking Simón if he can change the screens and do a sound check. He retorts that he was going to, and then she asks if he means right now, because right now he's talking to Emma and she doesn't understand why he's talking to her as they're not performing together. Emma defends herself by saying that she was just saying hi to him and then says hi to her as well, and Simón reassures her that it's all going to be fine. Amber argues that it's not because she has a million things to do. She then tells Emma to hurry up and that she should be in makeup, and she tells her this in English, which is quite funny. After Emma leaves, Simón smiles at Amber, telling her that she's all his. Amber then tries to cover up her jealousy by saying that she's not interested in interrupting his conversations, but she's stressed as this is her first event that she's hosting as manager. Simón then continues smiling at her and she asks why he's looking at her like that, but he brushes it off, saying that it's nothing, and asks her what needs to be done. Their conversation then continues and Simón requests that she step out of her boss mode for a second, but she argues that it's not a mode and that she is his boss, and so then he asks her as his boss if she's talked to Luna yet. She argues that she can't right now as she's stressed and has a million things to do. Mateo then interrupts them and Simón grabs her hand, telling her that everything's going to be fine, calling her boss one more time before leaving.
No, es que yo nunca dije eso tampoco.
Bueno, entonces usted, jefa, podría hablar con ella y decírselo.
No, es que ahora no. Ahora no, Simón, estoy muy estresada, tengo que hacer un montón de cosas. Mira lo que es
¿Qué
esto.
onda? Va a salir todo bien, jefa.
And now, honestly, I just love that we're back to positive Simbar territory again. I love seeing Simón tease her by calling her his boss, and then I also love her lip bite as she leaves. And now my only complaint, which is probably something that you're gonna hear me complain about even more throughout this episode, is that he's asking her to do this on like the busiest day possible for her. She literally just complained to him about how overwhelmed and stressed she is, and then he was like, let me add something else to her plate. As I have said already, I do understand where Simón is coming from and he's stressed about his own things, but I still feel like he needs to be patient with her as well. But now it is time for open music, where we have a very important Simbar scene. And for those of you who know what it is, I'm sure you are very happy that we finally made it here. 2 hours, maybe 3 hours later, I don't even know how long it's been at this point. So Amber goes searching for Benicio as he's up next to perform. Simón then follows her into the dressing room and asks her again if she's talked to Luna yet. She then asks him rhetorically if he really thinks that in the middle of an event that she's putting on, hosting, and performing in, that she has time to talk to Luna. But then he just argues that she always has the perfect excuse. And I'm just like, it's not an excuse, buddy. It's like the reality of the situation. Can you be more reasonable here, Simón? God. So she says that it's not an excuse and asks that he look at her, which I think is funny because she's in a full-on Sandy from the End of Grease getup. And so I'm 100% sure Simón has noticed what she looks like, but he still takes the opportunity to look her up and down here. Anyways, Simón argues that she could have talked to her yesterday or today before the Open, but she didn't. And so now he wants to know when she will. Amber then promises that the minute that the Open is is over, she will go and talk to her. He asks her why he should trust her, and then she asks him how long he's going to keep this up. That ever since she's become manager, all she's done is try to unite everybody, asking if that's enough for him to trust her or not. He agrees that she's right and apologizes, but repeats that Luna is his friend and that he can't keep something like this from her. And so he emphasizes again that if she doesn't tell her, then he will. She admits that she doesn't want it to get to that and asks that he give her the chance first. And so he agrees, but tells her the sooner the better before he goes to leave. And then this is when Amber stops him. She asks him to wait and confesses that she also wants to talk to him about something. She then asks about them and if they'll get another chance. And he is very short in reply, saying no, that they can't be together before he goes to leave again. But then this time she's able to stop him with her words, saying that no matter how he tries, even with all that he is, that he still can't help it. She then asks him to look her in the eyes and tell her out loud that he doesn't feel anything for her. He then admits that he's trying to, and then he kisses her.
Simón, mírame a los ojos y decime en voz alta, lo quiero escuchar, que a vos no te pasa nada conmigo.
Lo intento. O sea, intento que no me pase. Pero...
And now talk about a great kiss. I feel like this one is a fan favorite and it's 100% deserved. This one's probably my favorite Simbar kiss as well. I'm pretty sure I screamed the first time I saw it happen. I just love an unexpected kiss, and this is another moment where I feel like it gets even better in the second half of the scene, so let's get back to it. So then they break apart from their kiss and Simón starts to panic. He immediately apologizes and she asks why he's apologizing. He says that it's because she has a boyfriend, but then she insists that she doesn't have one and that Benicio gave himself that title on his own. That title and their whole relationship is a game that neither one of them actually takes seriously. But then Simón questions if Benicio does take it seriously and says that he's not going to play with his feelings. This upsets Amber and she sarcastically comments on him always having to do the right thing. She then tries to turn it back on him, asking why he kissed her if he likes Emma. He says that he doesn't like Emma and that he likes someone else. And then she gets close to him, leaning in for another kiss, asking him to tell her who he likes. He then takes a step back from her and she asks what's wrong, admitting that she really doesn't understand what's happening. He then grabs her face in his hands, admitting that he likes her, that he loves her. And then speaking of said boyfriend, that's not really her boyfriend, he then interrupts them. Another reason why Benicio is like #1 on my hate list.
¿Qué te pasa? No entiendo qué te pasa, de verdad.
Me pasa que me gustas tú, ¿ok? Que me encantas tú. Pero yo no quiero jugar este juego, porque tú tienes novio, Ámbar. Y ya, y...
¿Qué está pasando aquí?
So Benicio asks what's going on, and then Amber gets mad at him for not being on stage. Now just talk about a great moment, and one that was just so long overdue. Simón's immediate panic over kissing her while he thinks that she's with Benicio is just so special to me. It almost reminds me of their first kiss when he immediately questioned if she regretted it. And it's also nice to hear from Amber herself as to what her relationship with Benicio even is, and then how she gets so defensive and brings Emma into the equation, when really it's obvious to like everybody watching that he does not like Emma. And then her going in for another kiss also reminds me of their first kiss when he tried to kiss her again. Like, it's just so perfect all around, and the parallels just don't stop paralleling. And then of course we knew that he was in love with her ever since episode 10 of this season, or even you could argue ever since the first episode, but it's still so nice to hear him finally say it to her, and the way he grabs her face is just so perfect. It's one of my favorite Simón mannerisms. But back to our Luna issue. Simón asks her again the next day if she's talked to her yet, and Amber says that she couldn't find her. Simón retorts that they live in the same house, and so he asks her again to stop making excuses, which I found to be quite funny and a pretty good argument from Mr. Simón. She argues that she's not making excuses and is just overwhelmed with work, and Simón retorts that he also doesn't like following her around all the time and asking her about it. But he's decided that he's given her the chance to tell her and she didn't, and so now he's going to. She then gets closer to him, asking him to give her the chance to tell her, and so he asks her when she's going to. And then of course the couple is interrupted by Benicio. He asks what's going on and if there is a problem here, and Simón tells him to ask his girlfriend. And now honestly this is just tiring at this point because we all know that Benicio and Amber are not actually together. Amber literally just admitted this to Simón, and so I don't understand why this causes such a high tension moment. And we've also seen this happen just so many times now with Benicio coming in and being like, what do you do with my girlfriend? That like I'm just so sick of it at this point. Anyways, none of this matters because Ramiro, who is another guy that I don't think I've talked about yet, but that's okay, it's not really that relevant, but he ends up going and telling Luna before Amber or Simón get the chance to. to. Obviously, Luna ends up getting upset with Simón for not telling her, and then in the following episode, we get this confrontation between Ámbar and Simón. So she finds him in the dressing room and asks that he not be so hard on her, but he tells her that she lied to him, that she said that she would talk to Luna and she never did. She defends herself by saying that she wanted to tell her, but she was too busy, but he asks her again to stop looking for excuses. She told him to trust her, that she would do it, but she failed him. And then he concludes that he's never going to trust her again. And at this point, I feel like this scene is very reminiscent to their breakup scene from the previous season, but with just incredibly lower stakes. Anyways, she asks how he could say something like that to her, and I'm like, I don't know, I feel like that would be pretty easy for him because it's not like he hasn't said it to her before, but he defends himself by saying that it's the truth, that this is the first time that he's ever lied to Luna and that he'll never forgive himself for it. She yells at him that she's sorry and asks him to understand that this isn't easy for her, asking him to put himself in her place for a second, but he argues that he already did, and for much longer than that. He then says that this is as far as they go, and she asks what he means by that, but he doesn't answer this question and decides to leave her alone instead.
Para mí no es fácil esto. Yo no sé, no tengo idea cómo se hace. Trata de ponerte un segundo en mi lugar.
Ya me puse mucho más de un segundo, Ámbar. Perdón. Hasta aquí llegamos, ¿ok? Y...
¿Cómo que qué estás queriendo decir con eso?
So I think that it's safe to say that the parallels from this scene and their previous breakup are just no coincidence, even down to Ámbar like throwing her head back in frustration afterwards. But I also think that I speak for everyone when I say that this scene is not nearly as good. I mean, it's just like I said when we went into this season, which is that you just can't beat the original. They can try to do the same tricks over again, but it's just not going to be the same. And again, it does also bug me how inconsiderate Simón is being to how busy Ámbar actually is. Like, yes, maybe part of that is an excuse, but I also do think it is legit. She literally just had all of this responsibility thrust onto her, and I feel like he's not being considerate about that whatsoever. Also, it's been a while since I talked about location, so let's talk about it here. This is the same spot as the argument that they had earlier on in the season, and again, I don't think that it is a coincidence that they both ended with Simón leaving her alone, or the fact that she's wearing a very similar outfit in both scenes. In the following episode, Ámbar also tries to talk to Luna to try to get her to not be upset with Simón, but she is just not having it. It's actually not until her mom talks to her that she's able to see that all Simón did was try to give Ámbar the chance to right her wrong. Now, before we get to Luna forgiving him, we do have another conversation between Simbar. The following morning, Ámbar tries to apologize again, but he doesn't even acknowledge her. He then goes on to grab a piece of toast before her hand can reach it. She says that she was going to take that piece, but then instead of flirting with her like they used to do, he just gives it to her instead. She asks how long they're going to continue on like this. He says that he would ask her to change, but it's not that she has to change, it's that she has to be herself. He then asks if she's tired of seeing the people that she loved distance themselves from her because of her actions, or if it's just that she doesn't want to change before he leaves.
Te diría que cambies, pero es que no es que tienes que cambiar. Es que tienes que ser tú, Ámbar. ¿No te cansas? Pero de verdad te lo pregunto, ¿eh? ¿No te cansas de ver cómo la gente que te quiere se aleja de ti por tus acciones? ¿No te dan ganas de cambiar algo, Ámbar? ¿No te dan ganas de ser tú? No sé.
So I think it's safe to say that I don't love this scene. I kind of see it as Simón just trying to rub salt in the wound when I don't think that that's really necessary when she has already apologized. And I feel like she has shown in her actions that she's trying to do better, and so I don't really understand what he wants from her. Again, it bugs me that he's unable to empathize with her situation whatsoever, but I feel like I also have to understand that from his perspective, he has been here before. And I feel like it is easier as the outsider to forgive her than as the person who was directly affected by her actions. But I will say that I do love the language that he uses here, and it's not that he wants her to change, but it's just that he wants her to be the best version of herself. On to the following episode where we see Ámbar break up a fight between Benicio and Simón, and there honestly isn't really much to talk about in regards to their fight, although I do like how Simón threatens to hurt him, and Benny replies by calling him a loser who has no band and no house, which is quite a funny comeback for me to think about him being like, yeah, well, you're homeless. But yeah, Ámbar comes over and tells Benicio that she's in charge and she doesn't want any fights happening on her rink. She also tells him that if he spent all of this time and energy on skating, then they'd all be better off. So Benicio leaves and Simón kind of lingers looking at Ámbar until he leaves as well. And I feel like this was an important exchange for Simón to pay witness to because I feel like it does a great job of showing where Ámbar is at right now. And I feel like this scene is kind of our stepping stone to the one that we get after it. So Luna and Simón do a duet in the roller and she asks asks him if he relates to the song, as it's basically about loving someone who you think maybe doesn't deserve that love. Simón then lies to her and says that he wasn't thinking about the lyrics. Meanwhile, Ámbar is actually watching this whole interaction, and then she texts Simón from across the roller. She asks him how many times she has to apologize, and he asks her not to push further. But she notes that he at least replied to her, which is progress, and then compliments the song that they just played. He thanks her for this and says that he likes that song a lot, and she says that she can tell because he sings it with a lot of emotion. He admits that he didn't know that she was listening to them, and she says that she could listen to him for hours. Simón then gets blushy at this comment, and then the two of them share a look from across the room.
Me gusta tu canción.
Gracias. Esta canción me gusta mucho.
Se nota. La cantás con mucho sentimiento.
No sabía que estabas escuchando.
Obvio que sí. Podría estar horas así.
So I absolutely love this moment. I think it is just so sweet. I love how Simón is supposed to be upset with her, but he just can't help but blush. And I also love how she brings up the fact that he sang the song with feeling, as that brings me right back to their voice lessons from the previous season where basically this all began. Also, this video got me to listen to the lyrics for Tu Carousel for the first time. Like, I never actually sat down and listened to what they were saying. And oh my god, I had no idea like how much it's like a perfect Simbar song. It's speaking directly to what he's going through, and I feel like that was just a perfect song choice. Good job, guys. Anyways, moving on to episode 45, where Ámbar and Benici-no finally break up, even though they were never really dating. And it's a pretty great moment as we get to see Ámbar put him in his place, and I always enjoy every time that that happens. But now it is time for Simón to find out about their breakup. So the two of them bump into each other in the lockers. He smiles at her, and then she celebrates this, asking if it means that he's forgiven her. He says not now, but then she retorts that that's not an answer. He then says that he doesn't want to fight with her today, and she agrees, going on to say that she already did enough of that with Benici-no. Simón then asks if she's having problems with her boyfriend, and she says yes, but that he's no longer her boyfriend. She then tells him that she broke up with him, asking if that's what he wanted as she steps closer to him. Simón starts to smile, and then she teases him for this, but he argues that he didn't want her to break up with him, he just didn't want her playing with the both of them. And she says that that won't happen now that she's ended things. He says that he's happy for her, and she's surprised that that's all he has to say, and then admits that he drives her crazy, that it bothered him when she had a boyfriend, and so she broke up with him, and now that doesn't seem to be good enough, and so she asks what she's supposed to do now. He says that she has to apologize sincerely, and then he'll forgive her, and that he's had to forgive her more than once, and so it's going to take a little bit of work for him to trust her again, which I honestly think is very valid of him, and I like that he's able to communicate this to her very clearly. He asks her to just be honest, to be herself without hurting anyone, and promises that when that happens, he'll be very happy.
Y cuando pase eso, voy a estar muy contento.
¿Cuándo pase eso?
¿Sí? Sí, cuando pase que tú actúes sin molestar a nadie, sin mentir, sin engañar. Ese día te prometo que voy a estar muy contento. ¿Algo más? Que estés bien.
Now, I hope you guys all know by now that I just have to comment on the location here. And I know I've said this many times, but like, just talk about a great full circle moment here. I mean, it's the same place where she started manipulating Simón for the first time way back in the beginning of season 2. It's the same place where Benici-no brought her back to the dark side. And now to have it as the place where Simón first starts to forgive her, like, I feel like it's just perfect. And I also love that she like had these expectations of Simón. Now that she's broken up with Benici-no, she was probably like, perfect, now I can be with Simón. And now he's kind of like challenging her on that here, which I really don't mind. I do kind of feel like she already has proven herself at this moment, but like, if he needs more time, then more power to him. But now that that is over, we can finally put Bemba to rest, and I am just so happy to hear those words. And this also brings us to our final chapter of this video, which like sounds fake to me. Like, I can't believe that we've actually made it here. But now that we've wrapped up Bemba, it's also time to wrap up their weaker counterpoint, which I guess is Emon. I'm not sure if that is their ship name. I'm not even sure if they have a ship name, because like, who cares about Emma and Simón? But yeah, it's time for that to come to a close. So Delphi and Pedro are preparing for a double date with Emma and Simón, and we also see Ámbar look over this very jealously. And I'm not really too sure as to why Simón agreed to go on this date, as I think we all know where his feelings lie at this point. But moving on to their outing, where Simón is very sad and and very quiet as to be expected. He then apologizes to Emma for having his head somewhere else. She asks where that is, and then he has flashbacks to his previous conversation with Amber. Later that night, Amber goes and finds Simón in their storage room. The guys have since moved out of their main house, and now Simón is back living in the storage room, which is quite funny and also perfect. So Amber finds him playing the same song from earlier and compliments it once again. She then asks what he's doing back already, as she thought that he had a date today. He says that he did, but then he decided to come back here as he felt a bit off. He then changes the subject back to the song that he was playing, which was Tu Carcel. He says that he loves it because it reminds him of Mexico. He then confides in her about how much he misses Mexico, and brings up the holiday Dia de los Muertos and how it's coming up soon. He explains that it's a beautiful festival about love and to remember those who are no longer with us. He then goes on about the holiday before asking if it's bothering her that he keeps talking about it, but she encourages him to keep going and says that she loves listening to him. He then admits that it's hard for him to see his friends back home posting photos about their celebrations because it makes him feel a little bit homesick, and then this gives Amber the idea as to how he can still be there.
¿Te molesta que siga hablando?
No, para nada, me encanta que me sigas hablando. Debe ser alucinante todo, contame.
Sí. Hasta me sentí como que estaba ahí ahorita que te estaba contando todo.
Ay.
Así. Sí. Bueno, y ahora se acerca esa fecha, ¿eh? Mis amigos están preparando todo y veo que suben fotos, pues con sus disfraces nuevos y todo esto, y obviamente siento, pues, cositas, ¿no?
Now, this is obviously a very adorable and wholesome moment. It makes me just so very happy to see the couple bonding like this. And I kind of see this as them building a new foundation for themselves, which I just love. I also just love how attentive and intrigued Amber is in everything that Simón is saying, though I do find it to be a little bit unrealistic that Amber supposedly has no idea what Dia de los Muertos is. Like, has the girl never seen Coco? I highly doubt it. But it does not take long for us to find out what Amber's idea is, as she announces the very next day that they are going to be hosting a Dia de los Muertos themed roller jam. And for those Simbar fans who are watching this and kind of dreading the events that happen at that roller jam, I'm right there with you, and I'm also dreading having to talk about it. Now, although we're seeing some great progress for the couple, that night we unfortunately have a bit of a setback. Basically, Simón walks in the living room while Amber is on the phone with her godmother. He asks her why she hung up so quickly, and then she makes an excuse that doesn't seem to fly with Simón. She's not surprised that he doesn't believe her, but he argues that he made her that way, that she showed him that she's the type of person who keeps secrets and that this is probably another one of them. She then argues that everybody has secrets, but he says that he doesn't, that he might not tell everybody everything, but he does tell his friends. So she asks if they're friends, and he says not if she keeps keeping secrets. She insists that she does trust him, but she can't tell him everything as it's not easy for her, and he understands that some things are hard to talk about, but if she wants him to trust her, then she's going to have to trust him. And while I honestly could take or leave this scene, I do understand why it is necessary. We're about to have a big moment in episode 50, and I feel like this scene is supposed to add some extra doubt into Simón's mind. And the show is also reminding us that Amber still has one more hurdle to get over before she can be truly free from her past. And that is her ties to Sharon, who is actively trying to destroy the Valentes. And so I feel like I should add that that phone call to Sharon was her practically telling her to stop and that enough is enough. That being said, the couple is back on good terms the following day as we see them both asking for favors from one another. For Simón, he asks along with the rest of his team if they can use the roller rink to prepare for an upcoming audition, and Amber of course says yes to this. And he is sure to thank her sincerely for this afterwards. And for Amber, she asks for his help with the decorations for the upcoming roller jam. And then also at the end of this episode, Simón says goodbye to Emma as she heads back to New York, I believe? I don't know, she heads back to wherever she came from. Moving on to episode 49, where Simón finds Amber making flowers in the living room. He tells her that everything is looking great and promises to help her because of how important this all is to him. Amber then takes this opportunity to ask him about Emma and if he misses her, and he chuckles in response, asking how he could miss her when she literally just left. And so Amber uses this opportunity to talk freely, saying that she didn't like Emma as she seemed like a lost dog who was always following him. This causes Simón to smile at her jealousy and admit that he wasn't expecting her to be that sincere. And then he finally says that she's changed a lot and she celebrates him noticing. He then thanks her for all that she's done recently and hopes that it hasn't caused any problems with her friends. She then confesses that Benicio and Emilia are no longer her friends. They then go back to making flowers together when her hand falls on his and they share a look.
Oye, espero que no tengas problemas con tus amigos.
No son más mis amigos.
Bueno, con tus compañeros de equipo.
Tampoco son más mi equipo.
¿Cómo? ¿Ya no estás...? No entiendo.
No. No, Emilia y Benicio no tienen nada que ver conmigo. ¿Me ayudas?
Sí.
So por fin, finally Simón has noticed all of this work that Amber has put into finally being herself. I love this interaction, and I love that Amber doesn't shy away from saying how she really felt about Emma, or about him finally noticing her changes. The unfortunate part about all of this is what's about to happen in the following episode, but I say let's just enjoy these good moments while we have them. Later on in this episode, we have a moment that might not seem that relevant, but I just personally couldn't help but bring it up. So basically, the roller team is working on decorations for the upcoming roller jam when Pedro ends up bringing up the rink being on fire last year. So obviously a bit of an awkward moment, as Amber is also present for this. And so she makes an excuse to leave and Simón goes after her. And I just personally love the fact and just the whole concept of like them all having to be careful to not bring up the fact that the rink burned down last year because one of their friends was the reason as to why it burned down. Anyways, Amber thanks Simón for helping with the decorations, and he tells her that she has nothing to thank him for, speaking again about how special this holiday is to him. He then goes on to tell her that he's never seen her like this before, commenting on how there's something special in her smile and that he thinks that she's prettier than ever and super transparent. He feels as though he's finally meeting the real Amber. She then admits that she's felt really good lately but still has some things to figure out, and he argues that everybody does, and if she needs any help that he'll be there for her.
Sí, yo me siento bien últimamente, la verdad.
¿Pero?
No, que obviamente todavía tengo cosas para resolver.
Sí, me imagino. Como todos, ¿no?
Sí.
Pero ¿sabes qué? Lo vas a poder solucionar. Y si necesitas ayuda, Ámbar, híjole, te lo juro que aquí estoy. O sea...
Muchas gracias.
So obviously Amber is referring to her connections with Sharon here, but then it's also just so nice to finally see Simón be so kind and sincere to her once again. So after this moment, she notices the costume that he has with him, and he shows it to her along with his mask. This being some foreshadowing to that not so great plot point that is coming up. So then this brings us to the roller jam. Simón finds Amber at the party and she compliments his look. He then says that she looks beautiful and comments on wanting to see her dance. She asks if that's an invitation, and he flirtatiously says maybe, and she does not shy away from this, saying that she wants a chance to dance with the cutest boy at the party. Simón then notes that the party's just started and that anything can happen. He then kisses her hand before leaving.
Perdón, ¿vos estás queriendo decir que me vas a sacar a bailar?
Puede ser, puede ser.
No, ¿cómo puede ser, Simón? Disculpame, pero soy una persona muy ansiosa y quiero saber si voy a tener chances o no de bailar con el chico más lindo de toda la fiesta.
Pues mira, la fiesta apenas empieza. Y es muy larga, así que todo puede pasar, ¿o no?
So I'm not too sure if I can play the clip from that scene or not because Nadie Como Tu is playing very loudly in the background. But oh my god, that is the first Simbar hand kiss of the season, which is just so exciting. And then I feel like I should also mention that we do have some glimpses of what's to come with Benici-no lurking around in the background of the scene. And I know that this is supposed to be a serious moment, and trust me, I will be treating it as such, but like seeing him just like lurk around back there is just the most hilarious thing to me. So once again, I do have to give a trigger warning for non-consensual kissing, and it's also kind of insane that this is the third one that I've given in this video about a show that's for literal children. But as always, I will have a timestamp on screen to where you can skip to, and I do have to admit that I am a little bit jealous of those of you who are just going to skip right over this plotline altogether, as I honestly wish that I could as well. So as you could maybe tell from that previous scene, Benicio was wearing the same mask and also same outfit as Simón. So while dressed as him, he goes up to Amber and she is fooled into thinking that he is Simón. And then he pulls her closer and they kiss. Meanwhile, across the dance floor, Delphi draws Simón's attention to this, and then Amber pulls back quickly, now aware that he wasn't Simón based off of their kiss. Benicio then takes his mask off, commenting on how much she missed him, which just makes my skin crawl. So she skates off, but he finds her later. He comes up behind her, laughing like an insane person, and then she turns around upset with him. She asks if he thinks what he did was funny, and then yells at him that they're over. And I hate even having to summarize what Benicio says because it's literally disgusting, but he says that what she says is one thing and what she does is another, commenting on how that kiss wasn't one shared between friends. And I'm like, yeah, he's right, it wasn't between friends, it was between an assaulter and a victim. Not that hard of a concept to understand. So she yells that she didn't kiss him, or she did, but she only did so because she thought that he was someone else. Like, honestly, how could he be so dense to not understand that what he did was wrong? But to instead laugh at the situation and mock her, like, he is actually insane. And I know that I've been complaining about this guy for the entirety of this video, but this is the main reason as to why. Like, this guy is seriously messed up. But he tells her to stop lying and says that she knew that it was him, and says that she just doesn't want to accept that she still has feelings for him. And again, I'm just like, how backwards does this guy's brain have to be for him to actually think that that's the case? Like, he literally had to dress up as somebody else, but then now he's just like, no, you knew it was me. Like, what do you mean? His argument is just so incredibly flawed, because if she still had feelings for him, then he wouldn't have needed to dress up as Simón to begin with. Maybe that's just the point and he's trying to gaslight her here, but I will say that he is not doing a good job at it. So Amber basically agrees with me and says that he is messed up in the head and that she is never going to forgive him for this. She then threatens him, saying that he should know not to mess with her, which I just love. Like, even when she's just been assaulted and taken advantage of, she is still standing her ground, and she is like just such a strong woman and a great role model. Like, it's actually envious to me. But get ready for another skin-crawling comment from Benici-no, as he says that he just loves it when she plays rough with him. Disgusting. And then says again that he knows that she still has feelings for him. She retorts that what she feels for him is pity and that they broke up and then that's it. She then asks him to understand that she's not interested in him. So he asks if she's interested in that loser Simón, and she yells at him not to call him that. But he argues that that's what he is, and he tells her that he has nothing to do with her. That her and Simón are from two different worlds, whereas the two of them have a lot more in common, which again, barf. But then Amber gets the last word in as she says that he's wrong, that they are nothing alike, and asks that he please leave her alone, that she never wants to see him again, and asks that he forget about her forever. And something else that I feel like I should note of here is that Delphi does film this interaction. But now it is time for things to get even worse, as Amber finds out that Simón witnessed her assault. So she finds him leaving and tells him not to go anywhere, but Simón says that for him the party is already over. She then desperately tries to fix things by saying that it can't be over as they haven't danced yet, but he says that they're not going to. He then takes off his mask, showing his watery eyes. He asks if he should talk to Benici-no, as it looked to him like things had been fixed between the two of them, and at this point all Amber can do is shake her head and say no. He then raises his voice, arguing that they kissed in the middle of the rink, that he saw them and that everybody else saw them as well. And now I know that Simón is hurt in this moment, but I just can't help but think about how this comment just made everything even worse for Amber. She was already just assaulted only moments ago, and now to find out that everybody saw it, like, I feel like that's just gotta be heart-wrenching. So she admits that it happened, which I personally feel like she doesn't have to. Like I mentioned during their last non-consensual kiss, it was just that, non-consensual. Therefore, she didn't kiss him. It's that simple. But he retorts that the confused one is him because he trusted her again. She then says that he's imagining something in his head, which she completely understands, because if she were in his place, she would be doing the same thing, but then tries once again to explain. He then cuts her off, saying that he doesn't want her to explain anything, which is just so incredibly frustrating. Like, the miscommunication trope has got to be the worst trope of all time. I hate when somebody stops some person from literally explaining what happened. Anyways, he then tells her to stop crying because she's the one in the wrong, that his friends told him not to trust her, and like an idiot, he went and trusted her anyways. He then tells her to enjoy her little party before leaving. As he leaves, she begs him to wait, and her voice cracks as she asks once again to explain before being left alone.
Pero realmente déjame que te explique cómo fueron las cosas. No, pero te quiero explicar porque no fue así.
No quiero que expliques nada, ámbar, y deja de llorar porque tú hiciste las cosas mal, ¿ok? Mis amigos me dijeron que no podía confiar en ti y yo de tonto fui y confié en ti, ámbar, ¿ok? Disfruta tu fiestecita.
Simón, espera, te quiero explicar de verdad.
Alright, so this is a lot, but I feel like, first of all, we just have to remember that Simón has been hurt by Amber numerous times in the past. And so for him, at this point, it's a lot easier for him to think, like, I'm an idiot and just get upset. And like I said earlier, these characters and just like this whole universe are kind of idiots when it comes to sexual assaults. And just for some reason, their itty-bitty brains can't wrap their heads around that concept. I'm not trying to excuse any of his behaviors here. Honestly, I think this explanation is more so me trying to prove to myself why it's okay to still love him after all of this. And obviously I'm not saying that he took the right path and that Amber deserved to be blamed in this moment. And I do wish that he could have taken the chance to listen to her here, because I do not feel like she deserved to be treated like that. But I also feel like I have to remember too that Amber has chosen the wrong path on numerous occasions throughout the show, and also manipulated Simón specifically on numerous occasions throughout the show. Probably more times than he's aware himself. The capo situation is the first one that comes to mind for me. And although it's easy for us to see that she's changed, like I said earlier, we weren't the ones that were directly affected by her. So that is my 2 cents on that whole mess. Honestly, I wish none of it even happened. I understand that we're only on episode 50 and that they didn't want to have the couple get back together until episode 55, and so they needed to add one last conflict in there to push this couple to not get back together until then. But I honestly wish that that wasn't the case. Like, what would have been so wrong with giving us them happily together for 10 episodes? Would that have been so hard? I don't think so, but yeah. But at the end of the day, I am just so grateful that all of this is resolved in the following episode, because if this conflict went on for even longer than this, I think they would have like lost me. But first, we unfortunately have this one more frustrating conversation between the two of them. So Amber tries to talk to Simón the next day so that she can explain, but he argues that she doesn't have to because he saw it all with his own eyes. He goes to leave, but she holds him back, saying that Benicio tricked her, that he couldn't stand that the two of them were together, and so he put on the same costume as him and tricked her. But I don't actually think that Simón is listening to any of this, because he just goes on to say that she's free to do whatever she wants and that she doesn't have to explain anything to him. She then, very frustrated with him, yells at him, saying that she didn't want to kiss Benicio, she wanted to kiss him. Unfortunately though, this conversation is then cut short as the two of them are interrupted. Now, I think the most frustrating part about this situation is that Benicio is the villain, Amber is the victim, and Simón is just mixed in there thinking that he is the victim when in reality he's not. Like I said, he has been in the past, and so I understand why he feels that way, but this time he's not, and I already justified his actions last time, and so this time I'm not going to. Now I'm just mad and frustrated by the fact that he won't even take the time to listen to her. And especially when he knows Benicio, like he's been saying this ever since Benicio got there, that he knows that guy and that he knows that he's bad news and that he doesn't trust him. And so if he actually took the time to listen to Amber, it wouldn't take him long to realize that she's telling the truth. Anyways, the next morning at breakfast, Simón's friends ask if he's okay, and he says that he just doesn't understand how Amber could get back together with Benicio. Maybe that's because she didn't, and if he took the time to actually talk to her about it, he would realize that that's not what happened. But Mateo says that he should do the same thing that he's done with Luna, saying that the signs are very clear, and I'm just like, talk about the blind leading the blind. Both of these men are so incompetent, and it is just so frustrating to watch. Anyways, Amber then interrupts and goes to ask Simón something, but then she settles on asking him to pass her a piece of toast, which he does before leaving. And I feel like I should mention that that is our last toast moment. I know, end of an era, truly. But now it is finally time for Simón to find out the truth. So while Delphi is showing Simón and Pedro the video she took of the roller jam, Simón notices that Amber is quite upset with Benicio in the background. Delphi then says that that's an understatement, as she was practically shooting daggers at him. Simón is then shocked that what Amber said is true, that Benicio dressed up as him to trick her. His friends both thought that it was coincidence, but then agree that it does make sense. And then Simón finally concludes that that kiss was meant for him. Hard to believe, I know. And it's also just so annoying that he needed a video to prove that to him, and he couldn't just take the time to listen to her, especially when he's seen firsthand the way that she's acted towards Benicio lately. Like, I'm sure she would have said all of this in front of him as well. But now it is time for Simón to beg for forgiveness. So we later see him greet Amber, and she doesn't reply to him. He then says that he wants to apologize, that he saw Delphi's video and has realized that she was telling the truth. She then retorts that he had to watch a video to know that she was being honest and that her word wasn't good enough, and he explains that that's why he's apologizing. And then goes back to before the roller jam, when she says that there was something that she couldn't tell him. He says that that confused him and made him think that maybe she had gotten back together with Benicio, which is kind of an odd conclusion to jump to, but he says that that's where his mind went nonetheless. And then she says that he doesn't have to apologize, which I obviously don't agree with, and I'm very happy that we do see him apologizing. But she says that she understands that it's not easy to trust her, and that she has to do something that she doesn't know how to do because she doesn't know how to do the right thing. He then asks her to explain what she's talking about, but Ramiro interrupts. And now honestly, if we weren't on crunch time, I don't think I would have wanted Amber to be so accepting of his apology here, because I do feel like he was incredibly unfair to her and that she does deserve more than that. But what I do like is how Simón does own up to his actions, and he really doesn't beat around the bush when talking about how he messed up. And I think Amber is also aware of how she's messed up as well. And so if she were not to forgive him here, maybe that would have been a little bit hypocritical on her part. But either way, I am just so incredibly happy that this plotline is over and done with, because I was getting way too heated about this situation. But anyways, Ramiro interrupts them because one of their team members isn't going to be able to make their audition that they have coming up. Amber then offers to fill in for her, and so then this brings us to her cramming in rehearsals before their audition. Amelia and Benicio see this and interrupt her. They start bullying her, and she does hold her own, but Simón also comes to her defense. He says that if they mess with her, then they mess with him as well. And then him and Benicio kind of get into it, and they have to be separated by the girls. Once the ex-Red Sharks leave, Simón asks if she's okay, and Amber explains that they must have figured out that she's auditioning with them, which causes Simón to conclude that they must not be very happy about that. But Amber says that that's their problem and all she wants is to train. Simón offers to help her with this, but she says that she needs to do this on on her own. He then tells her that he knows that she can and that he has faith in her. He then stops her from skating off to plant a kiss on her cheek first. Moving on to their audition, Simón tells her to relax and that she's going to do great before he kisses her hand that he's holding. Afterwards, everyone thanks Amber for helping and welcomes her back to the team. They then ask to celebrate with her, but she explains that she has some things to do at home. And then getting to said things, we then see her at home revealing to the Valentes that Ray, who was their head of staff, was also working for Sharon. Luna later tells Simón about this and he is happy to hear that she did the right thing, and he later confirms that this was the thing that Amber was needing to do. And then this brings us to a pretty well-known Simbar episode, as everything from here on out is practically perfect in every way. So in episode 55, Simón finds Amber on their bench in the lockers. He asks how she is and she says good, but then he tells her that she doesn't have to pretend with him, that she can tell him how she really feels and that he understands that she's going through a hard time. He then says that he wanted her to know that she did the right thing, that she was super brave and that he's not sure another person would have been able to do what she did. He then congratulates her and says that he's very proud of her as he moves closer. She thanks him for saying that and then expresses how hard it was for her, because although Sharon has done some terrible things, she does still love her, and she thought that she could help her change, but she just wouldn't listen to her. And this is the line that really gets me, as she says that although she feels as though she did the right thing, she still feels as though she lost her and that she's alone. Of course, Simón then says that she's not alone as he grabs his hand and says that he's here. They then lean in a bit before they're interrupted by Amelia and Benicio.
Por más de que haya hecho las cosas bien, ahora siento que la perdí y que estoy sola.
No. No digas que estás sola porque no estás sola. Aquí estoy yo. Y...
Oh. So guess what I'm gonna comment on? That's right, the location. I am honestly like a realtor at this point. But honestly, how could I not compare this scene to their almost kiss in episode 51? With the talk about Amber feeling alone and Simón saying that he'll be there for her, and then we have them almost kissing again before getting interrupted. And I also just love that these parallels exist because these have got to be two of my absolute favorite Simbar scenes. Anyways, the villains leave and Simón tells Amber that he loves when she smiles. She thanks him and says that she likes feeling more relaxed as well. And then Simón goes forward and asking her out on a date. He tells her to get her skates and that they'll go for a spin, and then they'll go grab some ice cream, saying that they can get chocolate because it's her favorite. And of course, she says yes to all of this.
Y vamos a dar una vuelta tú y yo, ¿qué te parece? Vamos a comer un helado riquísimo,
Ay, sí,
de
por
chocolate, ya sé que más te gusta.
Sí, amargo, sí.
Y hagamos 2 coreografías sin presión de nadie, solamente tú y yo, solos, para ver si hay un placer. ¿Aceptas?
Acepto.
So just, oh my god, talk about one of the most precious Simbar moments of all time. Like, I just feel so giddy at the fact that we've actually made it to this point. It is just so adorable to see them talk about their first date plans, and then of course to see just how happy all of this makes Amber. We then see the two of them on the rink doing a routine together, and then at the end of this routine they almost kiss, but I guess we'll save that for the next episode. And I just have to say that it is just so adorable to see them happily doing something together that they love, and I'm just like, it's about time, honestly. So that night, Amber comes downstairs and bumps into Simón. He stutters over how beautiful she looks and then asks if she's seen the flowers behind her. He then goes over to them and takes a white rose from the vase before asking her if she thinks that they're pretty. She says that they're very pretty, and so he tells her not to look at them too much or else they'll be jealous of her. She laughs at this, saying that the flowers are much more beautiful than she is, but he argues that she's just so beautiful that he doesn't even believe it himself. That he sees something in her eyes that is just so beautiful, it's like this particular light that just drives him crazy. She thanks him and then confesses that nobody's ever said something like that to her before. She says that it's as if he sees something in her that she doesn't even see herself. He then grabs her hands as he says that he's sure that this is the moment, and then she finishes his sentence asking if they can finally be together. Unfortunately though, they then end up getting interrupted by Mónica.
Es como que vos ves algo en mí que ni siquiera yo veo.
Y es hermoso. Ámbar, estoy seguro que este es el momento en el que tú y yo...
Juntos.
Chicos, ¿qué hacen todavía despiertos?
Now, oh my god, do I ever love this moment. I love seeing Simón just be so candid and obsessed over how beautiful she is, and I don't think that it is a surface level beauty that he's talking about here. He now feels as though she's let her true self show, and I think that it's that beauty that he's speaking about here. And then also his use of the word light just brings me right back to their first date when he told her that she always had that light in her. And then of course when she told him last year that he enlightened her way. I mean, light is definitely a Simbar word along with toast and now roses. And then I also feel like it's important to note here the fact that she's in all white. Obviously she's been dressed in all dark clothing this season to showcase her dark side, and then now seeing her in all white here I feel like symbolizes that character development and change for her character, and I almost see it as like her rebirth, if that's not too dramatic to say. So Simón tells Monica that the flowers that she put out are beautiful. He then looks to Ámbar as he says that they're the most beautiful that he's ever seen. Ámbar then says that she's going to bed and he calls after her. He then wishes her a good night and kisses her hand before giving her the rose that he was holding. Ámbar is then giddy as she walks up the stairs, and I just love that Monica watches this entire exchange and isn't concerned at all about her parenting decisions. Like, she hasn't just let one, but both of her kids' boyfriends live in the home, which I just think is funny. But enough talk, as it's time for the moment that I would argue we've all been waiting for. So Simón knocks on Amber's door and she comes out confused. She then notices a rose on the ground as well as a path of petals. She then excitedly follows the path downstairs to where Simón is waiting for her with another rose. She then takes it from him and he holds her face in his hands as they share a kiss. Now, I'm not exactly too sure if I'll be able to include a scene from that or not, just due to the copywritten music playing throughout it. But speaking of the music, I feel like we should talk about the song that's playing during that. So we have a beautiful orchestra arrangement of Amber's song Claroscuro playing during this scene. And it's kind of like her heavy metal bad girl song, but I feel like when you slow it down and actually listen to the lyrics, you just realize how sad it is, as the song is basically just Amber talking about the darkness that she feels consumed by. And so I feel like to take that song and use that as the background music for this scene is just such a great power move. And then of course this moment was like just pure perfection. I think it was necessary to see Simón give her that grand gesture that she deserves, especially after all of the work that she's put into herself and their last misunderstanding with Mr. Benici-no. So Amber thanks him for doing all of this for her and for helping her change. Simón says that he knew that she could, as she's the strongest person in the world, and she agrees that she's always been strong, but says that she's used it before as a defense mechanism. That she was actually just afraid on the inside, and so she pretended to be that perfect girl that could do everything on her own. He then kisses her on the forehead and tells her that she did it, that she changed, and that he is so proud of her. She sighs before admitting that when she was pretending to be bad, she always knew exactly what to say. But now it's like she's lost for words, and Simón agrees that he feels the same way. She then stresses that she wants to do everything the right way moving forward, when it comes to herself and when it comes to their relationship. He agrees that he wants that too, but asks her to just enjoy this, to live life to the fullest, to understand each other, and to tell each other everything. She agrees with him, and then he expresses that she is the most beautiful gift that the world has ever given to him. She laughs at this, and then he tells her not to laugh, but then he tells her to laugh because he wants them to laugh together forever. She says that she always does when she's with him, and her plan is to keep doing that, as well as travel with him and get to see new places together, and he agrees that that's his plan as well, before inviting her into a hug.
Y mi plan es que sigamos riéndonos juntos mucho tiempo más, que viajemos, que conozcamos lugares, pasemos, te quiero conocer más.
Yo también. Yo también. Esos también son mis planes. Esos. Quiero...
Yo quiero lo mismo.
Me encanta.
Now just talk about a scene that I feel like wraps up their story so beautifully. I love hearing them talk about their future together and what they dream about doing with one another. Amber bringing up traveling just reminds me of her plans to study in Paris, and I just have no doubt that that is one of the top vacation spots on their list. Now I'm sure I sound like a broken record at this point, but I just have to admit that I feel like the change talk from the beginning of this scene might be the worst of them all. I don't know what it is, but it just gives me a little bit of cringe, and I think it's actually this scene that made me hate the use of that word in Simbar's arc in general. I feel like it gives the connotation that she had to change who she was to be able to be with Simón, when in reality I think it's more so that she just needed to be more comfortable enough to let her true self show. And I wish that they could have used that wording instead here, but it is what it is. So although this scene does wrap up their story pretty well, we still have a few more moments between the couple as we wrap up the series. So the following day, Amber comes into the roller in a non-goth look and a white rose in her hair. And I just have to say, this attire that we see Amber in these last few episodes, I feel like just suits her so well. I kind of see it as like a take on her goth look, but with a new light to it, which I just feel like is the perfect mix. Anyways, everybody notes that she looks good and a lot happier, and she says that she is. And Simón then comments on the flower, calling it beautiful. She says that it was a gift and says that it's the most beautiful gift of all. Their friends then talk about the casting while they hold hands in secret. And I just have to say that little gift comment just brings me right back to season 1 when he performed at her birthday and she says that it would be the best gift of all. Like, that just can't be a coincidence. But of course, we couldn't wrap up this season without one last-ditch effort from Benicio and Amelia. So in episode 57, Benny tells Amber that she's going to regret what she did, referring to her helping and joining the roller team. She asks if he's threatening her, and then Simón interrupts. Benicio then asks if Amber can't defend herself, and then Simón says that he's going to make this quick. That if he messes with his girl, then he messes with him. And so then Benicio threatens him, basically telling him to enjoy it while it lasts. Simón then takes a step closer to Benicio, and then Amber has to hold him back. This also results in a little bit of a pick-me moment, as Amber briefly tells him to look at her to calm himself down, but I feel like I can excuse it because it's Simbar. The scene then ends with Simón telling Amber to let him know if Benicio ever gives her a hard time again, which, like, I do enjoy. Like, I love a protective boyfriend moment. They later talk about not knowing what Benicio and Amelia are up to, but agreeing that it's no good. Amber then comments on how incredible it is that he can't stand to see her happy. Simón says that he'll have to get used to it, and she agrees, snuggling up closer to him. Luna and Mateo then enter, happy as clams as well. This causes Simón to know that they're not the only happy ones, and Mateo shares the news with them that he got a record deal. They both congratulate him before taking a photo together, and this is just like such an incredibly special moment for the fans, because we have waited so incredibly long for the core 4 to just be happy and in love, and we finally made it. Like, it might have only been about 4 hours for you guys if you've never watched the show before, but for those of us that have, it was way longer than that. Later on, we see Amber working at the roller when Simón delivers her a drink. He says it's for the most beautiful girl there, and she says that she didn't order anything. He says that it's easier this way, and then goes on to make fun of her orders and how often she changes them, which is kind of funny because she didn't really do that at all in this season, but I like the reference nonetheless. So Amber admits that he knows her so well, and then he kisses her hand sweetly. She then stresses about how much work she has to do, and he offers to help, but then says that he has tables to attend and would hate for his boss to get upset with him. She argues that it's impossible to get upset with him, and then goes to leave, and he holds her back, saying that if she sees his boss, to let her know that she's beautiful.
Sí, y entonces, si no los atiendo, no quiero que mi patrona se vaya a enojar conmigo, ¿entiendes?
No creo que pase eso, ¿eh?
¿No?
Me parece que es imposible que se enoje con vos.
¿En serio?
Sí. Bueno, chao. Voy a dejar de hacer todo esto porque me va a explotar el cerebro.
Ok, disfruta el jugo.
Lo disfruto.
Oye,
Gracias.
Oye, otra cosa.
Dime.
Y si ves a mi patrona, dile que eso.
¿Qué?
Que está preciosa.
Such a cute scene. I just love a playful banter moment. But I feel like the main purpose of this scene was to remind us that Amber is doing a lot of work for the roller, and that the two ex-Red Sharks are still plotting against her. So then we get to see what Benicio was plotting at earlier as he goes forward in stealing Amber's binder. The couple actually ends up catching them in the act, but unfortunately it's already over by the time that they get there. Simón asks what they're doing there so early, but Benicio just retorts that they can be there whenever they want. Then Simón tells him to tone down the volume a bit with his girlfriend. Benny then comments on her little boyfriend coming to her rescue before Amber shuts them down again. After they leave, Simón decides to state the obvious as he announces two things. The first being that they're up to something, and the second being that he loves her as he kisses her on the cheek.
Dos cosas. Ellos están tramando algo.
Sí, eso
Y la
ya sé.
segunda, que es más importante, es que me encanta.
So first of all, I just have to say that Benny bringing up that they can be there whenever they want, I feel like is interesting, because if Amber's in charge, isn't she the one that's able to ban him from the roller? Just like Juliana did in the previous season. And so I feel like him saying that was a little bit tone deaf and also just like a stupid comment to make to the manager and the one that like has all of the authority here. And honestly, I feel like they've done enough by now to warrant a ban. But honestly, I feel like none of that even matters because it was Simón kissing Amber on the cheek at the end that really stole the show for me. So Amelia and Benny then tip off Vidya that Amber might not be a good fit for manager. And this results in one of the higher-ups coming up to meet with Amber. He informs her that he's received intel that she's not responsible with the accounts, and Luna and Simón come to her defense. He then asks her to show him the paperwork, and then that is when she discovers that it's gone. She assures him that something must be going on and that she's going to get to the bottom of it, but he argues that if she lost them, then she's not fit for the job and he ends up firing her. Afterwards, her newfound friends comfort her and agree that they're going to get to the bottom of this, and Amber and Simón conclude that it must have been Amelia and Benicio after what they saw that morning. Her friends then try to come up with a solution and she thanks them for their help, and afterwards Simón says that he doesn't like seeing her sad, that she deserves the best and calls her bonita. And she replies that she already has it because she has him, which is just so adorable. Moving on, we have another fairly iconic moment in this episode. At dinner that night, their grandfather asks both Simón and Mateo what their intentions are with his granddaughters. He then jokes that he assumed that they came over to ask for their hands in marriage. Everyone is stunned speechless, unaware that he's joking, and Mateo stutters in reply. Simón stutters for a bit as well before Alfredo laughs, saying that he got them. Now, I find this scene to be particularly funny because they live there. Not sure if I've mentioned that yet, but still a great moment nonetheless. In other news, the Jam and Roller team was not chosen for the thing that they auditioned for, but they were asked to open for a local festival. So in the next episode, we see them rehearsing for that, and afterwards, Ámbar finds Simón in the lockers and he comments on having an onlooker. She apologizes but admits that she couldn't help but look at how beautiful he is, which is nice to see her give him this compliment because he's been so vocal in complimenting her lately. She then goes on to show him the binder that she found, and she explains that it magically returned right where she left it. Simón is confused as to why they took it just to put it back, and I'm a little bit confused by that as well. And Ámbar agrees with this before saying that she just wants to talk to Vidya and put all of this behind them. Simón then goes on about how they should apologize to her, and so she says that she'll let them know that, and so he says that if they don't, then he'll have to talk to them, because he has to look after his girlfriend. And this causes her to comment on how nice that sounds. Simón then says that he always knew that they would get to this point, that he didn't know when or how long it would take, but he knew that he had to wait for her. She says that there's now 1,000 more years that they're going to get to spend together, but he argues that that's not enough. That that's not enough time for him to show her how much he loves her, how happy she makes him, and how much he wants to be with her. She then says that it makes her happy to see him this happy, and he says that he's happy because he's with her. He then brings up Mateo, who's recording a song with them for his album, and says that that's what happens when he's with her, that good things happen. And her being on the team now too, it's like everything is perfect. She agrees with this, but then he admits that there's still something missing. He then lines her up against the lockers and jokes about not telling her what it is before he kisses her, insinuating that that was the thing that was missing.
Y aparte, el nuevo proyecto con el Jam and Roller y que tú patines con nosotros, es como que todo es perfecto.
Todo es perfecto.
Todo, sí.
Todo.
Pero falta algo para que sea completamente perfecto.
¿Qué cosa falta para que sea completamente perfecto?
Pues yo creo que... No te dije.
No.
Now, just such a great moment and such a great scene. I just love a happy Simbar, and I feel like every single one of these wholesome moments are just so well deserved. Now, as far as that misplaced binder situation, I definitely think that that plotline was quite rushed, but at the same time, I get it. Like, we're nearing the end of the season, and so I'm not complaining. And then also, like I mentioned earlier, this season could have originally meant to go for those standard 80 episodes and then was cut back down to 60. That's what I've heard online, at least. And so this could have been a result of that, or they did know from the beginning that they were only gonna have 60 episodes and this plotline was just rushed point blank. Either way, I'm kind of happy that we only got 60 episodes in this season, just out of the fear that they could have tarnished Simbar even more than they already did by giving them that extra 20 episodes. But one more thing before we go on to the finale. Part of me wishes that they could have kept that plotline open with Ámbar being fired from the roller, which I know sounds bad, but I just personally feel like Ámbar is such an ambitious character and is a lot more capable than just managing a roller rink. Not that there's anything wrong with that job, and she's clearly killing it, but I personally would have preferred them having her shoot for her dreams of studying in Paris instead and Simón going along with her. But now it is finally time for our series finale. So we begin with a time jump to a month later. First we see Simón meeting Ámbar in the park, who had just visited her godmother in the hospital, as she previously set fire to the mansion while she was still inside. I mean, this family is just never beating those arsonist allegations. But anyways, it's a sweet moment where Simón hugs her from behind and kisses her on the cheek. He then sits beside her and she hugs him and then leans her head on his shoulder before they share a kiss. After they pull back, he also kisses the bridge of her nose. It's a very quick scene, there's no dialogue, but I kind of love that their actions are speaking for themselves here. And I also think that their wardrobe and location is also something else to note here. They're both wearing red, I think to symbolize them being united, but it also brings me right back to a scene from the previous season where Ámbar was also wearing red and she was about to tell Simón about what was going on with Sharon. They were sitting on the same bench, and so I feel like them visiting this bench again is just perfect. And and just something that this show is just so incredibly good at. Then later, while reminiscing on all that they've learned during their time at the Jam and Roller, Simón says that he's learned to always look ahead while he grabs Amber's hand. They also share a chair during Juliana's pep talk before their festival, and Amber looks to him when Juliana mentions love. Moving on to their performance, they share a hand-holding moment, do the fiery serpent together, and also hug afterwards. Now, the fiery serpent is a move from the first season, and I bring it up because it was very heavily noted that to be able to do that move, you have to be very connected with your partner. So I feel like seeing them do that move together was a very nice touch. And now on to our final scene, and it honestly makes me emotional to think that we've even made it to this point. But it is now Luna's birthday, and while at her party, Amber asks Simón if he ever thought that they would end up together. He says no, and she's hurt at first, but then he clarifies that he didn't just think about it once, he thought about it 10 times or more like 100. He then goes to say more, but Pedro interrupts, and so he kisses her on the cheek before leaving.
Hace un año, ponele. ¿Vos te imaginaste que nosotros dos íbamos a terminar así?
No,
Ay.
no me lo imaginé una vez, me lo imaginé 10 veces. O no, no 10, la verdad como 100. ¿Sabes qué? Ámbar, te prometo que un millón...
Perdón, Simón, nos olvidó unos micrófonos.
Ok, los dejé adentro en una mochila negra.
Bueno, ¿me acompañás? Te robo un minuto. Sí.
Bueno, está bien. Chao.
Ahí te...
And so I know that it's short, but I just had to include that moment because that is everything. That is our final Simbar scene, and part of me really doesn't feel like it's real that we've actually made it here. And while it is a very sweet moment, I do have a question about it. She says a year ago, and so I assume she means season 2 because every time that they've referenced last year, it's been about the rink and whatever. So I feel like we can confirm that a year ago means season 2. But there's also the fact that this is the finale, and we've been doing a lot of flashbacks to the first season in this episode. And so I think it would have been cool if she was referencing here way back when. Way back in the first season when they barely knew each other, did he ever think that they would end up here? And if the answer is yes, that would just mean everything to me and confirm everything that I speculated way back when we talked about season 1. I honestly just love an "it's always been you" kind of trope, and I feel like it would have been even cooler if that was the case with Simbar. But with that, we wrap up our Simbar love story, and I just wanted to say a huge thank you if you stuck around for the entirety of this video, because I know that it's going to be about 4 hours long, but I personally just found it to be so worth it and just so incredibly fulfilling. Making this video has truly given me a new appreciation for this ship, if that was even possible, because I did just love them so much already going into it. But I also feel like it made me question a lot of things that I never really questioned before. Like, for example, I was well aware that Amber made many mistakes, but I didn't realize how unlikable Simón could be as well at numerous points throughout their relationship. I feel like there were numerous times throughout this video where I was trying to explain his actions, which really didn't coincide with my previous perception of him as a character who was just perfect and could do no wrong. But if anything, this just proves to me that nobody is perfect and everybody makes mistakes. I also think that before this video, when I would think about Simbar, I would think about their relationship in the 3rd season. Whereas I personally think that they were at their best and they're my favorite during that 2nd season. I mean, like I've said, it's hard to beat that initial love story, but I also just love how complex their relationship was in season 2. And then I also feel like I have a new appreciation for them in the 1st season. I know that we didn't get that much of them, but I do feel like those little moments do stand out. So yeah, that is all I have to say for today. Please let me know all of your thoughts on Simbar down below, because I will be reading every single one of those comments. You can also, as always, let me know what ship you'd like to see me cover next. Preferably not a novella one, because this video took a million years and I need way more time to recover, but I feel like even by saying that, people are still going to be requesting Luteo left, right, and center, and so I understand that. And also, you guys know they're my favorite ship of all time. Of course I'm going to cover them, probably sometime next year though, because this video was a lot for me. But yeah, that's all from me. I love you guys so much, and I'll talk to you very, very soon. Oh my god, also for the 5 people that are left, I just had to show you guys that I'm wearing my Carol merch that just came in. You can see the little mariposa. I also got the tumbler here. Ah, so cute. Obviously not sponsored, Carol doesn't know who I am. But it's also got her on the back. Oh, you can't see, look. Isn't that so cute? I am obsessed. All right, bye guys.